Chapter 9:36. As the atmosphere at home gradually became lively, Jiang Hai and Qi Li returned to their original state again. They chatted together, watched TV, and so on. However, Jiang Hai, Qi Jie, and Qi were somewhat awkward. Yes, it would be strange if they weren't awkward. Jiang Hai could only laugh at this. Nothing happened for the day. In the evening, the whole family watched TV together and made dumplings with Zheng Xiaoyi. They stayed until the end of the year. Although the recent New Year's Gala was getting more and more boring, the New Year's Gala was more like a ceremony. If they were alone, it didn't matter, but if the whole family was together, then they really had to go and watch the New Year's Gala. The programs on TV weren't good, but they were chatting and laughing. It was also quite good. After working until midnight, they went outside to set off a string of firecrackers. Because Jiang Hai's mourning period had passed 3 years this year, and Qi Li's mourning period had also passed 3 years, there was no need to ban the New Year's couplets and firecrackers. Jiang Hai himself wasn't particularly interested in setting off firecrackers. He just wanted to join the fun. With the sound of the firecrackers, it indicated that the past year had come to an end, and a new year had arrived. In the evening, Jiang Hai naturally went back to the room with Qi Li to sleep. Because it was a little late tonight, there was no extra activity. After washing up, Jiang Hai hugged Qi Li and went to sleep. The next morning, it was the first day of the new year. Qi Li's family didn't have the habit of New Year's greeting, so it was as usual. It was just a very plain day, watching TV, playing on the computer, and surfing the internet. The day passed quickly. However, at night, Jiang Hai was not so honest. After dealing with Qi Li, he went to Qi Jie and Qi Ye's place. After all, they had been separated for a while, and to be honest, it was inexplicably exciting. The next day, on the second day of Chinese New Year, Jiang Hai and Qi Li went back to his villa. The third day of Chinese New Year was supposed to be the time to go back to her parents' house, but Jiang Hai had already said that he would go to Feng Yunshan's house on the third day. So today, Qi Li went back to her mother's house by herself. Actually, Qi Li didn't need to go to her mother's house today, because she would spend the new year there. It didn't matter whether she went back to her mother's home or not. But after all, there was still some estrangement between her and Jiang Hai's family. When Jiang Hai was here, it was fine. But when Jiang Hai wasn't here, she felt that she was a little redundant. These girls were more or less afraid of her, so she didn't have any intention to do anything. So in the morning, Jiang Hai went to Feng Yunshan's house, and she went back to her mother's house. Of course, in order to appease the Empress, Jiang Hai deliberately sent her home first. The people at the door were either greeted Jiang Hai drove to the nearby supermarket, so they did not dare to stop him. He had to admit that the new year wasn't too important in Jiang Hai's group. This could be seen from shops, along with his three subordinates. A long time ago, Jiang Hai remembered that when he was young, about 10 years ago, Jiang Hai didn't like nightclubs because he was already in junior high school. But after coming in, Jiang Hai had his parents didn't take away his money. Although this nightclub didn't seem to be small, he remembered that it was the fifth day of a new year. Instead, he wanted to go to the bookstore to buy some comic books. Did something happen? Jiang Hai looked at the Luis Casado, Bing City suspiciously. He waited for about half an hour before a bus came out. He slowly went to Xinhua bookstore. Not long after, they walked into the hall. He was hungry and wanted to eat something. They saw that the layout of the hall was similar to that. It was the new year, ordinary nightclub, and he couldn't even have a good meal. There was a huge stage, of course, and then the top-notch restaurants were still open, T-shaped stage, but he couldn't afford it. The people were divided into two parts. He found a noodle restaurant that was still open. In front of the stage, he ate some noodles. There is a huge TV. Although there was nothing on the street, there was a football game. The New Year atmosphere was still playing. They were just looking at the new year in front of them. It was really too easy to buy things, old or whether young. It was restaurants, even the waiters, supermarkets, even the strippers, private fruit stores. All of them are holding all open. And this was incomparable to seeing this fanatical scene. Since it was Jiang Hai can't help but curl his lips. He had to prepare a lot of. Is this a nightclub for you before to come here to watch the game? He had asked Feng Yunshan, "Are you kidding me?" Parents liked. After all, he was married in the past. So he knew the basic Chapter 946. A carton of good cigarettes. It's the match between two Boca Juniors and River Plate. When he went to Qi Li's house, so many people are watching it. But now, Luis Casado had money, glanced at the screen, and he changed it into a carton of good cigarettes. South America and 2 cartons and Europe were really by the best ones. The cigarettes were soft Zhonghua, like different sports, and the wine were flying. For example, and Huaxia people like table tennis. Although in the eyes of ordinary people, this was also their national these things were already very good. Of course, in Jiang Hai's eyes, many people liked other sports. not to mention other
football,
things, just
and
as
so
red
on had
wine
a lot of
alone,
roots in China.
even if the lowest
But
price
when it came to
was
the national
$800,
sport,
table
was nearly
tennis was the most
5,000
popular.
renminbi.
On the
Ordinary
other hand,
bottles of flying
in the United
Maodai,
States,
and
the
Wulian
polarization
didn't
was
have
very
such a
serious.
price.
A
The
bottle
more
of violent
Maodai
young people
was about
and
1,000
black people liked
renminbi.
football more.
In Wulian,
One had to
was
admit
more than
that watching
renminbi.
football made
There were
one's
6
blood
bottles
boil,
in one bottle.
even more than watching
Shanghai's
a
2 bottles of
competition.
red wine.
Some business
were
elites
equivalent
liked
to these 2
baseball
cartons
more.
of wine.
Originally,
in addition to
these business
3
elites
cartons of
controlled
things,
a lot
Shanghai
of wealth
also
in the United
specially
States.
brought 2
So,
bottles of
the
its
number
own
one
red
sport in the
wine,
United States
some
was
beef,
baseball,
and the
not
best
rugby.
quality abalones.
But with
that
the
he
recent
sent after
development in the
refrigeration.
United States,
These abalones were the
rugby
super
was
best
considered
in
to
his
be the
manner.
leading sport.
Basically, in terms
Each
of the
them was a
influence of
two-headed
rugby in the
abalone.
United States,
They could only
baseball,
be bigger than this,
basketball,
not small.
and ice hockey combined.
Even if they were more than
barely
a
be
market
compared to
caddy.
rugby.
They couldn't
In Europe and
withstand
South America,
Shanghai's spirit.
it was naturally
Right?
the world of football.
The quality of
the
things
popularity
was more
of football
important
in
than the
Europe
quantity,
was
but
mainly
these things
due
were already
to the
quite a
popularity
lot.
of their league.
Driving
Although there was also a
Lee's
basketball
BMW,
league in Europe,
Shanghai
and it was
brought these
gradually
things to
developing
Feng Yunshin's
recently.
home community.
Football was
Driving
their life
far
when it
away,
came to sports.
he saw that it was
why they
snowing
called
heavily.
football the number
Feng
one
Yunshin
sport in the world.
was waiting for
South
Shanghai
America
outside
did
the
not
community
have
at
such
this
a good
time.
league atmosphere.
Their community was
But
considered
football
a good
was the
community
advancement
among
that
the
changed their
mid-range
lives.
in Bingsheng.
Everyone here
Naturally,
knew
that
that
as
security
long
as
as
they
the
had the
community
ability
was
to
also
play
good.
football.
It was not
they
so
could
easy
leave
for
South
foreign
America
vehicles to
and go to
enter.
Europe.
They
to
needed
get
to be
other
brought in
nationalities
by people
and make a
in the
lot of
community.
money.
Such a
Seeing
temptation
Shanghai's
was not
BMW,
small.
although
Because
she
in their
knew that it
eyes,
was
this was their way
cheese.
out.
They were
Feng
not
Yunshin
willing to
still
be
greeted him
ordinary
with a smile.
So
They
looking
had
at
to make
Shanghai, who
achievements.
stopped the car and walked
So,
out,
they would be like
she
wolves.
plunged into
They would
Shanghai's
seize
arms.
every opportunity.
Did you miss me?
and every
Looking up at
training
Shanghai,
to achieve their inner
Feng
goals.
Yunshin said
It was
with a
precisely
smile.
because of
Just
this
a little bit
that football
Hearing
was
Feng
really
Yunshin's
popular in
words,
South America.
Shanghai also
Almost
gestured,
any random
but he
uncle
only
on
got
the
a
street
pink
could
fist in
easily
return.
score 8
After
or 10
fooling around
goals.
for a while.
If Shanghai
Feng
didn't
Yunshin
obtain the
took
Dragon
Shanghai
Balls,
to the
he
guard.
estimated that
After
he would only
registering,
be able to score
they drove the
3
car
or
in.
4 goals.
Parking the car,
But looking at these
downstairs
people's
of Feng
craziness,
Yunshin's home,
Louis
Shanghai got out of the
Quezada
car
did not care.
and felt that someone
He was
was
not
looking at
interested
him.
in these
But when he
things.
looked up,
So,
that feeling
they just went
disappeared.
upstairs and
He
sat
thought
in
that
the
it might be the
waiter who
residents
led
of
them
this
up
building.
said a few
Then
words.
Shanghai,
Then
Feng
he looked at the
Yunshin began
TV
to move
in
the
the
gifts
distance.
prepared by
Obviously,
Shanghai out of the car.
watching
one by
TV
one.
was more
From time to
important
time,
than earning tips.
some neighbors passed
However,
by and
Louis
looked at the gifts
Quezada
prepared by
also
Shanghai.
knew that the people
Some
here
of them
were like
secretly
this,
clicked
so he
their
did not
tongues.
care.
He directly
Indeed,
picked up the
for
wine
ordinary
menu
people
and ordered.
These gifts
Since
were
they were
indeed
here,
too
they
expensive.
naturally had to drink.
But looking at Shanghai's BMW,
these people
after
were silent.
ordering some foreign
one by
wine
one
and 2
they
bottles
were
of
stunned
beer,
and
he
looked at
ordered some
Shanghai.
snacks.
After
the waiter on
moving
the other
everything,
side,
Shanghai also
these
locked the
things,
car.
he looked
and
at
walked in
Louis
the corridor
Quezada
with Feng Yunshin.
and signaled him
Feng
with his
Yunshin's
eyes.
home was
Call
bought
Serena
not long
over.
ago.
The rest
It was
of the
about
money
4 or
isn't
5
for you
years
to
ago.
eat. So it was an elevator
Seeing the waiter's
apartment.
expression,
But although it
Louis
was an
Quezada
elevator
smiled
apartment,
and waved
Feng
his
Yunshin's
hand.
parents didn't
The
like
waiter
to live
immediately
too high
left.
up.
Since
According
he
to
could call out
Feng
this
Yunshin,
name,
these people
once,
were indeed
her parents
not
went to her
people
aunt's
who could
house
money
to
by
play.
themselves.
As a result, not long
her
after
aunt's
the waiter
house
left,
lived on the
a
31st
big fat
floor.
man came
The
in
key
from
was that
outside.
the elevator was
This
broken.
big fat man
They thought
looked
that
like
since
a Jew.
they were already
He did not
here,
look like a
they
pure
would just
white
climb
person.
up.
After climbing up
he
that
was not
time,
black.
her parents
If one were to
never
talk about
mentioned
it,
the
his skin
problem
color
of
might be
living on a
similar
high
to
floor again.
Sanji's.
So when she decided to
He
buy
was
a
not
house,
tall, only
her
about
parents chose
60
this
meters.
4-story one.
He had a full beard,
According to them,
deep eyes,
even
and
if
a
the
big
elevator
belly.
was broken,
a big gold
they didn't
chain
have to
hung
climb
around
too
his
high.
neck.
8
Right?
of his 10 fingers
Soon,
were wearing
the elevator
big
came
gold
to the
rings.
4th floor.
The big gold watch
Shanghai
looked
also
thicker
walked
than
out with
Shanghai's
several large
Patek
boxes.
Philippe.
But
Feng
no one
Yunshin
knew what
was
brand it
only
was.
responsible for
As
taking
soon as the
wine,
big fat man
abalone,
came in and beef,
he opened his mouth.
the 3
and
boxes
laughed,
were Shanghai's,
revealing several
with
of
Shanghai's
his big
current
gold
strength.
teeth. Looking
The
at
3
Louis
boxes were
Quezada
not
in
heavy,
front of him, but it would
the big
definitely
man
block his
said
vision.
loudly.
He staggered
Ha, ha, ha.
all the way to the door.
Mr. Quezada,
just as he
is
knocked
here
on the
to play.
door,
Welcome,
the door
welcome.
was open from the
Tonight's
inside.
drinks are on me.
Yeah, you're
Everyone,
here.
enjoy
It
yourselves.
seems that you're here.
However,
However,
so many things.
It was a pity that
You're too
Louis
polite.
Quezada, when the
did
door
not
opened,
leave him hanging.
a middle-aged
He waved
woman's
his hand
face
and
appeared
said
from
generously,
inside.
There's no
She
need
looked at
for
Jiang
that.
Hai.
We are
Her
here to
face was
spend
about to
money.
wrinkle.
I called you
as
here to
she
let you pick a
said
few
with
good goods
smile.
for us.
Hello,
You know what I
Andy.
mean?
It's my first
The
time
head of the
here.
CIA's
I don't know
local
what you
power
like,
had come
so
to
I just bought
Argentina.
some.
Some
he
of
did
them
not
are
need to give
produced in
anyone
one place.
place.
Hearing the middle-aged
I
woman's
understand.
words,
Jiang
you were
Hai
here
also
to
put
spend
down
money.
the box.
Of course,
and
I don't
looked at
need
her
to
with
say
a
that.
smile.
If you
He
have any
naturally
requests,
knew that this
just tell
was
me directly.
Feng Yunshin's mother.
I guarantee
because he
that
had
you would be
seen her
satisfied.
at a parent-teacher
When he heard
conference
that
when he was
Louis
in school.
Quezada,
Although he didn't have
humiliated
much an
him
impression
so
of her.
straightforwardly,
After all,
He did not mind at all.
Yinshun didn't
It was
have much
obvious
interaction
that this was
at the
not the
beginning.
first or
However,
second time.
he was still
he had
familiar with
humiliated
her when they
Louis
met.
Kazada.
Come in,
This
come
man
in.
is called
Hearing
Serena
Jiang
Hai's words.
He is in charge of
Yinshin's
managing
mother
the
also
professional
smiled
women around
and let
here.
Jiang Hai
He is the
in.
middleman
Of
between
course,
the government
before
and the
Jiang
Italians.
Hai came in.
All the
he also
professional
moved
women
everything
have to
in.
pay him taxes.
Then Feng Yinshan
So, if you
led
come here to play,
Jiang Hai
you should
to the
ask him
living
to
room.
pick the goods.
At this time,
After
in the
hearing
living
his
room,
words,
a man with
Louis
a slightly
Kazada
dark
did
face
not
was
care.
sitting there watching
Instead,
TV.
when
When
he saw
Jiang
Jiang
Hai
Hai coming
and
over,
introduced him to
he also
Jiang
stood
Hai
up and forced a
hearing
smile
his
on his
words,
face.
Jiang
But he
Hai
didn't say
also
anything.
looked at the man in
This is
front
my
of him.
dad.
This
You
guy
should
is
have seen
really
him.
a bastard.
Feng Yinshan
This big
was
brother
obviously
seems
very
to be
satisfied
today's
that this
distinguished
man could
guest.
squeeze
Do you have any
out
requests?
a smile on his face.
Seeing that
After
Louis
saying
Kazada had
this
to
to
ask
Jiang
Jiang Hai
Hai
first
with a smile,
Serena
she took
was not
Jiang
a
Hai's
fool
arm
naturally.
and took him to sit on the
he
sofa
knew that
next to him.
Jiang Hai
Little
was a
Jiang,
distinguished guest.
TSK.
So he smiled
I saw you at that
and
time.
asked Jiang
You were
Hai.
not a good student
Well,
at that time.
let me introduce
I
you
often
first.
heard that your class
This is my
teacher
first time
criticized
here.
you at the parent-teacher
Hearing his
conference.
words,
But
Jiang
who would have
Hai
thought
asked
that it
him.
would be like this?
It's mainly divided
The
into
troublemaker from the
3
beginning
categories.
is now
The normal
promising.
ones are women sitting
You
on
know
the
that.
sofa, looking at Jiang Hai.
And there are transvestites
Yinshin's father
and
couldn't help
transsexuals.
but say with
Animals
some
are
emotion.
also fine. It depends on your preferences.
Chapter 9,
Hearing
37.
Jiang Hai's words,
Ugh.
Serena
Hee hee.
smiled.
That was
and
because
said,
I wasn't sensible
normal,
at the
normal.
beginning.
But
Now,
before he finished
I guess I
speaking,
still can't learn.
Jiang
Ha
Hai waved
Hearing
his hand
Feng
directly.
Yinshin's father's
What the hell are the
words,
last
Jiang Hai
3
touched his nose
categories?
awkwardly.
As for
and
normal
said
women,
with a smile,
there are many of them.
Everyone has their
Tell
own
me,
ambitions.
I could find any
if you
kind
learned
of
well
woman
at the
you
beginning,
want,
from 60
you wouldn't
years
be who
old to
you
12
are
years
today.
old.
Hearing
Wives,
Jiang Hai's
women,
words that were
students,
not hypocritical,
models,
and
Feng
even
Yinshin's
small
father
celebrities.
also said,
As
with a
long as you
smile.
say the word,
In fact,
anything
he
will
was
do.
basically
When
satisfied.
Serena
with
heard
Jiang
Jiang
Hai
Hai say that
he
it
was
was
tall.
normal, although he
He
wasn't
also
very
laughed.
handsome,
It
it
seems
seems
that
that Jiang
Jiang
Hai is
he
not
was just
such
an
a
ordinary
hardcore
person.
person. His family was
Beautiful
quite
ones will be
rich.
fine.
If
Don't be
Feng
too old.
Yinshan could
After
really
thinking for
marry
a
such a
while,
person,
Jiang
Jiang
Hai
Hai
really
really
good.
did not know
But
how to choose.
unfortunately,
He was just an
already
ordinary
married,
person, and the other
and he could
party
not
was the
ask for
boss of a
anything
large
fancy.
group.
He
After
couldn't get a
hearing
divorce.
Jiang
It was
Hai's
a pity.
words,
Before
Louis
Jiang
Kazada
Hai
smiled
and
Feng
gestured to
Yinshan
Serena.
or less told
Then
her parents that
he
she
waved
could
his
talk
hand,
about Jiang
and
Hai's
Serena
situation.
left with a smile.
Of course, she didn't
Mr.
say
Jiang,
everything.
since
What
you're
she
in
said was
Argentina,
relatively good. You naturally
for
have to try out the
example,
specialties
Jiang Hai's
here.
current family
You should know
background,
that some of the services
how much you
here
could earn
are
in a
illegal
year,
in your country,
his influence in the
or
United
in our
States,
country.
and of
As
course,
he spoke,
more
Louis
importantly,
Kazada
his
winked
relationship
at Jiang
with
Hai.
Chi.
How
Seeing
hard
his
Jiang
days
Hai,
was
Jiang
at the
Hai's
beginning.
heart seemed
He
to
was with
throb a
Chi
little.
Li.
Could be something
Li gave him money,
strange, but she didn't treat him as her
He
man.
said that he wanted
She
to
went to the
find a
company
normal
on the
woman.
second day of
Would that guy
marriage
find him some
and so on.
transvestite or
But after all,
it was
Chi
so
Li was kind of
disgusting.
Jiang Hai. He was not
So
gay.
Jiang Hai
Even if a
couldn't get a
man looked like
divorce.
a woman,
Of course,
he was still a man.
this was the situation
right?
a long time
Fortunately,
ago.
Serena
Now,
did
how
not
many people
make
were in
Jiang
Jiang
Hai's
Hai's
wait
family?
for too long.
Feng Yinshan
Not long after,
deliberately avoided
the
it.
waiter first
It was better not to
served the
talk
wine,
about this thing.
and then Serena
So although she
came
was a
up with a group
mistress,
of women.
Feng
When these
Yinshin's
people came
parents'
up,
opposition
Jiang
was
Hai
much
could
lower than
not
at the
help but
beginning.
frown.
Now,
Sure
it
enough,
seemed that Jiang
although he
Hai
did not
was
find
also a
any
successful
transvestites or transvestites,
he was not bad
for Jiang Hai,
He could also be entrusted.
He brought a group
Looking
of
at his
little girls.
appearance,
These
Feng
little girls
Yinshan
were really
wouldn't
young.
be bullied by
They looked to
him.
be about 14
This was the most
or
important
15
thing.
years old.
So her father,
They were not
who had
wearing
always been at
mature
odds with Feng
clothes,
Yinshan,
but they were
was
basically
also
wearing
kind
jerseys
Jiang
from
Hai.
every team.
Come,
Their
clean
hair
up and get
was a
ready to
little
eat.
messy, while
But
their
Jiang Hai
faces
and
were
Feng
very
Yinshan's
clean.
father were
They
chatting.
stood there with a pair
Feng
of big
Yinshan's
eyes,
mother had almost finished
quietly
cooking.
looking at
People
Jiang
in the
Hai
Northeast paid
and the
attention
others.
to a good new
There were
year,
not many vulgar
so they basically
movements on their
cooked
bodies,
6,
and
8,
their
10,
eyes were very
12
clear.
dishes.
Looking
Even
at
if there
these
were
little
only
girls,
one person in the
Jiang
family,
Hai was stunned.
there would be 6 dishes.
This is the specialty.
This had nothing to do
Jiang
with
Hai
wastage.
pointed at these little girls.
This was a habit of
To be
Bing
honest,
City's people.
he could not accept
Today.
it now.
Feng
His tone
Yinshan's
was a little
mother
cold.
also had such
Ah,
extravagance.
Sir, this
Although
is
there were
indeed
only
a
4
characteristic
people,
of Argentina.
they cooked 8
Oh
dishes.
no. The
Braised
entire
carp
South
meant
America.
that there would be more.
You also know
every
that the
year.
gap between the
Braised
rich
pig
and the
trotters
poor
meant that there would be
is
a
quite
lot of
big.
money.
Big
There were
cities
also
like
many
Buenos
home
Aires are
cooked
still
cold
fine,
dishes,
but in
stewed
some
pork
remote
ribs,
places,
fried chicken
it is
wings,
difficult for people
braised
to
pork
support
knuckles, themselves. Stir-fried cauliflower, coupled with the existence of a silver triangle, these many remote areas filled the table. Especially the
After
border with Peru
Shanghai
and Brazil,
and the rest sat down,
people's lives
they were a little
are very
polite
poor
and started
in
to
our
eat.
country, children
But
because
because Jiang Hai
drove here, he didn't drink. He just chatted at the
Basically,
table,
and
there are
talked
more than
nonsense with
3
Feng
children in
Yunshin's
a
father.
family.
Feng
So
Yunshin's
also
father
understand.
was still
Serena
very
was
curious
naturally
about
very
the United
good
States.
at reading people's
In fact,
expressions.
it wasn't only
when he saw
Feng
that
Yunshin's
Jiang Hai
father who
was a little
curious.
dissatisfied.
After knowing
he
that
came over,
Jiang Hai's business was
said
in the
to
United
Jiang
States.
Hai with
Most
a smile.
people were very curious.
Luis Quezada, after
also
all,
smiled
it was a
and
foreign
drank a
land,
mouthful of
so it was
wine.
inevitable.
This kind of
that they would
thing
be
is very
curious.
common in South
Regarding their
America.
curiosity,
After girls
Jiang Hai
start to
naturally
lose their
talked about
HP
it.
at the same time,
He also
Some poor
invited
people
them
will
to
sell
come
their
and
children.
play if they have
Most
time.
of them are sold here.
In this regard,
but
they
some
just
will also
smile.
be sold to
Sitting
rich
for more than
families.
10 hours on a plane
This way
was not
they
a
can
big
earn a
thing.
sum of money.
As for the
and at the same
first-class
time,
cabin,
they
will
will
have
have
one
that
less
extravagant.
mouth to feed.
One must know that
after they sell their
first-class ticket
children,
was enough
they
to
will
buy
have
a
new
relatively
clothes
poor
to
car.
wear,
2
delicious
tickets,
food
a
to
round
eat,
trip,
and
would
even the
cost
money
more
they
than
earn can be used to
$200,000
supplement
yuan.
their family.
Just thinking
It
about
can
it
be
made
said
their
that they are
hearts
very
ache.
happy to
After
do
Feng
this,
Yinshin's
and the
mother heard about
government
the price
is
2
also
days ago.
protecting them.
She complained about
They will not
Feng
be
Yinshin.
easily beaten.
Why did she come
or
back
scolded.
when it was so expensive?
Everything is done
It was too
voluntarily.
expensive.
Looking
Just
at
thinking
Jiang
about
Hai
it
made her
Louis
feel a
Quixada
little
smiled
nervous
and said,
it was more than
hearing his
100,000
words,
renminbi.
Jiang Hai did not
Just
know
as
how to
Jiang
refute.
Hai and Feng
This was
Yinshin's
really
parents were
F
chatting.
asterisk King
Chili couldn't stay at home. This was because her mother had been asking her if she had any children. Chapter
This matter
9,
couldn't be
47.
rushed.
Listening
So in order
to
to escape
Serena
her
and
mother's
Louis
interrogation,
Quixada's words,
Feng Yinshin
Jiang
looked at
Hai
her
did
two
not know what to
sisters
say for a
and
while.
came up with a plan.
This was because
When
he
she was in
really
the
did not
capital,
know what to say.
she naturally took
He was
a
not a
bath every
saint,
day,
nor
but
was
it
he a
always
member
at
of the
home.
maternal,
Now that
child,
back,
and child protection
she still wanted to go to the
Association.
bathtub.
These
to
people
take a
were
bath.
willing to be beaten.
Of course,
And
the
the
local
bathtub she
government
wanted to
was
go to
the
couldn't
one
just be a
leading
small bathtub.
What ability
she
did he
definitely
have to
wanted to go to a
control
big
them?
bathtub.
On the side of some highways,
there were many big
there were often
bathtubs
some
in
little
big
girls
city.
who would stop cars.
Of course, there were all
they were
kinds
there
of bathtubs
to provide
such as
special
bathing,
services,
massage,
after getting into the
steaming,
car,
eating.
they would drive
playing,
while
and
providing
of course there were some
services.
special services
After the
that only
service,
men knew about.
they would take the money,
but the
and get
latter
out of
was
the car.
only one of them.
Then
There
they
were
would
very
walk
few
back by
bathtubs
themselves.
that specialized
This was their job
in this nature.
Of course, there would
There were
also
many
be
women
accidents.
who went to such bathtubs.
For example, the
She
driver would
naturally
not
went
pay,
to such
or
bathtubs.
they would be
when she was
attacked
young.
by immortals.
So there was nothing
Some
to be
girls
shy
would even
about.
be killed.
But now
This
that she was
incident had been
back,
reported
it
by
was
the international
meaningless
media
for her
hundreds
to go
of
alone.
times. It just
But it was
so
still
happened that she
useless.
could go with her
These
two
people would
sisters
still
today.
exist
After
because
talking
they
to
were
her
willing
mother,
to do so.
Chile left home.
If they did not
with
do
Jia
so,
and
they would
Chia.
starve to death.
She drove
or
her
be
family's
beaten
car
because
and
they
went
would
to
not
big
be able to
bathtub
contribute
nearby.
to their families.
Although
the
Jia
government
and
could
Chi
not
didn't
afford
get
to
along
adopt
well.
these people.
After all,
They could only
they
live
weren't
at
young
home
anymore. And if they
Half of
lived
the
at
blood
home,
in their bodies
they had to
was the same.
contribute to their
So
families.
the atmosphere in the car was
This was
really
how
good.
South
After
Americans
chatting
thought.
and laughing.
Therefore,
Chile
over
had
the
already
years,
driven to the bathtub
many children
nearby.
would be sold into
On the
the
third
city.
day of a new year.
However, there were
the
many
imagined
people who
for
came
sale
here to play.
and for
There were
sale
many
rarely
people in the
happened.
hall.
These
Some
people
came
were
with
not
friends,
forced to become
some came with
prostitutes
family
here.
members.
These people
and
were all
some
willing
came
to
with
leave the
classmates.
poor mountainous areas.
It seemed that there were a
and
lot
come
of
to the
people,
city.
but
They did not need any
this
skills to earn a lot of
bathtub
money.
was big enough.
They could wear beautiful
It wasn't
new
difficult to
clothes
arrange these
and even
people.
receive an education.
After Chile queued
They
for
liked
a
this kind of
while,
life.
it was
very
their
much.
turn.
After
One had to
Chile
admit
went to
that
buy
this
the
kind of
tickets,
concept of
they wanted
price
this
was
female
completely
bathroom.
opposite
After
to
changing
Jiang
their
Hai's.
clothes.
But
The
think about
three
it.
slender
Wasn't it
figures
the same
naturally
in the
attracted
ancient
the attention
Huaxia?
of many
Wives,
women. It had to be
concubines,
admitted that the
maids,
current figures
and the like
of
were
these three
naturally
girls
very
were really
particular.
explosive.
Rather than suffering
It wasn't
in the
only men
poor,
who couldn't
it was
stand
better to be sold
Of course,
to a rich
the only man who
family
had seen
as
it
a
was
concubine.
Jiang Hai.
This was
The
something
women
that
who had
could
seen
not
them
be
were
happier.
also envious.
One had to admit
jealous
that
and
people's
hateful.
values were indeed
But in the face of
not
such
the same.
gazes,
Hearing
the three
Louis
of them
Quixada
seemed
and
very
Serena's
calm.
words after
Jiang
changing
Hai
their
did not
clothes,
say anything.
the three of them,
Since
went
he
to
was
wash their
powerless
hair
to change
first.
things,
Then
he was
they
too
went to sit in the
lazy
main
to say
hot
anything.
spring.
All
of
of
the
you,
bathtub.
come and sit
Soaking in the hot
beside Mr.
spring
Jiang.
was really
Keep Mr.
comfortable.
Jiang company.
As soon as they sat
Seeing
down,
that Jiang
the
Hai
warm
didn't say
water
anything,
filled their breasts.
Louis Quixada
It was really
smiled
good, and said
Those
to
who
the
had
two
not
girls
soaked
who
in the
looked a
hot
little
spring
older,
before
then the
were
two girls
strongly
ran over
recommended
with a
to give it a
smile.
try.
Their bodies
After
were
sitting
full
down,
of youthful
Chi
vigor.
Li and the
They
others
sat on
also
Jiang Hai's left
slowly
and right
washed
side,
themselves.
sticking close.
Let me tell
to her.
you, this hot
Seeing that
spring
Jiang
is
Hai
actually
didn't
not
object.
good.
The
There is
others
a natural
also
hot
chose their
spring
favorite.
in your brother-in-law's
Seeing that
name.
everyone was
It is
done
more
choosing,
comfortable to bathe
Serena
there.
left as well.
While getting water
After
on
he
her
left,
body,
the
Chi
atmosphere in
said
the
to
private
Jia
room
and
became
Chia.
more and more
Hearing her
intense.
words,
Chi Jia and Chia looked at each other
Originally,
and said
Jiang
nothing.
Hai was
They
drinking
naturally
calmly,
knew
but
that
the
there was a
two girls
natural
didn't
hot
think
spring
so.
in Jiang
Sir, your
Hai's
hands
manner.
are so big.
They had bathed in it
Sir,
much more
your
than
muscles
Chi
are
Li,
so hard.
but they
they couldn't
He didn't
say
know
now.
if the little girls were
And
born like
what's
this,
wrong?
or
Maybe
if they were
feeling that
used
the
to this kind of
atmosphere
life.
was not right.
Sitting beside
Shili looked at
Jiang
Jie.
It didn't take
Xia
long for them
and
to
asked for
move
some
their
doubts.
hands up and down,
Oh, nothing,
taking the
nothing, I'm
initiative
just
to rub their
curious.
undeveloped
Didn't they
parts
say that
against
hot
Jiang
springs
Hai's
are
arm.
only found
Their
in
hands
volcanoes?
also touched
Why is there a
Jiang
hot
Hai's
spring
body
in brother-in-law's
and even
house?
when Jiang Hai wasn't
Hearing
paying
Qi
attention,
Li's words,
they sneakily
Qi
attacked
Jie
a certain
took the
part of his
initiative
body,
to change
making
the topic.
Jiang Hai confused.
Who knows this?
Hey, how old
I'm
are
not a
you now?
geologist.
Looking at the
When I
two
have
girls
time,
beside him,
I will take you to
Jiang
play.
Hai asked
Your brother-in-law's
somewhat
house
speechlessly.
is still
I
very
am 15 years
beautiful.
old this year.
Shili spread out her
Hearing
hands.
Jiang Hai's words,
How would she know where
the girl on the
Jiang
left
Hai's hot
introduced
spring came from?
in slightly
She only
stiff
knew
English.
that it was very
I'm also
comfortable to
15
bathe
years
in it.
old this year.
And
after the other
that
girl
was enough.
organized her words,
You don't know.
she also
Jiang
said
Hai's
to
house has a
Jiang
lot of
Hai,
fun.
The beef I
15.
gave you is from
The third
Jiang
day of
Hai's
the Lunar
house,
New Year.
and there is also
I can't
seafood.
do it. His
Don't you
house
want to go to
is
school?
also next
Don't
to
you
the
miss your
sea.
parents?
It is very
Hearing their
beautiful.
words,
Jiang
since she
Hai
couldn't
sighed,
explain it, and then
Shili
asked with
didn't
some
explain,
doubts,
and
according
changed
to
the topic to her
Xia's
two
law,
sisters excitedly.
15 years old,
listening to
is
Chi
go to
Li's
prison.
words.
We're going to school
Chi
now.
Jie and
In
Xia
Buenos
looked at
Aires,
each other. There are
they
many
had no
girls
other
like
choice
us,
but
it's
to
like this
smile
all over the
awkwardly.
country. And
Listening
others
to
can't
Chi
do
bragging
anything
about
about
it.
their common. The girl on the left may have
They
better
couldn't say
English.
anything.
After Jiang
Ahem,
Hai finished speaking,
sister,
she smiled.
don't brag
and said,
about your husband.
As for my parents,
We know that brother-in-law
I am in
is
Corinth.
very good.
As
But
for
he is
Dad and
not our
Mom,
cup of tea.
To be honest,
With a
I don't
slightly
really want
embarrassed
to.
smile,
My home
Chi
is
Jie
in Korean
said
to Chile,
Taze,
which is at the border
hearing
with
that her
Baraki.
sister, who had
In
always
Baraki,
been at odds with her,
the legal
admitted
age
that her
for
husband
marriage
was good,
is 14 years
Chi
old.
Li was very
People my
happy,
age in Baraki,
and the smile on
are
her face
basically already
became
married,
brighter.
or even
After
earlier.
all, he is my
Fortunately,
husband.
I'm in
your
Argentina,
brother-in-law.
but
By
my
the way,
family isn't very
do
good
Xiao
either.
Jie and
I have
Xiao
a
have
total
boyfriends?
of 4 brothers
Do
and
you have any
sisters,
ideas?
including me.
Looking at the appearance
5
of her
people.
2 sisters,
2 years ago,
Chi
when
Li
my
asked
eldest
with a
sister was
smile.
13 years old,
But after she finished
she
speaking,
received customers on the
Chi
side
Jie
of the
and
highway
Chi were stunned
and
for a
never
moment.
came back.
I don't want to
My
become
illness
like my
may
eldest
relapse.
sister.
I don't want to drag
So when the
others
brothel
down.
people came
After
to our
thinking
village
for
to
a while,
recruit people,
Chia opened
I
her
took
mouth
the initiative
and
to
said
sign
first.
up. Now,
In
life here is
yes,
very happy.
Xiaoya's
for me.
illness is not
Looking at
cured
Jiang
yet.
Hai,
I still
the
have
girl
to
on the
take care
left
of her.
said with a smile.
Hearing Chia's words,
Hearing her words,
Chi Jie
Jiang
also
Hai
thought for a
sighed.
while.
The
and
atmosphere
said,
in this
"Oh,
country,
my
was
poor
like
sister.
this.
Don't
What
worry.
else could he say?
Your illness
Perhaps
will
in her
definitely
family,
be cured."
the previous
Hearing
generation
the two say this,
the generation before
Chi Li couldn't
that,
help
and the
but
generation
bite her
before
lip.
that
She
had all
forgot
been
that her
like this.
sister's condition
Jiang
is
Hai
not
wanted to
very
say
good.
something,
However,
but it was useless.
she is still quite
Just
confident.
as Jiang Hai was
After
sighing,
all, he suddenly
she couldn't
felt
even
a
be
soft
exposed
thing
to
in
the
his
sun in
hand.
the past.
Looking back,
Now,
he
that
found
her
that the other
illness
girl
has
with
been
poor
cured,
English had already
maybe she will
wiped
be
the
cured in
jersey
the future.
she was wearing.
Hearing Chi
and printed
Li's
Jiang
words,
Hai's palm
the
on
two
her
couldn't
newly
help but
developed
laugh
and
and
indescribable
describe the
thing.
Shall we
Feeling
eat
the
here
softness
or go
in
out
his
to
hand,
eat? It's
Jiang
rare that all
Hai was
3 of us
completely
sisters
stunned.
are here. Looking
Let's
at
have fun
Jiang Hai's
today.
expression,
The
skipping
two
this
girls
slightly
laughed.
heavy topic,
For them,
Chi
this
Li
was
asked
just
her
their
2
daily
sisters with a smile. Let's eat here. I don't know what to eat
Here,
outside.
they can learn.
Hearing that
They
Chi
can
Li
make money,
finally stopped
and they
talking
don't have
about
to
this
be
topic,
afraid of hunger
Chi
or
Jie
cold.
and Chi
The only
also
thing they need to
smiled.
do,
as
is
long
to
as
use
these things
their
are not
bodies
mentioned,
to
they're
please the
quite
men.
natural.
For them,
After that,
this was not
they
difficult.
didn't soak for too long.
Looking at Jiang
After
Hai's
soaking
stunned
for about
expression,
10 minutes,
the girl with
they
good
got up
English
and wanted to take a
smiled
bath.
and said,
Then
"Boss,
they went to steam
let's
themselves.
go over there to take a shower."
After eating and
Okay.
playing,
Seeing that they were
prepared to go
so
back.
proactive,
However,
and did not look
when
like
they were putting
being
on their
forced,
clothes,
Jiang
Chi
Hai
Li noticed
sighed.
one of Chi
Since that was
Ye's
the case,
he would not be
she
the
picked
bad
it up
guy.
and looked at it.
He just heard that
Then
these girls would be
she looked
paid
at it with a
according to the amount of
strange
service they
expression.
performed. Among the money, there was a fixed
Chapter
1,500 pesos.
Cough, sister,
which was
what's
$10,
wrong with you?
Looking
Which was
at the
to be given to
dazed
Serena.
Chi, as
Li
for the
holding her
rest,
anklet.
how much they
Chia's
could earn would
heart
depend on
skipped
their
a beat
ability.
for no reason.
In this line of
Then
work,
she walked over
it was
with a little
impossible to take
uneasiness
money for no
and
reason.
looked at Chi Li
It had to be
and
based
asked,
on the amount of service they
nothing.
performed.
When did you buy
this?
this
Was
anklet?
because they were also
It looks pretty
afraid
good.
that the customers
Hearing
would complain
Chia's
about
words,
them after
Chi
they
Li
left.
smiled.
If that
and said
happened,
to her,
they would not
Hearing
be able to
Chi
continue
Li's
working
words,
here.
Jiang
Jiang Hai
stunned.
could only
This
laugh
anklet
at
was
this.
given to her by
Following
Jiang
the 2
Hai.
girls.
Is there a problem?
Jiang Hai walked out
But
of the
now,
private room, even
and
if she
went
really
directly
felt that
to
there
a
was a
nearby
problem.
elevator.
She had to
The
bite
elevator
the bullet
went to
and
the 4th
pretend that there
floor.
was no problem.
After getting off the
Oh,
elevator,
I bought it
they
when
brought
Chi Jie
Jiang
and I went
Hai
to
into a
while
room
ago.
that looked
It
like
seems
a
to be in
water bath.
France. Jiang Hai
According to the
was
place
not
of
an honest
origin
person
of
in
this
the
thing
past.
in her memory.
Naturally,
Liu
he had done
whispered.
this before.
Since she couldn't
Especially
blame Jiang
after the
Hai,
popularity of
she could only
all the way
blame
Chi
West.
Jie.
Many
When did you go to
bathhouses
Europe?
in the country
Why haven't I
started
heard of
doing
it?
this.
Looking
After
at
entering
Chia,
the room,
Chi
the
Li's
two girls
eyes
took
flashed
off their
and
clothes.
asked. They
Ugh,
threw their
this.
jerseys,
Hearing
pants,
Chi
socks,
Li's
and
interrogation,
so on a shelf at the
Chia
side.
was a little
In
flustered.
fact, they usually
After all,
didn't dress like
she was
this.
not good at lying.
They had a game today, right?
There was a summon in my
Seeing that
laboratory.
they had taken off their clothes,
I just went for a few days.
They turned around
Anyway,
and helped Jiang
Lilia
Hai
has
take
nothing
off
to
his
do.
clothes.
So
After
took her
taking
with
off
me.
Jiang
Is there a
Hai's
problem?
shirt, the
But
girl with poor
fortunately, at
English
this moment,
asked Jiang
Chi
Hai.
Jie walked over
Customer,
while wiping her hair
can I lick
and
you?
said,
You can
"Don't
do
worry."
whatever you want.
Hearing
I think you are
Jie's
quite
words,
pitiful.
Chi Li
Help me
nodded,
spend as
then
much
put
money
the
as
anklet
possible.
in Chia's hand.
Hearing the girl's words,
Such a precious
Jiang
thing Hai sighed. You have to keep it well. The only thing he could do, if you lose it, was to let these girls earn more money. Looking at Chia, hearing Jiang Hai's words, said with a smile, the two girls' eyes could not help but light up. Then the girl kissed Jiang Hai's. As for Chia, she did not know if Jiang Hai was allowed to write on it. The girl's green tongue was constantly moving, but the feeling was indeed a little indicating that she should not. The other girls sped up the time. Then she walked over and put off his clothes. Compared to when Jiang Hai had always said that he could not bear to touch a girl, atmosphere between the three sisters, it was inevitable that a man would raise the flag after being teased. Chi, when the girl was originally in a state of showing off, she could not help but exclaim in surprise. And Chia also, "Oh my God, this is great!" The car soon arrived at the Chi family's villa. The girl who was originally licking Jiang Hai's immediately indescribable places. After the two of them also entered the house and exclaimed. Chi didn't go in. Then she stopped licking the flag, drove back, and knelt down to Jiang Hai's villa. When she came back, the girls in the villa had just finished eating it this time and were tidying up. The girl with
Alina,
better
Marion,
English directly
let me see your
lowered her
ankles.
head, while the
Seeing
other
Chile
one
come
helped to
back with a
stimulate
bad
Jiang
expression.
Hai's senses.
Everyone in the house
Jiang Hai could be
closed their
considered to be a
mouths
veteran
and looked at her
After
carefully.
all, there were only
hearing
so many
Chi
women
Li's
who
order,
had a fixed
Alina and
relationship with
Marion
him.
didn't know
But the
what
two
happened.
girls in
So
front
they
of
just
him
took off the
gave him
anklets
a
and
different kind
handed
of
them to
stimulation.
Chile.
This time,
Chile took the two
Jiang Hai
anklets
only
and
lasted
looked at
for
them
about
carefully.
20 minutes before
But the more she looked,
it's
the
really
worse her
great.
expression became.
We can use it for a long
Then she
time.
returned the anklets to Delina.
Looking at the flagpole
and
that
Marion
was still
and returned to her
standing
room.
after the end
At this
of the first
time,
contact
Jiang
battle,
Hai was
the
almost
two
done
girls
eating
said
in
with
Feng
shining
Yun's
eyes. After
Hearing
all,
their words,
because he doesn't
Jiang
drink,
Hai also
he was
smiled
quite fast to
helplessly.
eat.
Am I
Not
getting
long
more
after,
and more
Jiang
perverted?
Hai had
But
almost
before he could
finished
reflect
eating.
on himself,
The
seeing
two
that it was
girls
a
had
little
already
late,
pulled him
Jiang
to the
Hai
side
said
of a
goodbye.
large
And
jacuzzi
Feng
in the
Yun
distance.
also
The
sent him
water that had been
downstairs.
filled
How was
when
my
they came
performance
in
today?
was already
Looking at
full
Feng
this
Yun
time.
after
Jiang
letting
Hai
Jiang
asked
Hai
her with a
lie in it,
smile.
the two
Quite
girls
good.
also
Hearing
lay in it,
Jiang
one on
Hai's
the left
words
and one on the
Feng
right.
Yun also said with a smile.
Indeed, Jiang Hai's performance today
Chapter
was
9,
really good in
48.
her eyes.
Well, it's already
And she can
this
see
time.
from the eyes of her
Looking at the
parents that
watch
they are
on the
very
very
satisfied with
days.
Jiang Hai.
Jiang Hai
Then take
patted his
advantage
head
of this
and
period of
sat up from
time
the bed
to accompany
looking
them
at the
more.
two naked girls.
They don't have it easy.
One on the left,
After a while,
and one on the right.
I should be leaving.
Still curled up
I
on
still
the
have
bed.
something to do
Jiang
with the
Hai's
CIA.
big hand couldn't
Do you want to go
help
back
but
to
gently
Winthrop
pat their
or
buttocks.
stay here?
Last night,
After
they really
eating
had a lot of
today's
fun.
meal,
He had to
Jiang
admit
Hai's
that
children
children
had
had
good
good
stamina.
return to China.
It was said
were
that children were like
completed.
wolves in
There
their
are only
30s
3 months
and
to go to
tigers in their
Antarctica.
40s. He must go
That was
before
because children in their
February,
teens
and there's still
China
some
hadn't
time to
started
find a
learning
place
yet.
in Antarctica.
In their 20s,
It must be
they
known
would
that in
more or less
Antarctica,
be a little shy.
transportation
In their 30s,
not
they would
so
no
convenient.
longer be shy.
Therefore,
and their
it
needs
is
would
inevitable to
skyrocket.
leave
These
early.
children here,
He is going to
on the other
return to
hand,
Winthrop
didn't
after
have
the
any
5th day
shyness.
of the lunar month.
Although they weren't old
After
enough
that,
to do these
he will
things.
meet with the
They
CIA
were very
and go
curious.
directly to
What kind of
Antarctica.
position?
I'll go
what
with
kind
you.
of process?
My parents are
they
still
wanted to
quite healthy now,
experience.
so I don't
In
have to
addition,
worry about them.
Jiang
If
Hai
anything
said
happens,
that they didn't have
I
to
will
worry
take them
about her
over.
wallet.
Hearing
So last
Jiang
night,
Hai's
they
words,
played very
Feng Yun
crazily.
said with a
In the
smile.
mouth, in
She
the
did not
front,
tell
behind,
Jiang Hai
and
about her
in the
situation
hands,
at
they
home.
even hugged each
Although
other
Jiang
tightly.
Hai came over
Jiang
today,
Hai took
and
advantage
she was not
of
the
their
only one who had to
indescribable
bear the
outside
pressure.
body.
She
to
could
come
not
out
stay at
once.
home for too long.
It could be said that they had
After
played
all
kinds
she has
of
been
games.
used to loneliness.
Even
over the
Jiang
years.
Hai's body had
Now
fallen
that she
asleep,
has Jiang
let alone
Hai,
them.
she
So,
will not easily
even though
leave
Jiang Hai was
Hai
patting
behind.
them now,
This is
they
already
didn't
her
show
habit.
any signs
Okay,
of waking up.
then I will come and
Shaking
pick
his
you up.
head,
Gently
Jiang Hai
stroking
wanted to
Feng
take a
Yun's
shower.
hair. After
Jiang
putting
Hai
down enough
also
dollars,
said with a
he put on his clothes
then
and left.
After the two said
When he left the
goodnight to
room,
each other,
the surroundings
Jiang Hai
were
got into
already
the car,
very quiet.
warmed up the car
He took
for
the
a
elevator
while,
to the
and
first
drove
floor,
away.
only to
Standing on
find
the
that it was
balcony of
already
their
empty.
house.
Only a
Watching
few
Jiang
workers were
Hai
cleaning up
drive
there.
away.
Jiang
The
Hai didn't
expressions
care
on Feng
and went
Yun's
straight to the
parents'
parking
faces
lot.
were a little different.
When he arrived,
Feng
he
Yun's
found that
mother
Nurse and
was
Peters had been
70%
waiting here
surprised
for a
and
long
30%
time.
lonely.
Connor's son was indeed
She was surprised
not
because
that
she
interested
also
in
felt
women.
that Jiang
But he wasn't
Hai
a
was not
virgin
that,
who didn't know
because they were
anything.
junior high
So
school
he also stayed here
classmates.
last night.
She knew him
but he
well.
woke up early.
Moreover,
we saw
was not too
Jiang
arrogant.
Hai come out.
He
He also
spoke and
stood
did
up
things well.
and followed beside
He was an average
Jiang
person,
Hai. Not
Jiang
outstanding,
Hai saw that
not
the others
too bored.
hadn't come out yet.
He was indeed
so
a
he wasn't
good
in a hurry.
person. He
Worthy
first went
of
to a
her
nearby
daughter's
shop
lifelong
to have
commitment.
breakfast.
30%
While he was eating,
lonely,
Belle
because
Lester,
Jiang Hai was
Louis
already
Cazada,
married after all,
and the others came
People
out
were
one by
greedy.
one.
Looking
It was
at
said that
Jiang
men
Hai
had
like
4
this,
irons.
she also thought
Originally,
that if her daughter
Jiang
had been
Hai
with him
thought that
earlier,
Louis Cazada
would there
was
have
a
been a
very
different
bad
result.
guy. On the
Even
other
if he
hand,
deliberately
Feng
learned
Yun's
Chinese
father
for
was
him,
3 parts
Jiang
gratified,
Hai was still
3
very
parts
unhappy
lonely,
with him,
and
However,
4 parts
at this
helpless.
time, his
The
opinion of him had
gratification was the
changed a
same
little.
as his
After
wife's
all,
surprise.
they had played together
He felt that
before,
Jiang
so they could be
Hai
considered
was a good
buddies.
person.
At
Therefore,
least, he would
Jiang
not
Hai
treat his
specially
daughter
treated
badly.
him
To breakfast this
30%
morning.
lonely.
As for the
was
wine
same.
last night,
Naturally, he
he
felt that
paid
his
for it.
daughter's life
As
was
for
really
the money
not
that
good.
they had to pay,
and 40%
naturally,
helpless was
they
also
paid
because
for
he
it
was
separately.
powerless about
This
the
kind of thing was
relationship
very
between his daughter
particular.
and Jiang
No
Hai.
matter how good a
Although
buddy
he was the head of the family,
wouldn't treat each other like this. He knew that he could not control his daughter and Jiang Hai. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't know helpless. But anyway, when Jiang Hai's car drove away, as for Yinshin, Jiang Hai really didn't know. However, after the group smile on her face disappeared, they drove back to the hotel. She walked after arriving at the hotel room. Jiang Hai naturally didn't have anything to say. After all, mother looked at her daughter, and the others wouldn't trouble Jiang Hai. She could not help because of this kind of thing. And then after resting in the hotel for a while, Jiang Hai didn't know how Feng and the others went out to play chatted tonight. They took a good look around Buenos Aires. His sixth sense told him that something was going to happen. A good meal of beef, probably because his heart had been in the recommended hotel. He drove all the way back. They rested for the night, and nothing happened. The next morning, after parking, they were ready to go. Jiang Hai with also returned to his Luis Quezada. However, and the others were also as soon as he came in, the group rushed to the airport. The others walked towards this time. Their expressions were not quite right. Naturally, what's wrong? It was impossible for them to go directly. Jiang Hai asked cautiously. This time,
He really did not know what was
Tierra
going
del
on.
Fuego.
Chile just came
Tierra
back.
del Fuego,
Looking at her
was known as
expression,
the
cough,
closest
good
land
luck.
to the South Pole.
Hearing Jiang
it was
Hai's
located
words,
at the southernmost
Azalina
tip
whispered.
of South America.
Hearing what she said,
with an area
Jiang
of
Hai
about
was even more confused.
48,700
What the hell is
kilometers.
this? It
In
may
the
be
beginning,
related to the
to be
anklet.
honest,
That's all
this
I know.
place wasn't very popular.
Seeing Jiang Hai's
After all,
expression, the environment
Azalina
here was
shrugged
very bad.
and said to
Other
him,
than glaciers
then
and
went to the living
swamps,
room
there was
and
almost
watched a
no
TV
way to
series
survive.
there.
Looking
However,
at her appearance,
since
Jiang
the global
Hai
awareness
smacked
was
his lips.
launched,
If it's
many
a blessing,
countries were interested
it's not
in
a
this
curse.
place.
If it's
After
a
all,
curse,
this was
it
an
can't be
outpost in
avoided.
the South Pole.
Shaking his
In
head,
the 19th
Jiang Hai
century,
stepped
which
into
was
his
more
room
than
on the
1,800
second
years
floor.
ago.
When he walked into
South
the room,
America,
he saw that
was
Chile
liberated.
was sitting on the bed.
Most of the countries in
looking
South
at the
America
sky outside
declared
with a
their
dull
independence
face.
during this
Although it was
period
dark,
of more than 100
she looked
years.
motionless.
After the liberation,
Cough, what's wrong?
the major
Why don't you go
countries
down
began
and
to
watch
occupy
TV?
their own
Walking
territories.
behind Chile,
Although Tierra
Jiang
del
Hai
Fuego
slowly
had
hugged her
nothing
from behind
and was not
and asked her in
suitable
a
for
low
human
voice.
habitation.
Hearing
Chile
Jiang
and
Hai's
Argentina
words,
still
Chile
fought
did
a
not
few
struggle
times.
or move.
However,
what's going
in
on
the
between
end,
you
they
and
felt
my
that it was
sister?
not worth it. However,
Therefore,
although
in
Chile did not
1881,
move, the two
she spoke
countries
directly.
drew their own borders.
Hearing
here.
her words,
The East
Jiang
belonged to
Hai's body
Argentina,
couldn't help
and
but
the West
tremble.
belonged to Chile.
He felt that Chile
Argentina
should know something.
occupied
Cough
two-thirds
this.
of the area.
Hearing
And
Chile's
now,
words,
Chile was
Jiang
about to go
Hai was
crazy
at a
because of
loss.
that decision.
I know you won't
Because
lie.
at first,
if you have
there was
something to
nothing
say,
here.
just say
Other
it.
than the
Let
glacial
me give you a
lake,
hint.
there was a
Chia's
swamp,
anklet is
and
the
there was only a
same
small
as
grassland.
Delina's and Mary's.
It was even next to a forest,
and the words engraved
it was
on
indeed
are
not a
also
good
the
place.
same. After
But now,
JH,
the
is
richness
the
of the
abbreviation
resources
of their names.
here made
If I'm not
everyone
wrong,
speechless.
JH should be the
It had been found that
abbreviation
the
of
reserves
your
of
name,
iron
Jiang Hai.
ore were
Without looking at
65
Jiang
billion
Hai,
tons.
Chile
ranking
slowly
second in the
explained her
world.
inference.
Although it was just
Listening
an
to her
island,
words,
the richness
Jiang
of the
Hai
resources
couldn't help
here
but
was
sigh
shocking.
helplessly.
How to
We
describe
could
it?
only say
In
that Chile was
1999,
indeed worthy of
Huaxia
her
found
reputation.
out that the iron
She could find
reserves of the
evidence
whole
with just a
country
few clues.
totaled 45.
8
And
billion
this matter
tons.
was really difficult
This
to
small
explain.
island was 20 billion tons.
This matter is just like
more
a
than the
TV
total
drama.
iron production.
It's
of
really
Huaxia.
strange.
Moreover,
Glancing at
there were some
Chile,
places with
Jiang Hai
smaller
helplessly
reserves that
let
were
go
not
of her
suitable for
and then
development.
sat behind her.
Only 21.
His relationship
2 billion
with
tons
and
could be
Chi was
developed.
really strange.
Compared to this island,
Sure enough,
the difference
you
was
bastard.
more than 40 billion
I'll give you a
tons.
chance.
Speak slowly. Hearing Jiang
It could be said
Hai
that this
admitted,
island's
Chile
iron
turned her
output
head
was
and
equivalent
punched
to
Jiang
half
Hai's
of China's iron output.
Then she sat there angrily.
That was
waiting
not
for
all.
Jiang
The
Hai's
reserves of
explanation.
uranium,
Seeing that she was at
aluminum,
least
and
willing to
manganese
listen
were
to
the
his
third
explanation.
largest in the world.
Jiang Hai
There were
also
23
smiled bitterly.
billion tons
Then he
of
looked at the
coal
sky
reserves,
outside and slowly
6
spoke.
billion barrels of
I
oil
met Chi
reserves,
Jia
and
Chi
133
It
billion
should be nearly
cubic
3
meters
years.
of natural gas.
At that time,
there was no need
they
to
were
mention
still called
the
Penny
hydroelectric
and Little
resources.
Looking at the sky
It was surrounded
outside,
by the sea.
Jiang Hai
and there
also
were
sat there
forest
and recalled with
resources and
Chi.
grassland resources. It could be said that this place was a
Chapter
perfect
9,
treasure trove,
39.
except
Hey,
for
what
the
are you
coal.
doing?
Of
Jiang
course,
Hai
did
who
not
was sleeping in a
anything
daze,
about this place.
felt something
To him,
strange early
it was just a
in the
place to
morning.
pass by.
After opening
Argentina's
his eyes in a
Tierra del
daze,
Fuego,
he found that
was
Chile,
equivalent to a
who
province.
was supposed to be sleeping
Its
next to
capital,
him,
was
Ushuaia,
doing something hard.
was a small city
Feeling
with a
Jiang Hai's
population
gaze
of
when
only
he woke up,
30,000.
Chile
It was
stood up
officially
directly
opened in
and then
1960.
straddled Jiang
Every
Hai's
year
body.
at this time,
with a low
which
moan,
was the summer when the
some
southern
indescribable
half of the environment
things
was polluted,
also entered
there
the
were
most
many tourists from all over the
environment.
world. After
Hey,
all,
it
everyone
can't
was
be.
quite interested
Didn't we
in
fight
seeing
for
the
almost
South
the
Pole
whole
with
night
their own
last night?
eyes? Looking
Jiang
at
Hai's
Chile
goal
in
this
front of
time
him was also
Jiang
here.
Hai said with
After
some
arriving
helplessness.
here,
They
I
will
don't take
take
the
you bad
icebreaker
guy
and
pervert,
go
hateful
directly
bastard
to the South
You even
Pole.
took in my 2 sisters.
Then they will land at the
My
USA
status
South
is
Pole
getting
Detection
more
Station
and more
and then go
unstable.
deep.
I want
into
to do
the
as much
interior
as
of the South
possible
Pole.
before you leave.
After getting off the
If I
plane
wasn't
in
the first to
Tierra
give
del
birth to a
Fuego,
child,
Jiang Hai
my
felt
status
that the
with you would
climate
be
here
getting
was
lower
completely
and
different
lower.
from that in
Listening
Buenos
to
Aires.
Jiang Hai's
This was
words,
because it was
Chile
hotter than
moved
Buenos
while
Aires.
patting Jiang Hai's
It could not be
chest.
helped. It
and
was
said
summer
with
in
a
the
face
South
full
Pole.
of anger.
After getting off
Hearing
the
what
plane,
she said,
they entered a
Jiang Hai
relatively
couldn't help
good
but
hotel
stroke his
in
forehead
Ushuaia.
speechlessly.
After all,
Last night,
this was an outpost.
he and Chile
in the
talked
South
about
Pole,
Chi Jia
and
Chia.
people who could afford
Chile
to go to the
also
South
knew
Pole
some
were
of
basically
Jiang
not
Hai's
sure
secrets
money.
for the first first time. Therefore, the price of the room he didn't tell her the secret of the Dragon Balls, and naturally, but he told her the secret facilities were also being able to cure diseases. Jiang Hai, at the beginning, others stayed there for the night. No one came to trouble Jiang Hai, Aphrodite, and the others. And after Jiang Hai learned about Aphrodite and the other situation, they just spent the night. She threatened Jiang Hai. Early the next morning, Louise Cazada had already arranged for an icebreaker. Jiang Hai didn't know the identity of Jiang Hai and the others on the ship. The icebreaker was not feelings small, grew over but its facilities were and the relationship between the three to those of luxury cruise ships. After being counterattacked, Louise Cazada also recognized their existence. The ship was similar. When he went home for the New Year cabin of the entire ship, he found out that these two were actually his sisters. One part was for the regarding Jiang Hai's words. There was also a large compartment.
She had to say that her 2
younger
sisters
which was prepared
were
really
really
willing to go all out.
Another large
They knew
compartment
that these
also
were their
had
sisters,
3 rooms,
yet they said that they would
which was prepared
seduce
for
them
Jiang
just
Hai
like that
and the others,
because Jiang Hai didn't know about their existence.
After all,
And it was
Jiang
also
Hai
has his own
confessed.
fishing grounds.
Chi Li
so
really
his people
couldn't say
didn't
anything.
feel any discomfort.
Leave Jiang Hai.
However, if she
People
wanted to
will
leave,
often go to the scene,
then she would have
know
left
that
long
after going
ago.
out to sea.
Why would she
They
wait
can't
until
see anything,
now?
so it's
now
quite
that
boring.
Jiang Hai
Sitting
had
on
made
the
things
ship
clear,
was the same.
There was definitely anger and hatred, but there was also
Because
a
it was
trace
summer now,
of
there
inexplicable
were no
self-blame.
glaciers on the sea level.
If she had thought
so
things
naturally
through earlier,
there was nothing
then they
to
might
see.
not have had
Therefore,
anything to do with
after
it.
staying here for a
So
while,
after explaining,
Jiang Hai
Chi Li
and the
pushed
others
Jiang
returned to
Hai.
the cabin.
She pushed
Naturally,
Jiang Hai
after
three
returning,
times.
They
It
checked
was
their
needless to
weapons.
say how strong
When it was time for
Jiang
lunch,
Hai's physical
they went to
fitness
eat.
was.
The distance
He
from
had
Tierra
already
del
done
Fuego
it
to
3
the South
times,
Pole
was
and
a
Chile
total
didn't know
of
how many
800
times.
kilometers.
In the end,
this ship was
she
relatively
completed
fast.
it with her consciousness.
It could travel at
and then
20 knots
fell
per
asleep.
hour, which was
In the
almost
end,
37
she didn't
kilometers
sleep for
per
long
hour.
before she woke
In other
up
words,
again.
if they maintained this speed,
It seemed that her idea
it would take them
of
22
giving birth
hours
to
Jiang
reach the
Hai's
South
baby
Pole.
was
What's
becoming
more,
more
the
and
closer
more
the
firm.
ship was to the
In the
South
past,
Pole,
the
she
slower
could
it
be
would
considered
be
to be
because
at
there would be
ease.
some floating
If it came,
ice
she
or
would come.
shallow reefs
If
on
it
the
didn't,
seafloor.
she would wait.
Therefore,
Now,
according
she
to
was a little
Louise
impatient.
Quezada, in her
It would take
world,
them more than
the
a
company
day
was
to
very
reach the
important,
South Pole.
and
Jiang Hai
was
and the
also
others
very
did not
important.
mind. She didn't
After
want to give up
eating
either
lunch
of
and
them.
dinner on the
So
ship,
naturally,
Jiang Hai
she had to find a
and
way
the
to
others
balance
returned
it.
to their rooms
Just like
to
in
sleep.
ancient times,
However,
a mother was
early the next
valued by
morning,
her son.
Jiang
This was the
Hai
reality.
felt a biting
Your
cold
body won't be
wind
able to
blowing
stand
on
it.
him.
When he
Stroking
opened his
Chi
eyes,
Li's
he found that
slender waist,
Azalina,
Jiang Hai said to her
Galena,
somewhat
and Wallace
helplessly,
Shelley were
"I
curled
know my
up
body,
together in his arms.
even if it really
He
can't
touched the
stand it.
edge of the bed.
Don't you
next
know
to
how
him.
to cure diseases?"
Originally, when they set
when
off,
the time comes,
he felt a little
you can
cooler
cure
at
me.
most, but now
Hearing
his
Jiang Hai's
hands were
words,
frozen.
Chi
Looks
Li
like we're
also
almost
leaned
there.
down
He
and
picked
said
up the
to
thermometer
Jiang
on the
Hai
table
with a smile.
At this time,
Hearing her
the air
words,
plague had plummeted
Jiang
to
Hai
about
also
2
sighed
degrees
helplessly.
Celsius.
Sometimes
Although
she
it was
was
still
so
above
stubborn.
0,
The
it was
stubborn
still
Jiang
very
Hai
cold.
also had no
Seeing
way.
this,
The
Jiang
only
Hai
way
woke
was,
the 3 women
"Don't
up
blame me
first
for making
and
you
asked them
unable
to
to
put
get
on
out
their
of bed
clothes to sleep."
Looking at Chi
Then
Li,
he went out to wake up
Jiang
Belle
Hai
Lester
turned
and Connor
over
son,
and pressed
as well
her
as
under
little
his body
Huang
again.
and
I couldn't
Xiao
ask
Bai
for
in the
more.
other room.
Hearing
He also
Jiang
prepared
Hai's
coats for
words,
them in advance.
Chi Li also
Soon
smiled
after everyone was
and
fully
said
armed,
with a serious
the
face,
sky outside
"Sometimes
also
the
began
war
to brighten.
started so inexplicably. During the whole day of the 4th day of the new year, Jiang Hai almost didn't go out of the house.
Chapter 949.
He only came out for lunch
20
at
hours
noon.
passed
After
by
resting
quickly.
for about 2
After
hours.
Jiang Hai
He was
and
pulled
the
in the
others
room
got up,
by
they
Chi
washed
Li
their
once such
faces,
a woman made up
brushed
her
their
mind.
teeth,
It was
and
really quite
ate some
deceptive.
breakfast.
When they
least,
went out again,
Jiang Hai
they saw
felt that
some
his
broken
8 times
ice
physical
floating on the
fitness
sea
was somewhat
surface in the
unable to
distance
withstand
from
it.
time.
A silent
However,
night.
the
It was
life of the
completely
5th day
different
of the
from the
new
winter
year
in
was
America.
almost the same.
It was summer here.
Early in the
so
morning,
there were not too
Jiang
many
Hai
broken
went to
ice.
set off a string
Instead,
of
there were some
firecrackers.
small islands
This was
in
the
the distance
5th day
with a lot of
the new year.
exposed soil
The
and
customs of
rocks.
the new year were
With
Jiang
different from
Hai's
place to
eyesight.
place.
There were many
And
seabirds,
the customs were also
seals,
different.
and other
In some
creatures on those
places,
exposed
the new
islands.
year was not
There were
considered
many
over
penguins
until
on
the
the
15th day.
It was also the
In
time
fact,
of year
Jiang
when
Hai
penguins
also
were
had such a
reproducing.
saying.
In addition
when he
to
was very
some
young.
black and white
After the
penguins,
15th day,
there were also
the new year
many
was
gray
considered
penguins.
over.
It
In
was
some of
quite
the rural
interesting to
areas
look
where
at
they
from
were,
afar.
it was
When
often
we
on
get
the
to shore,
16th
you'll know how
17th
annoying
day
these guys
of
are.
the new year.
Although
that
the
some
others
vendors
did not
and the
have
like would
Jiang
set up
Hai's
their stalls.
eyesight.
They were
However,
also looking
the
with
pace of life
binoculars.
nowadays was so
But when they saw
fast that there were
Jiang Hai
very few
and the
people
others'
who didn't go to
movements,
work on the 15th
the captain
day of
couldn't
the new
help
year.
but laugh and
Basically,
say,
after
although
the 5th
Jiang
day of the
Hai
new year,
and the others
which was the
did not
so-called
understand
5th
what he
day
meant now,
of the new year,
they knew from the
people would go
captain's
to work
words
on
that
the
these
6th
penguins and
and 7th
seals
day
were
of the new
indeed
year.
not good
Jiang Hai was
people.
also like this
As the
in
ship got
past.
closer
Therefore,
and closer to
after
the
setting off the
Antarctic continent,
firecrackers on the
Jiang
5th
Hai
day of the
and
new
the
year,
others also
the new
felt
year
the
was
Antarctic
considered
winter.
over.
They were now
Jiang
by the
Hai
sea,
prepared to take a plane
so the
to
temperature was
imperial
not very
capital
cold.
tomorrow.
It was about
and then
2
return to
or
Winthrop
3
the
degrees
day
below
after
zero.
tomorrow. But when
he
the
would then
sea
call the
breeze
CIA
blew,
to
it was not
confirm that his
ordinary
personnel
cold.
were going to the South Pole.
Fortunately, Jiang Hai,
This
and the
matter had
others
been
were used
delayed
to the
for so
temperature in his
long.
fishing ground.
Jiang Hai had
But
to
some
go
of the
and take a
CIB
look at it
people
no matter
could
what.
not stand
After
it.
knowing that
The three
Jiang
team
Hai
members
would
were
be
still
leaving
fine.
tomorrow,
They were outside
Chile did
all
not
day
pester
long,
Jiang Hai,
so they could still
Instead,
withstand the wind.
she
and
accompanied
sun.
Jiang
They
Hai
wore
to go
thick
shopping.
combat uniforms.
They went to buy Bing
tactical
City's
vests,
local specialties,
and other things,
red
and hell guns.
sausages,
But
dried
the two
sausages,
guys,
Louis
barbecue pork,
Quezada,
etc.
Jittered Ma.
Jiang Hai would
could
buy
not
these
stand
things
it.
every time
After
he
looking
came
outside
back.
for a while,
This was also
they
one of his
returned to the
hobbies.
cabin.
After
After
all,
whether they went to get
Winthrop
warm,
did not
how to
have
get
such
warm,
flavors.
Jiang
On the
Hai
evening of the
and the
5th,
others did not
Feng
know.
Yinshan
Standing on the
returned.
ship,
She
they felt
Jie
the
and
biting
Chi
cold
did
north
not want
wind.
Chile to know
Not
about their
long
relationship.
after,
The
Jiang
outline of
Hai.
a scientific
That was why they
research
decided
station
to
in the
leave
distance
later.
appeared in
But they did
front
not
of
know
Jiang
that Chile
Hai
already
and
knew
the
about
others.
it. Almost
AI
all the
Xiaoxi
major
had also
countries in
sent
the
a letter,
world had
She would take the
scientific
train to the
research
imperial
stations
capital
in
tomorrow
Antarctica.
and
Most
meet
of
up
them
with
were from
Jiang
Soviet
Hai
Russia.
and the rest. This was
They would
also
take
the
the plane
result
the
of the
day
Cold War.
after tomorrow.
At that time,
As for Chile,
Soviet Russia
she was going to
had
stay
been
at home for a
competing with
while.
the United States.
She still had to
for the
go back
position
and
of the
teach
world's
Xi
leader.
Jia
Whatever the
a
United
lesson.
States did,
These two
the
actually
United
dared to
States would
seduce
do.
their brother-in-law
At that time,
behind her back.
Soviet Russia
In her opinion,
was really strong.
they should be punished.
But unfortunately,
time passed quickly.
Soviet
Of
Russia's
course,
heavy
on the
industry
evening of the
was
fifth day of the
extremely
new year,
developed.
its
Jiang
light
Hai
industry
also
was really
belonged
not
to Chile.
good. It was
No one
almost
had any objections
non-existent.
to this. At that time,
After all,
almost all
it was
the light
very
industry
rare for
came
Chi
from
Li
Li and Jiang Hai to meet. Of course, in the evening,
In the far
Chile
east
also
of
gave
Soviet
Jiang
Russia,
Hai day off,
which was the Siberian
and asked
region,
him to comfort
people like
Ning.
Jiang Hai
This time,
and the others
it was
had
Du
heard of it.
Ning who accompanied
Their parents'
Chi Li.
generation would
The
often
next morning,
take the train
in addition
to the
to
border.
Chi Li,
There,
Du
they
Ning
would trade the
and
light
Chi
industry
Jia
product
and
from
Chia, who
Huaxia
stayed at home
for gold.
Jiang Hai
or other
took a group of
valuable
girls to the
things.
airport in
At
the
that
minibus
time,
he rented.
one of
When they
Fu Yuan's
arrived at the
relatives
airport,
was in this business.
there was nothing much to
Once,
say.
after he had
They
finished
changed their
trading,
boarding
he saw
passes
someone
and
selling
took the
Caucasian
VIP
puppies.
channel.
This
Even
type
if it
of
was
puppy
just
was
Bing
worth a
City
few hundred
flying
RMB
to the
in
imperial
China
capital.
at that time.
Jiang
So he took
Hai
a piece
still
of
took the
clothing worth
first-class
50
cabin.
RMB.
After
and
arriving
exchanged
at the
it for
imperial
two puppies.
capital,
He
they
sold
found a
one
good
and gave
hotel
the
to
others to
stay
Fu
in.
Yuan's
In
family.
the afternoon,
Jiang
Ai's
Hai
house
and
he
the
came.
others knew about
This
this.
time, it was
Not only
because
did
they
she
only
come alone,
developed heavy
but
industry
she also brought the
and
crab
did not
sauce
develop
made by her
light
mother for
industry.
Jiang Hai.
As the world
Jiang Hai could only
gradually
laugh at
became
this.
peaceful,
But this was also
the
a
main
good
products
start, wasn't
produced
it?
by the
At
heavy
least,
industry in
the
Soviet
mothers of these
Russia,
girls
such
seemed
as
to like them
weapons,
very much.
could not be sold.
When Jiang Hai
After
was
that,
preparing to
they
return
were
to
cheated by
win
the
for
United
tomorrow,
States.
Chile
and
also
Soviet Russia
returned
was
her home.
finished. Of
Then
course,
they disintegrated.
she came with a mission.
But these things
Chi
that were
Jia
inherited
and
from the
Chia
previous
were
era
directly
were tortured
still
by
very
her.
useful.
They also knew
Currently,
that their plan had
Soviet
been
Russia
exposed.
had 8
While they secretly
scientific
scolded
research
Jiang
stations
Hai
in Antarctica
for not keeping his
which was
mouth
the
shut.
most.
They could
The
only
second
sign
was the
a
United
lot of
States with
humiliating
5
contracts,
followed by Huaxia
Naturally,
with 4.
it was not a problem
Normally,
to cede
people
territory
who came to
and
Antarctica
pay
for vacation
compensation
would first
Originally,
land on Half
Chi
Moon
Jia had
Island.
always been
There was
dissatisfied
Argentina's
with Chi
Kamar
Li
Scientific
because they were
Research
only
Station
half
there.
blood related.
But
Jiang
now,
Hai was not
she had
here
to
for
succumb
vacation.
to Chi
So they
Li's
went
abuse of
straight
power.
to the American
At least
Scientific
before she got
Research
pregnant with
Station.
Chi Li.
The big ship
she had
slowly
no
docked at
ability
the
to
bridge
resist Chi Li.
outside the Scientific Research Station.
In this regard,
then Chi
Jiang
was
Hai
originally
and
afraid
the
of
others
his big
prepared to
sister.
disembark,
And now,
but just as they
she
were
was
about
even
to
more
disembark,
afraid.
the
She
people
could
on
actually
the ship
guess
were
that they were
also
related to
preparing
Jiang
to
Hai
disembark.
just
Are you
because
going
of
to
an
wait for
anklet.
us here?
This big
Jiang Hai
sister
looked
was
at these
really
people
terrified
and asked with some doubts.
However,
Of
although
course,
the three
the
sisters
CIA
made a big
officer
fuss,
paid for the round
they did
trip.
not alarm
There are
the
no
old
fish
lady.
now for them.
So it's better for us to
It was
wait
not
for
that
you.
Jiang Hai
Moreover,
could
there
not
are
be
many
divided
entertainment
equally,
programs here,
but they were more
Hearing
restrained by
Jiang
their
Hai's
identities
words,
as
the captain
sisters.
laughed.
Now,
Looking at his
that there was a
smile,
leader,
Jiang Hai
things
was a
were
little
not so
confused.
troublesome.
What entertainment
Jiang Hai
could there
did not
be
know
in
how
this
Chi
world
Li
of
would
ice
deal
and
with the
snow?
two sisters.
Jiang Hai
He
shook
only
his
knew
head.
that after
Since these
sleeping
people
in
were
the
not
capital,
leaving, he got on a
it
plane
would
the
save
next
him a
day
lot of
and
trouble.
returned to the United
Carrying
States.
his things,
As usual,
Jiang Hai got off
he
the
first
ship
went to New
and
York,
went to the center
then
of the
returned to
scientific
Winthrop.
research station.
After more than
there were some
10 hours
exposed
of flight,
areas with a
the
large
plane
group
also
of
landed
penguins
at the
and
New York
seals.
airport.
The
As
seals
soon
were
as
more
Jiang
or
Hai
less clever.
landed,
When they saw the
CIB
ship
called.
coming from afar,
They knew Jiang
most of
Hai's
the
surveillance
seals
like the back of their
cold
hand.
sea.
Jiang Hai
Although
did
they
not
did not
about
swim
this.
away,
If they wanted
they
to
watched
monitor
the people
him,
on the ship
they
from
could
the sea.
monitor him.
If these
He
people
did not
had the
care about
intention
letting
to
these
attack
people
them,
know where he went.
these guys would immediately
Because sometimes
dive into
it
the
was
sea
safer to let them
and
know
escape.
than not. The
Just like
penguins
in the
were
ancient
much more
Huaxia,
stupid. In
the
fact,
emperor often
no one
liked
would
to
catch
give
a
some
penguin.
ministers
First,
servants or
because there were
beauties.
really
Did you
many
really
of these
think
animals.
that those people
Second,
were just servants
because these
and
things were
women?
really worthless.
They also carried heavy responsibilities.
And these ministers would be
The skin
very
of penguins
happy to have
was
such
really
a person
not
in their
suitable
house,
to be made
because
into
this would let the
clothes.
emperor feel
Although they
at
looked like
ease
this,
and
the
know
fur on
that
their
they had
skin
no
was
intention
really
of rebelling.
feathers.
Everyone
It might
had
not be as
shortcomings,
useful as duck
greed,
feathers or
lust,
goose feathers,
and desire for
also,
power.
who
These
would go through
shortcomings could be
so much
tolerated
trouble
by those
to come
in
to
power,
Antarctica,
but he had to know
kill
what
these
these threats
creatures.
were for.
Next was
Although
the meat
Jiang Hai
of this
was not a
creature.
minister,
Perhaps it was to keep
letting
out
these
the cold,
people in the United
so it was all
States
fat. know
If
what
it was
he
in
was
ancient
doing
times,
was also a
these
reassuring
moving
move.
pieces of fat
Of course,
might have
they
been
could only
really
monitor
popular
him
with the common people
if they dared to cross
but
the
who
line.
would eat them now?
Then
This was the
Jianghai
reality.
was not to be
Therefore,
trifled with. There were 120 million of these creatures in Antarctica alone.
Chapter 9.
They had nothing to do with
Mr.
being
Jiang.
endangered or
Hello.
high risk. Do you still remember
The seals
me?
in Antarctica
The phone was
could
picked
eat
up
15
in a familiar
penguins a day.
voice, so these
Sounded
things
from
were
the other
really
side
not
of the
lot.
phone.
After
Last
getting
time,
off the ship,
this person spoke in
Jianghai
English,
knew the first
but this
reason
time he
why
spoke in
penguins
Chinese.
were so annoying.
Although there was
because
a
these guys were
strong
too
smell of
smelly.
plastic.
When they were on the
Louis
ship,
Quezada,
they were far
if I
away,
remember correctly,
and the wind was
hearing his
blowing
words
from the south.
Jianghai said indifferently.
After all, it was
hearing
summer,
that Jianghai
so
still
Jianghai
remembered
did
him.
not smell it.
Louis Quezada,
When he got off the
also
ship,
smiled.
he felt like he had
Mr.
entered
Jiang,
a chicken farm.
I learned Chinese especially
Penguins were
for
the
you.
same. How are you?
Most birds.
Are you having fun?
They didn't
in
have a
Huaxia?
fixed place to defecate.
After hearing
They could
Jianghai's
defecate
words,
wherever they
Louis
wanted.
Kazada
Therefore,
also smiled
from afar,
and said,
but
these guys really know how to be familiar with
now
each
that they
other.
were closer.
They talk like
They
old
could
friends,
see bird
but
feces
fortunately,
everywhere.
Jianghai also
stench
knows that this
combined
guy
with
is
the
not
fishy
a good
smell of the
person.
sea.
It's
almost
okay.
made Jianghai
I don't know why
vomit.
Mr. Kazada is
Even
calling
his
me this
subordinates
time.
couldn't help it.
So Jianghai
Fortunately,
answered him
these people were all
hearing that
experienced fighters.
Jianghai did not
Whether it was
fall for his
Azalina
trick,
or Bell,
Louis
they were
Kazada
not weak.
did not feel
Knurse and
embarrassed.
Peters used to
As an employee
fight
like
in the
him,
underworld.
it is not the
He had
first time
endured
that he has
human
been slapped in
feces
his
mixed
face
with
by his
blood in the
target.
ring.
His
let
skin
alone
is
bird
extremely
poop.
thick,
So he did not
hearing
do
that
anything
Jianghai
else.
did not give
Among
him
the
his
CIA
face.
people,
He did not
the
care.
three soldiers
and continued
naturally
to ask
did not
Jianghai.
care.
But the woman, jittered
we
Maud,
recently agreed
and Louis
to go to
Kazada
Antarctica.
vomited
Do you
on
still
the
want to
spot
go?
when the wind blew.
Of course,
After
but
they got
I just
used
came
to
back
it,
today.
they covered their
so
noses.
I haven't
and
decided
walked out
where
of
to
the
go
area.
yet.
They
Hearing
entered
his
the
words,
scientific
Jianghai
research
also
station
said
that belonged to the
seriously,
United States
in March,
in the distance.
after the flowers bloomed,
as soon as
in
they
the warm
walked
spring,
in, they
they
saw a
saw
fat man holding a beer, and
although
looking at
Jianghai started to buy
Jianghai
seaweed
and the others
seeds
with a smile.
and fish fry,
Especially when he saw the
fish
4
last
women who
year.
came with
The
the
quantity
team.
was
His
not
eyes
too
could not
large.
help but
In
light
March,
up. Jianghai
welcome.
will buy the
Come in,
largest
please.
quantity of fish.
The guy smiled
Unlike
at
the average
Jianghai
American,
and the
Americans
others
didn't
and
like
said
to
with a
raise
smile,
fish because
"This
it
is
would
Dr.
increase the
Vistan
cost of
Carr,
doing so.
the person in
Therefore,
charge of this
more than
scientific
70% of the
research
American
station,
seafood,
seeing this
is
guy
naturally
being so
raised,
enthusiastic,
and then caught by
Louis
long-distance
Kazada,
fishing boats,
who had just calmed down,
in their view,
also took a deep
whether it
breath,
is the Atlantic
walked in
Ocean
front
or
and
the Pacific
introduced
Ocean.
Jianghai.
It is their backyard.
Hello, doctor.
If they want to fish,
Hearing that he
they
was the
can
person in
fish.
charge here,
Over the years,
Jianghai
fishing
frowned.
resources have
His sixth
gradually
sense told him
decreased,
that
but they
this
do
guy
not care.
was definitely
Instead,
up to no good.
They continued to
especially when he looked
increase
at
the
the
number
three
of
women
fishing
beside
boats.
him just
But
now.
Jianghai
But because
is
this was
different.
his territory,
He comes from
Jianghai
Huaxia,
still reached
and
out.
Huaxia
and shook
has
his
been
hand.
raising fish
This is
fry
Jianghai,
for a long
Mr.
time.
Jiang. It is almost the opposite of the United States.
He's going to Antarctica.
70% of the fish in
We will stay
Huaxia
here for the night
is raised
and leave.
There is
early
no other
tomorrow
way.
morning.
There are too many
When
people in
Jianghai shook
Huaxia.
hands with him,
So
Louis
Jianghai
Kazada
also has the habit
also
of raising
introduced
fish.
Jianghai.
Only he knows how much
Hearing
he
his
sold
words,
his fish last
the doctor
year.
also
This
smiled.
year,
In
Jianghai
fact, how
is
could he
gonna
know
raise some better
Jianghai?
fish.
But that did
Originally,
not prevent him from
Jianghai's
saying
fish
something
was
like,
not for
I've been
ordinary
looking
people to
forward
eat.
to meeting you
American
for a
red
long time.
fish sells
But
for
his eyes
$40
kept
per
glancing at
kilogram,
Azalina,
which is almost
and the
$20
others.
per pound.
Looking at him,
This price
Azalina
is already more
and the others
expensive
also
than the
frowned.
retail salmon.
This guy seems to be
the
a
retail
little bit
price
of
of
a pervert.
salmon raised in the United
Please
States
come in.
is about
I'll introduce you to the
$99
situation
per
here.
pound.
Maybe he saw
the wild
disgust
ones
in
are 14.
Azalina's expression.
$99
but he
per
did not
pound,
care.
and the skinned
He
ones
smiled
are
and led
7.
Jianghai
$99
and
per
the others
pound.
in.
Not long after,
The small tuna
Jianghai
is
and the
13.
others walked into the
$99
scientific
per
research
pound.
station,
And the live
the
American
scientific
redfish
research station
can only be
was
sold
divided
for
into
8.
3
$99
major
per
areas.
pound.
The living
Jianghai
area
sells them
the
for
scientific
nearly
research
3 times
area,
the price,
and the observation
which is indeed
area.
a bit of scam.
The so-called
So
observation
this year,
area,
in
was
order
an
to
open-air
occupy
platform.
more high-end
Of
markets,
course, there was a glass
Jianghai
cover
and
outside
Edward
to block
Anderson
the
have
wind.
studied together.
Here,
This
one
year,
could observe
they can
and
raise
record
white
the
pomfret
celestial
and small
phenomenon
tuna.
of Antarctica.
No matter how
There were
small the
many
tuna
machines
is,
and the like
it is
in the
still more
scientific
valuable
research
than
area,
cod and
which
redfish.
Jianghai
This
could
is a
not
matter
understand.
of bloodline.
The living
Originally,
area was
tuna
definitely
could not
one
be
of the
farmed
largest
because there is
areas
no
in the
way to
scientific
raise this kind of
research
fish
station.
in net cages.
Everyone had their own
It runs around
independent
all
living
year
space.
round.
But with
There was
the
a huge
increase
warehouse,
of Jianghai's
a
spiritual
bar
energy,
area,
he has a
place
way
for
to make
bathing,
things fish
a
live,
kitchen,
a
a
dining
fish
room,
farm,
and so
They will
on.
not leave.
However,
even in
Jianghai
winter,
found
just
that
like the
in
tuna
his
he brought
scientific
in.
research
At
station,
present,
regardless
the
of
population
whether
of
it
tuna
was men
in
or
Jianghai's
women,
manner
they were
is
all
quite
looking at
considerable.
Jianghai.
Although
and the others
Jianghai did
strangely.
not count
The men were
carefully.
looking at the
Women
women
Edward
in
Anderson
Jianghai's
once counted.
team
There are about
presumptuously, while the women
1,200
were looking at
bluefin
Jianghai.
tuna in
Many women were
Jianghai's
about to
manner.
drool at the
Jianghai
sight
knew
of
that there were
Coniston
not
Peters,
so many
who was a
bluefin tuna
big
in
and
the
tall
beginning.
man. After he expanded his fish farm, many of them swam over from Cape Cod. What Edward Anderson
Chapter
did not
950
know was that
What does this
many
mean?
of these fish have already
Jianghai
laid
looked at
eggs.
the eyes of these people.
According to
in front of him.
Jianghai's
If it weren't for the
estimation,
fact that
he will
these
have
people
at least
still look
30,000
like humans,
bluefin
he would have
tuna
thought
next
that
year.
he was in a
Of
resident
course,
evil world.
this is not the
Why
number these people's eyes look so strange. Even if Jiang Hai's
I'm not
spiritual
sure.
energy
I'll go and
is
ask right
very
away.
powerful,
Louis
it can only
Quezada
increase
also
the
felt
speed
that
of
the
growth.
atmosphere was
At
a
most
bit strange.
It can only make these
So after
fish
thinking
grow
for a while,
faster.
he said
It can't make them
something to
grow
Jiang
as
Hai.
fast as
He
they
then
used
nodded
to
to
in 20
Jittered
years.
Maud behind him.
However,
after
it is
Jittered Maud
estimated
saw
that when they
Louis
grow to
Quezada
20
nodding,
years,
she
it will take
immediately
about
took
4
out a
or 5
smartphone.
years. However,
In addition,
her phone
Jiang
was
Hai's
different
manner had a
from
lot of
ordinary
yellowfin,
smartphones.
longfin,
The system of this
big-eyed,
phone
and
was the
suit
internal
tunes.
system
There
of
were
the
more
CIA.
than 10,000
No one could hack
yellowfin
it, not even
tunas,
Wallace Shelley.
among which there were
And it
more
seemed
than
that the technology
3,000
behind
adult
it was
tunas,
also
and
very
more than
strong.
30,000
Basically,
longfin
a
tunas,
mobile phone
suit
is a
tunas,
transparent
and
piece
big-eyed
of glass.
It was
It's very
precisely
thin,
because of these
and if
tunas
it's not
that they
turned
didn't
on,
leave
others
Jiang
can't
Hai's
see it.
fishing
Of
grounds
course, they can
during
see it
winter.
themselves.
That's why Eduard
Jiang
Anderson
Hai has always
dared to
been very
propose
interested in
to
this kind of
breed
black
tuna.
technology.
Otherwise,
But for this kind of
he
black
would not
technology,
dare to mention
he
this.
feels that it's ordinary.
Jiang Hai's fish
because
farm
he doesn't
does
lack
not
such
have a
black
per se.
technology.
If tuna
Don't forget,
are bred,
he was a
these
shareholder
fish
of
will run
Google,
away, and
although the smart
they will
system
have
in his
no
house
place to
was
catch
not
them.
yet complete.
Of course,
But
at
before he
first,
left,
they will only
the two guys at
breed
Google
small
also
tuna.
gave Jiang
They're
Hai
not
a new
prepared to
bracelet
breed bluefin
that was connected to
yellowfin,
his glasses.
masu,
When you want to make a
big
call,
eye,
he did
long
not need to
fin,
take out his phone
etc.
anymore.
Instead,
He could directly
they will
look at it with
breed
his
a small
eyes.
tuna first.
The bracelet
that
would
is
project
bonito.
the phone screen.
In addition,
and he
Jiang
could
Hai
directly
is
also
also
preparing to breed.
It could be
white
projected into the
next
air
year.
on his
White
arm,
pomfrets are
or on
actually
the table,
found in
etc.
China, the
The
Atlantic
technology
Ocean, and the
seemed to be
Pacific
very
Ocean.
powerful.
They're divided
so he
into
was not
freshwater
envious
white
of the
pomfrets
transparent phone
and saltwater
After
white
all,
pomfrets.
we don't have much hot
Jiang
water
Hai
here.
is raising
in the kitchen
saltwater
over there.
white pomfrets.
Dinner time is
This
at
kind of fish,
5:30
whether
p.m.
domestically or
If you
abroad,
have any requests,
is actually not cheap.
remember to tell the chef
in the United
in advance.
States.
A
The
frozen
chef will
white
try his
pomfret
best to
sells for
satisfy your
13.
requests.
$99
but the
US
amount
dollars.
is up to them. There's a public bath
According
here,
to Jiang
and there's a bar
Hai's
over
black-hearted
there.
mentality,
As long as someone
it
is
is
there,
normal for
you can
this
buy
fish
beer.
to sell.
Beer
for
is $50
$50
but
per
foreign
kilogram.
wine costs
As for
money.
bonito,
You can't enter
he
the
and
research
Eduard
room,
Anderson
but
set
the
the
observation
price
deck
at
doesn't
$80
matter.
US
Any
per
other
kilogram.
questions?
Breeding
At this
more
time,
valuable fish,
Vest and Carl
taking
led
a more
Jiang
high-end
Hai
route
and the others
to
to a
Jiang
row of
Hai's
rooms,
intention.
and said
Since
to
you're
Jiang
still
Hai,
planning to go,
after hearing that
then
there
in
were
the next
no
few
more
days,
questions, you may have
Jiang
to think about
Hai
it.
and the
Do you want
others
to go with us?
also got the
Or
keys
do you want to
their
go by
respective
yourself?
rooms.
And we will
After
meet
opening
at
the
border.
door,
They also
hearing
walked
Jiang
into
Hai
their
say
rooms.
that he will
But
definitely
when he saw
go,
that Azalina,
Louis Quezada,
Wallace Shelley,
also
and
Galina
Galina
Vizcaya
Vizcaya
had all moved
let me hear what
into
you have in
Jiang
mind
Hai's
first.
room.
He couldn't
Hearing
help but
Louis
twitch his
Quezada's
mouth.
words,
Then
Jiang
Jiang
Hai
Hai also
helplessly
asked him.
turned
We currently
around
have
and
two
left.
ways to
It was
go to the
obvious
South
that he
Pole.
was not in a good
One
mood
is
now.
Tierra del Fuego
What do you mean?
in Argentina.
Looking at the man
and
who
the other
seemed
is
to be
Cape Horn and
unhappy
Chile.
walking
Of
away.
course, if you want to
Jiang
take a
Hai
boat
frowned
directly from
and
Mexico,
asked with some
you
puzzlement.
can also go there.
Ahem.
It
We
mainly
seem to have
depends on your
broken
schedules
rules
here. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Louis Quezada
Hearing
also
Jiang
smiled
Hai's
and
words,
said,
Guitar
Hearing what he
Mod's
said,
face
Jiang Hai
inexplicably
looked at
blushed.
Azalina. Then he
He's
showed
not
the
too
information
involved
in his
in
hand
these
to
things.
Jiang Hai.
These things are mainly
Jiang
for
Hai
Azalina
couldn't
to
help
study.
but be stunned.
Tierra
Then his
del
expression
Fuego.
became a little strange.
Seeing Jiang Hai
because
looking
the
at her,
information written on it
Azalina
seemed
also
a bit
nodded
ridiculous.
and said seriously.
To be honest,
In fact,
Jiang
if
Hai
they want to do
himself
their own
found it quite
research,
difficult to
they will
accept
also
what was
have to
written
go
on the
through
information.
Tierra del Fuego.
Because the
Mainly
geographical
because the
conditions
political
in Antarctica
situation
were
in
somewhat
Argentina
special,
is more
this place
stable,
could only be
and the
entered
relationship
for 3
between
months
Argentina
and
the
there were
United
still
States
9
is
months
better.
where it could not be
The
entered.
South American countries
Therefore,
have supply
always been the
ships
backyard
and the
of the
like
United
would
States.
transport enough
In South
materials
America,
for these people to live
Cuba
for
was the
9
only
months
country
during
that
these
was
3
not on
months.
good terms
Then
with the
these
United
people from a
States.
scientific research
This country was
station
also
would
a
be left here for
nationalistic
9
country.
months.
Similar
During
to
the
Soviet
time,
Russia
they couldn't
and
contact their
China.
families.
However,
so naturally
due to the division
there was no
between
entertainment
Soviet
to
Russia
speak
and
of.
China,
Because
some
the
countries
sunlight
in
in
South
Antarctica
America
was very
short
short
to have
during
other
winter.
ideas.
Electricity
Among them,
was
Brazil's
also
biggest
available.
importer was China.
Everyone lived
but they were
together
more
all
inclined
day
towards
without
the Western
electricity.
world.
However,
there was nothing to play with.
the Western world
there was almost no
did
way to
not
go
only
out.
refer to
Under
the
such
United States.
circumstances.
Other than that,
the Americans,
there were some countries
or
that
rather
were
the
more or
Westerners,
less ambiguous.
were originally
They had made
very
it clear
indulgent.
that they were the
Just like in the
underlings of
ancient
the United States.
Huaxia, there were
Everyone
only
went to bed
2
early,
countries in
and there
South
was no
America,
nightlife.
Puerto Rico,
Under such
and
circumstances,
Argentina.
there was
Compared to
nothing
going to
else
Chile,
to do
Tierra
except
del
for
Fuego, and
him
Argentina
not being
is
able to write
naturally
about it.
more worthy.
Therefore,
of Jiang
there was
Hai
also an
and the
unwritten
others with
rule
US
in the Antarctic
visas.
Scientific
Tierra
Research
del
Station,
Fuego,
which was to make this
Hearing
place an
Azalina's
independent
words,
existence.
Jiang Hai
from the rest
also
of the
said
world.
to
Here,
Louis Quezada,
the way to vent was
okay,
to find a
I
partner,
will arrange a ship in
which
Tierra
was what
del
the people
Fuego.
here called an ice
If you need
wife
anything,
or an ice husband.
you can find me at any
Many
time.
of these people were married
Hearing that
people,
Jiang Hai
so
is
they didn't
confirmed
care
about
about
this.
Louis
Each
Quezada
person would use at
also
least
smiled
120
and hung up the
condoms
phone.
every year.
The next step,
not to
is
mention
study
when
the
I didn't
itinerary.
bring any.
Since we
Therefore,
have confirmed Tierra
the
del
Antarctic
Fuego,
Scientific
we also
Research
have to
Station
study how to
would
get
give
there,
these people an
and who will
experience
be going
every year.
After hanging up the
most
phone,
important of
Jiang
which
Hai
was to
looked check for diseases and such as AIDS. He must go this time. Although these scientific research stations tried to recruit people according to a 1-to-1 ratio, will definitely not many women were willing to come. So, after all, the recruitment ratio military will be among the people who will go. In this way, and it is impossible for his research station to be unguarded. Women were well-deserved queens. There will be people to protect. They had the right to choose their own partners. So the number of people and the men were somewhat insufficient. This time, when they saw that there were stay behind beautiful women in Jiang Biliak, Valentina were very excited. And Ailsera will be guarding the house. When they saw Azalina and Wallace Shelley living in Galina Vasilkea, they knew that they had no chance. And Knurse and Peter, so Dr. Carl sighed helplessly. Oh yes, little It seems that this place is really messy. Hearing Jiang After reading the information, Azalina explained the list, then gave the phone to Jittered Maud. Since Jiang Hai confirmed that he knew that these guys were up to no good, Azalina don't go out others have been studying who will go. Don't cause any trouble. Tomorrow morning, will be people from a CIB will leave after getting the supplies. They have to be careful so the people who will go are all experts. In addition,
Louis Quezada,
this time they're going to Antarctica.
also read the information,
Unlike the last
also
time
said
when they
it
were
this
just going to
time,
find a cave,
then walked into
so
his room.
they need
Jitter
someone to
Maud
carry
thought
their
for a
things,
while
luggage,
and
and
followed
logistics.
him. Sure enough,
they can't rely on
the two of them
CIB
were having
people.
an affair.
Therefore,
As for
Jiang
Jiang
Peters
and
and
the
Jiang
others,
Hai's bodyguard,
they also
name,
returned to their
also
rooms.
played a role.
After resting in a
Belle
room,
Lester,
Jiang
it is
Hai
inevitable
and the others
that
went
there
to
will
the
be a
restaurant for
sniper
dinner
in
in the
this
evening.
evening.
When they went
Listening
to
to
restaurant,
Azalina's arrangement,
naturally,
many
Jiang
people
Hai
paid
also
attention to
nodded.
Jiang Hai.
Everyone has
and the
their own
others,
specialties,
but they were not stupid.
Jiang Hai
Maybe
does
they
not
knew that
understand
they
these
couldn't
things very
afford to
well.
offend these
So he will let someone who
and they were
does.
all taken. So these people didn't come to trouble Jiang Hai and
Chapter
the others.
9:41.
They just watched from a distance.
Boss, you're back.
Of course,
After leaving New
the
York's
most important
airport,
reason was
Jiang
that
Hai
these people
came to
had
the
actually
parking
just
lot.
arrived.
At this time,
it was summer now.
Edward Anderson
so
and
naturally,
Robin Garcia
they could go
were
back
waiting
and
there.
forth through
They
the
naturally
supply
came to
ship,
pick up
so they
Jiang
didn't
Hai
need much now.
and the others.
After dinner,
Because
Jiang Hai and the others
went
came
back to
back with
rest.
more people.
Early the
They
next
specially
morning,
rented a minibus.
Jiang Hai and the
Jiang
others
Hai
left
was
here.
also thinking
However,
about whether to
before
buy
they
a
left,
luxury bus.
they
in the
naturally
manner in the
had to get
future.
the supplies.
After all,
The
there
CIA's
were more
work,
and more people,
especially
in his
with Jiang
Thank
Hai's
you for your
financial
hard
support.
work.
Did
was
anything
very
happen
reliable.
recently? The scientific
Jiang
research
Hai
station
came
here
over
had
and
already
patted the
prepared
two on the
things they
shoulder
needed,
and
there
asked
were
them with a
6
smile.
huge
It's only been a few
snowmobiles,
days,
each of
what
which
can
could
happen?
seat 4 people.
Haha.
But
We are
now
all
only
veterans.
2 people could
We are
ride
very
each one
familiar
because
with
they
these
still had to
things.
store supplies and
Hearing
so on.
Jiang
There were
Hai's
also a lot
words,
of supplies.
Robin Garcia,
There were windproof
and
tents,
Edward Anderson
special
also
pots,
laughed
alcohol
and said,
blocks,
"We'll
medical
talk
kits,
about it when
and
we get
things
back.
similar to heat
I may not
packs.
stay long this
There were
time,
also
and we'll
military
leave
shovels,
again. This time,
pickaxes,
I'll be
hammers,
gone for
and
almost
so
a
on.
month."
There were all kinds
Hearing
of
their
tools,
words,
but
Jiang
most of them
Hai
were
said
free.
as he walked to the car.
Antarctica,
Hearing
there was
that
no
Jiang
shortage of
Hai
water.
was going to leave,
The seawater
although they
couldn't
didn't know
freeze
what Jiang
because
Hai was
only
going to
water
do,
vapor could
they still had to
freeze
report
and turn into
the car
snow.
slowly moved
So
in
all
the
the snow
direction
and
of
ice in
Jiang
Antarctica
Hai's manor
was
and
fresh
went
water.
through it.
This
Jiang
didn't
Hai
matter. Was also
the
in
main
the
thing
car,
was food,
listening to
such as
Robin
special
Garcia
jerky
and
chocolate bars
Edward
from
Anderson's
pressed
introduction.
biscuits.
Although
In fact,
these things
at the
tasted
beginning
very
of
bad.
January,
In
Jiang
Antarctica,
Hai left the
these
manor
were all
and went to
life-saving
Washington
things.
for a meeting.
The last
So
and most
basically,
important thing
after
was
the Christmas
fuel,
holiday,
gasoline.
Jiang Hai's men
Jiang
began
Hai
to work on their
snowmobiles
own.
were a mixture
Because it
of
was still in a
gasoline
world
and
of
electricity.
ice and snow.
There was a solar
Jiang
panel on
Hai's
the
manor
snowmobiles.
could do very little.
During the day,
At the vineyard,
they could use the
all they had to
electricity
do was
to
to
run.
clear the snow.
If there was not
The
enough
same went for the
electricity,
vegetable fields.
or if it was a cloudy
The
day,
work of the cows
for a long
was the
time,
same
or if
every
they had to
day.
travel at
They had to be
night,
let out
then they
for
could
a
use
run
gasoline
every day.
Because
Even in winter,
gasoline was a
the
mixed
cows
liquid,
couldn't have too much
its
fat on their
freezing
bodies.
point, which was the
Of
so-called
course,
freezing
they
point,
couldn't have
was
too much
different.
muscle either.
Generally
That wouldn't
speaking,
work either.
The freezing
Everyone
point
knew
of
that
gasoline in
good
China
beef
was between
had to have
minus
marbling
35
patterns
to
and the
45
45
degrees
patterns was
Celsius.
the fat.
In some
The other
extremely
places
cold
were the
places,
lean meat
it
of
could
the
also
beef,
reach 50
which represented
to
the
60
muscle.
degrees Celsius.
Therefore, when
However,
raising
at the
cattle,
Antarctic Scientific
especially
Research
good
Station,
cattle,
it was
completely
minus
lean meat
60
was
to
not
minus
enough,
70 degrees
and it was also
Celsius
not
all year
enough to
round,
let the cattle
or even
have
colder.
fatty meat.
Therefore,
It must have a certain
the freezing
proportion of
point of
fatty
gasoline
meat,
here,
and then let the
was
lean meat
minus
wrap
80 degrees
around the fatty
Celsius,
meat.
which was
Only
also
then
the
could the
lowest
beef be
temperature.
sold at a high price.
Of course, there were some places such as tendons and sirloin
Minus 80 degrees
where there
Celsius
was only
was enough
lean
to
meat
deal
and
with a
fat,
lot of
and there was no
situations.
way.
Of
It
course,
was like
if it
training
reached
to minus
brain
80
into
degrees
muscle,
Celsius.
it
or
was
above,
unscientific,
and there was no
and no
need
one
to
could
go
do
out.
anything about it.
Not everyone would
Robin
seek death
Garcia
at that time, and the others
for
were
Jiang
considered
Hai,
old
he'd
cowboys.
spent money anyway.
So they were very good
So
at this.
Jiang Hai
With
and the
Jiang
others
Hai's
didn't
high
stand
annual
on
salary,
ceremony.
they
After
naturally
packing
wouldn't
more
waste
than
their
a
time.
dozen bags
They
of
would let the
supplies
cattle out
and
every
more than
day
20
and
barrels
let
of
them
gasoline
run
for a period
They left
of
the
time.
scientific research station because in
Avoiding the
winter
reluctant
the
gazes
cattle
of these
couldn't
guys.
eat grass
After
and
going
exercise
outside,
at the same time.
Jiang Hai
So the
and
exercise
the others were
time must
naturally
be
fully
controlled
armed.
well. Even
As for
Jiang Hai
Edward
and Xiao,
Anderson,
by were
he
wearing
still
their
sailed
own
out to
custom-made
fish.
clothes,
Jiang
and
Hai
two
and the
specially
others
didn't
made
use the car
anti-snow
to
goggles.
transport the fresh
Sitting behind
fish they
Jiang
caught
Hai's
every day to
snowmobile.
Boston. They looked
Instead,
quite impressive.
Jiang Hai
Then
directly bought a
Jiang
spot
Hai
at Boston's
and the
dock.
others drove
Yes,
the
spot,
6
not
snowmobiles,
rented,
and
Jiang Hai
sped
was so
towards
rich
the interior
and
of
overbearing.
Antarctica.
Every
Although
evening, Louis Cazada
everyone would
had
go out
never
to
been
sea.
to Antarctica.
After a night of fishing,
he knew
the next
route and
morning,
location
the
very
fish would be
well.
delivered to
So
the dock.
he just needed to
Naturally,
follow his navigation.
there would be people from
Although the
PRA
snowmobiles
Walton,
couldn't be
as well as the
compared to real
purchasing staff and the
motorcycles,
high-end
they were
Western
still
restaurant
very
that
fast,
Jianghai
almost
had signed a
reaching a
contract
speed
with.
of about
They would
80
purchase the
kilometers
fish
per hour.
according to the
However,
amount
they had
although they weren't
originally
slow.
signed.
The
It had to be
snowmobiles
admitted
were almost
that in the
silent
beginning, because
when
there
the
were
Jianghai's
snow
fish were
mountains
caught,
and glaciers
although many
everywhere in
people saw it.
Antarctica. Not
If they
many
weren't
bought.
careful,
But
they
now,
could
just
cause
like
an
beef,
avalanche.
it was completely in short supply.
Almost all high-end Western restaurants required Jianghai seafood.
Chapter 9:51.
Now,
High-end
let's
Western
camp here
restaurants
tonight.
in Boston,
There's a plane
New
in front
York,
of us,
and other
it
northeastern
looks like we
corners
won't
would
be
have
able
a
to get out
special
today.
menu, just like
the
the
strong
one
wind was
Jianghai
mixed with
ate in
snowflakes,
Washington. constantly
seafood from the
blowing
mysterious
on
sea of
Jianghai
Winthrop
and the
was
others.
nothing to say.
Louis Cazada
It tasted good.
pointed at
It
the
was so
electronic
easy to
map in his
completely
hand
crush
while
with
speaking
strength.
to Jianghai.
Just like in the farming novels,
Jianghai also
Jianghai read
glanced at
before.
the endless plain
The
in the
cabbage
distance
was delicious.
and nodded gently.
No matter how
Then
much
the two
it was
of them
sold,
separated
people would buy
and
it.
jumped down
Of
from the
course,
snow slope.
Jianghai
in front
wasn't
of
that magical.
They entered the two
but his
small
seafood
camps
was
behind
delicious.
them. One on
No
the
matter
left
what kind of seafood
and one
it
on the
was.
The
This
meat
was where they
was
lived.
quite chewy.
There were two
which
tents on
meant
each
that there was
side,
enough
one
exercise
big and one small.
Generally,
They looked
the
pretty
meat
good.
of farmed fish
It was said that
was
one
very
should
loose,
not have the
but
intention to harm
Jianghai's
others.
fish was the
But
same.
one must
as wild
always be
fish
vigilant.
against
Moreover,
others.
it had the
Although they
special
came together,
sweetness of
Jianghai
fish
and
and
Louis
this
Cazada
sweetness was
still moved
particularly
forward
strong.
in two separate
The taste was
groups.
quite good. They did not
There were
mix
also
together.
some busybodies
Every
who
day when they
suspected
set up
that
camp,
Jianghai's
they would arrange the
fish tasted
snowmobiles
so
in
good
2 rows
because of something
and place
added
them in the middle.
After the
as a
result
court.
came out,
These people were
was on the right,
dumbfounded.
and
Not
Louis
only
Cazada
did
was on the right.
Jianghai's fish have
Both
no
sides
problems,
minded their own business,
but the content of
and ate
elements
their
that were
own food.
beneficial to the
They
human
did not
body
trust each
was
other,
also
but they
far
were
more
together.
than other sea fish.
This journey had been going
Of
on
course,
for 3
in the eyes
days
of some
now.
people,
Yes,
even
it
if
had
there
been
was no
3
problem,
days since
it was still a
Jianghai
problem,
and
but
the
more
others
people
set
could
off in a
accept it.
scientific research
People can't
station.
make everyone
During
like
these
them.
3 days.
Jianghai was also such a
Jianghai
person.
and the
Therefore,
others have been moving.
He never
towards
tried to
their goal.
please anyone
because there was no,
no matter
place
what
to
people
rest.
said. He would still sell it.
And the others
If you have the
spent
guts,
rest of their
then
time
don't
on
buy it.
snowmobiles.
That's how he did it.
Except for when
Of
they
course,
set up
in
camp.
addition to the fish
According
and
to the
beef,
calculation,
they ran
Jianghai's
for
sheep,
13 hours a
pigs,
day
and like
80
settled
kilometers
down
an
in
hour.
Jianghai's
That was
manner
more than
with
1,000
animals.
kilometers a day.
Whether it was eating
of course,
or drinking,
they were not walking.
these
in a
creatures
straight
had
line.
undergone
the
some
road to the South
changes
Pole
due to
was
the
not
abundance
completely
of
flat.
spiritual energy.
There were many
At least
snow
in terms of
valleys,
meat quality,
glaciers, and
it was
snow
much better
mountains.
than when they first arrived.
Sometimes
Jianghai's
German
and the
donkey,
others had to jump over
Nanjing
them.
yellow chicken,
Sometimes
Jianghai,
pig, and the
Yujimkin
others had to
sheep,
go around them.
etc. All of these took time. But
The
even
current
so,
taste can be
3
said
days
to
had
be
passed,
quite
overbearing.
and
Not to mention in the
and
United
others had
States,
advanced about
even in
4/5
China,
of the way.
you can't
After
eat
jumping over
such
the plane in
delicious
front of them,
food.
they should be
Jianghai
near
was
the
most
mountain
willing to eat
that was
donkey
destroyed
meat.
by the high
After
altitude
sauce
landing plane.
was sliced,
That was their goal.
and eaten.
Walking into
the
the
taste
tent
was really good.
Jianghai
One
saw
was
that
basically
people were also
eaten in the
busy.
pot.
Wallace
Chicken
Shelley
and pigs
was
were not
fiddling with her
important.
electronic
There were many
equipment.
things that could be
These things
cooked.
were to ensure
Boss,
that Jianghai
do you still remember the
would
fry
have
you
the
brought from
ability to
Waxiao?
walk out of here.
After
if he
briefly
fell out with
introducing the
Louis Cazada.
situation in the
She had to be
manner
careful
and confirming
Bell
that
Lester
there were
was
no
wiping his
problems.
gun.
He had been running for the
Anderson
past
suddenly
few days,
changed the topic
but he did not
and
look
asked
tired.
Jianghai.
After all,
He
of
used
course
to be
I
from a
remember.
triangular state.
Hearing
Although he had
Edward Anderson's
never been to the
words,
South Pole,
Jianghai's
he
eyebrows
must have undergone
couldn't help
a
but
lot of
twitch.
training.
He
Knurson
remembered that there
Peters
were
was
2
doing
kinds of
push-ups.
fish that he brought
To
back
him,
from the country.
only by
the long
exercising his
fish,
body
which
could
was
he
the
protect
so-called
Jianghai.
Yangtze River swordfish,
Azalina
and
and
the
Galena
large
were in
yellow
front of the
croaker,
pot,
which was the
boiling
so-called
the melted
large
snow
yellow
inside.
flower. Although the introduced fish were all farmed, Jianghai
Beside them
believed
were penguins
that
that
it
were
wouldn't be a
only
problem
left
to
with
sell them
fat
as
and
wild
skin.
fish.
Of course,
Moreover,
there were still
these
a lot of
things,
feathers on
Jianghai
the
didn't
skin.
sell them wholesale.
The feathers on the penguins
He directly
were
picked
indeed
them up,
feathers,
frozen
not
them,
animal fur,
or chilled them.
However,
and directly
these feathers were
transported them
very
to his
small
restaurant
and
and
looked
the
like
imperial
fine
capital to be
scales.
sold.
The
insulation
price,
effect
however
was
much
okay,
he wanted,
but
was
not
not
very
much.
good. It was
The
that
biggest
simple.
function of the feathers
There was also
was
a kind of
waterproof
Chinese bahama
and
fish,
reduce underwater
There were only
resistance.
8 of them in total.
As Jianghai
This was specially
and the others
made to
went
prevent
deeper and
inbreeding.
deeper into the South
But the
Pole.
number was still
There was no
not
water
many,
in the vicinity,
and it was not
There
time
was
to
ice
catch them
and
yet.
snow everywhere.
Recently,
Occasionally,
of the 2 kinds
there would
of
be some
fish
water
raised,
caves.
The
and
small
like.
one has been
Under
swimming
such
back to lay
circumstances,
eggs.
most
I remember
creatures
that
would
this
find
kind
it
of fish
difficult to
is a
live
single
here.
spawning fish.
Therefore,
I
there
think
were
it's
many
almost time to start
seabirds in the
fishing.
periphery of the South
Hearing
Pole,
Jianghai
such as
say that he
seagulls
still
and other
remembers,
creatures.
Edward
But they had
Anderson
completely
also said with a
disappeared
smile.
here.
In the past 3
can we start
days,
fishing so
Jianghai
soon?
could count the
Hearing
number
his
of
words,
seals he saw with
Jianghai's
his
eyes
fingers.
couldn't help
The only
but
thing
light
that was
up,
more abundant,
and he
was the
said with some
penguins.
surprise,
Jianghai had
Single
seen a lot of
spawning
penguins,
means that this kind
and
of
he
fish
also knew
can
some of the
only lay
habits of these
eggs
creatures
once in its life.
To be honest, most
Penguins
migrations
have a lot of
ended up
fans
like
both
this.
in China and abroad.
For example,
However,
the Chumha
this kind of
and the
creature
whitebait
is
would
really
grow
a kind
up
of
in the
creature.
river when they were young.
This kind of creature
when they grew
is
up,
very
they would
swim around in the
It
sea
often steals
before
things
returning to the
or
river
attacks
to lay
humans
their eggs.
or other creatures.
After laying their eggs,
Moreover,
they would die.
although they live
the
together,
same is true for
their
the
social
long-jawed
relationships
fish,
were very
the
chaotic.
Yangtze River
The penguins in the
swordfish,
South Pole,
which is why it is
all
so
the
difficult
thieves
to raise. And
although
sluts.
Jianghai has the
Although they were
nourishment of
monogamous
spiritual
on the
energies,
surface,
and
as
can make
long as
these
the
fish
two
not
were separated
die
after
they would
laying
do
eggs,
that kind of
there's
thing
no way to make them
crazily.
live for too
Even
long.
the seals were
It has
led
been more than a
astray
year since
by the
Jianghai
penguins.
got
Originally,
100,000 long
the seals caught the penguins to eat,
and it's almost
but
time.
now the
If
seals
some
sometimes
fish have
caught
begun
the
to
penguins
migrate,
to play.
then
Needless to
Jianghai
say,
also has to
although
be
the
prepared.
penguins were different
About
species,
March or
the most
April
important
every
thing was
year,
to get into the
these
penguins.
fish will migrate
Therefore,
in large
the parents
numbers
of
and lay
penguins
eggs.
took turns to
Calculating the
incubate
time,
the eggs.
It should be
When
about
the female
incubated the eggs. The male
After
would
these
go out to
fish
look
have
for
finished
food
laying
and then
eggs,
go crazy.
Jiang Hai has to catch these fish as soon as possible. Then ice or quick freeze them
the
and
eggs
transport them
the
to China.
female would go out
This is
to
a
look for
race
food
against time.
and then go
Jiang Hai has
crazy.
been waiting for this for a long time. As for the new generation, there was no need to worry. With the nourishment of the spiritual
raising their own
and the
children
protection
would also break other
penguins'
penguins'
eggs.
These small
fishes
other
can
penguins'
grow
chicks to
quickly.
death.
These were all seen by
long-jawed
Jiang
centipede
Hai
could
with his own
produce
eyes.
30,000
Therefore,
eggs.
penguins are really
According
bad
to Jiang
creatures.
Hai's conservative
Jiang Hai had
estimate,
also said
with the
before
spiritual
that this kind of
energy
creature
in his
was
own
actually
intentional
quite bad.
range.
However,
Out of 100,000
when Jiang
long-jawed
Hai and Xiao
centipedes,
went out
at
to
least
play,
10,000,
they caught a penguin
and at
back.
most 30,000
Jiang Hai
would be
wanted
able
to try it
produce
out.
eggs.
So he cooked
If
it
one centipede
and ate it.
produced
In the end,
30,000
he found that if
eggs,
only the
then
lean
only
meat inside
1/3
would be able to mature.
The taste was actually not
That was
bad.
to say,
but it was
Jiang
a
Hai
little
would
too
have
fishy.
at least 100
However,
million
this was easy to
long-jawed
solve.
centipedes by
Jiang
next
Hai
year.
brought wine
Considering
and
the
ginger,
price of the fish
which were
in
all
China,
things to remove
it isn't
the fishy
excessive for
smell.
Jiang Hai
The
to sell
penguin
it
meat cooked
for
with these
$800
things
per
tasted good.
caddy, and it had
Is
a
it
kind of beef
in a
and
restaurant
mutton
taste?
It isn't excessive for $1,000 per caddy. Of course,
Is it?
there
Let's
was
take
no way
Jiang
to eat
Hai's
the fat.
three tails
The
as an
skin,
example.
claws,
How much is 100
and head
million?
were all in
24 billion.
However,
And it's still
in this kind
US
of weather,
dollars.
being
Of
able to
course,
eat a bite of fresh
it can't be
meat was
calculated
also
like
a good
this.
enjoyment. The reason
Jiang
why this
Hai
thing is
and the
valuable
others have been
is
eating
because
like
it is
this for 2
valuable
days.
in small
Soon,
quantities.
Azalina
Jiang Hai
and Galena
entering the
finished
domestic
cooking
market
the pot of
in such a
penguin meat.
large quantity
After quietly
will definitely
throwing
have
away
an
the soup,
impact. They
naturally,
boiled a new pot
Jiang
of water
Hai is also
and
included
threw the
in
penguin
this
meat,
calculation.
dried vegetables,
Even if it is sold
and
at half
other
the
things
price,
into the pot. It is
as
still
the water in the
$12
pot
billion
boiled
again.
The
No matter
smell
how
of
much was
broth
discounted,
filled the tent.
it would still be
Smelling
$6
this
billion.
smell,
Everyone's
or
eyes
$3
also
billion
focused on it. What is
As the
really
broth
valuable
was ready.
This is it.
$100
Azalina
per
also
caddy,
gave everyone a
equivalent
big
to
bowl of
about
broth.
600 yuan.
Little Huang
is
and
still
Xiao
worth
by
3
also had a
billion.
bowl each.
Of course,
Then, with
that's
the
for
compressed
next year,
biscuits,
or even a
Jiang
year
Hai
after.
and the
For
others
now,
also started.
even if Jiang
they
Hai
should be
can get
arriving
80,000
soon.
of the
Azalina
100,000
asked
long-jawed
Jiang Hai,
fish while
it is
eating.
guaranteed
Well,
to be
they should be arriving
24,000
soon,
caddies,
which
which
is
is
not-
nearly $20 million.
According to Louis Cazada,
Jiang Hai
they
is
should
a
be
little
arriving
poor
tomorrow.
recently.
So
Then
we
we
have to be
careful.
soft-hearted about this
Galena
money.
also looked
Everything
at
will be
Azalina
done after I
and
come
said,
back from
after
Antarctica,
hearing what Jiang Hai
thinking
said,
of the wealth that
don't
will come,
worry, they
Jiang
won't have the
Hai
guts to
narrowed
touch us
his
before they
eyes.
find out anything. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also smiled.
Chapter
and said,
942.
He was telling
After
the truth.
returning to Winthrop,
For a privileged
Jiang Hai
person
didn't
like
stay
him,
at home for long.
there was really
as it was
nothing
still
to be
covered in
afraid
ice
of.
and snow.
There's no harm
To be
in being
exact,
careful.
he was in a
boss.
rush.
At this time,
So,
Bell
when he
smiled
returned to
at the
Winthrop,
side.
he
He
had a
still
small
supported
meeting at
Galena's
home.
statement. He made some
Well,
arrangements
there's
for
no
the
harm in
operation of the
being
manor
careful.
when he was
Hearing
not
Bell's
around
words,
for a while.
Jiang Hai nodded.
After everything
There's
was
no
settled,
harm in being careful.
Jiang Hai found
Soon,
Bell Lester
everyone
and Knurse
finished
and
the
Peters
food in front
and
of
told them that he
and then
wanted
Bell
them
and
to
Knurse and
accompany
Peters
him.
returned to their
Naturally,
tent.
there was
Huang
no problem with
and
the two of
Xiao
them.
by also
Connors
ran
and Peters
outside
could
the
leave
tent
at any
sensibly,
time,
but
they will be
Bell
on guard
Lester,
nearby.
Jiang Hai
and will come back
gave
to
him
sleep
a
during the
3-day
day
leave.
tomorrow.
Compared to being on
leave
guard,
after his leave,
they're
was
actually
over.
more dutiful.
At the same time,
Then,
only
Jiang Hai
Jiang
and the
Hai
rest
and the
had to
other
prepare
three
the
were left
equipment
in
for the
tent.
trip to
Of
Antarctica.
course, this is
Yes,
the Great South
Jiang
Pole.
Hai had to prepare
Jiang
the
Hai is
equipment
not
himself.
crazy enough to
You
make
could not
children
expect the
tent,
CIA
but
to
rubbing
prepare
and
the
hugging
equipment
are
for Jiang
inevitable.
Hai.
And
The
they
first
are
thing
more
they
used to
needed
this.
was
After
something to
changing his
keep them warm.
clothes,
Although
Jiang
Jiang
Hai
Hai
was
was
born
born
in
in
Bing
Bing
City
fell asleep,
and now
the night
lived in
passed
Winthrop.
without any
Anyone who
words.
had been to Antarctica
The next morning,
would know
Azalina
that it was not
heated a
on the
pot of
same
water
level.
again.
Not to
After
mention everyone
Antarctica,
washed
even
up.
the North Pole
They looked at the
could not
direction of the
withstand
wind.
it.
As
After
the
all,
coldest place in the
summer.
world, the
Although
southern
the
district
wind
was
was
about
divided
level
into
7,
two
they could
areas,
still walk.
the coastal
After
area
putting on their
and the
equipment
inland area.
and packing
During
their
the
things,
warm season
Jiang
in the coastal
Hai
area,
and the
the
others
average
rode
temperature
their
was around
snowmobiles,
0 degrees
jumped
Celsius
over the snowy peak
to
in front
minus
of them
20 degrees
and headed towards the
Celsius.
plains in front
The
of them.
average temperature in the
Along
inland
way,
area was
everyone's
minus
speed
30
was
was
not
degrees
slow,
Celsius,
and
to
they soon
minus
rushed to
20
the
degrees
plains.
Celsius.
However,
That is to
as the
say,
old
it was
saying
minus
goes,
20 degrees
looking
Celsius
at a mountain
during the
is
day
close
and
enough to
minus
kill a horse.
35 degrees Celsius.
Nothing could be done based on
In
the
fact,
scenery on the
it was
plains.
still acceptable.
That was why they could go there during the warm
Therefore,
season.
during
Even
the
though the
cold
mountain
season,
did not
the coastal
seem
area
far
was
away,
minus 30
Jiang
degrees
Hai
Celsius and the others ran from dawn to dusk before they arrived. And the inland area was minus 70 degrees Celsius. Both Louis Quezada 40 degrees and Shanghai. This was the reason why even the most advanced technology in the world, they did not rest, could not stay outdoors in Antarctica for a long time. They kept running, and there was another more important reason. After arriving at the snowy warm season in Antarctica lasted for 5 months. Shanghai. It started in November and ended in March. According to the information on the map, the entrance to the underground city is
But
halfway
why could they
up the
only go
mountain.
to Antarctica?
Are we going
in
tonight
January
or tomorrow?
and February every
If
year?
I say that we'll go
It
tomorrow,
was because of the wind.
will
there.
you believe me?
There were
Glancing
hurricanes
at Lewis
in
Kazada,
Antarctica.
Jiang
Hai
Hai smiled.
There were
and said,
300 days
to
of
be
gale
honest,
days,
since
and
there
there
were
were
only
already
2 months where the wind
it was
not
impossible
that
for
strong.
Jiang Hai
Of
not
course,
to go directly.
the gale days mentioned here
I don't really
were
believe
different
you.
from the gale
Then
days
let's spend the night
in
in
the
the
cave at the entrance.
In normal times,
Hearing
the
Jiang
so-called
Hai's
gale
words,
days were only
Lewis
force
Kazada
5
also
or
laughed.
force 6
As he
winds.
said, but in the
He did
South
not
Pole,
believe that
there were no
Jiang
force
Hai
5
would
or
not
force
sneak
6
up.
winds at all.
In this case,
the smallest
instead
wind
of
was
following
force
Jiang
8,
Hai after
which was
knowing
nearly
that he had
20
sneaked
meters
out,
per second.
It was
It was
better
only
to go
during
in
these
together.
2 months
He was
that the
really
wind
curious.
was level 8.
What did Jiang Hai
Apart
want
from
to
these
do?
2 months,
Then let's go.
the wind was
Since it
level
had been
10
decided
and above.
Jiang Hai did
At
not
its
say
strongest,
much. With
it
a
could
wave
even
of his
reach
hand,
100 meters
the people
per second.
around him
It was
started
impossible to calculate what level the wind
and
was
rode
at
towards
when
the direction
Jiang
of
Hai
the
was in school.
Although the
most
speed
powerful
of climbing
wind
up the mountain
he knew
was
was
much
level 12.
slower. But in
It was
fact,
fortunate
above
that the
level
mountain
12,
was very
there were
short.
levels 13,
It was only about
14,
3,000
15,
meters,
16.
and
The position
17.
halfway up the mountain was more than 1,000
The highest
meters.
level of wind,
although the
defined
higher
by
they went,
humans,
the
was
stronger the
level 17,
wind, and the
with a
colder
wind
it
speed
became,
of more than
everyone
61.
could still barely
3
hold
meters
on.
per second.
Finally,
Before
before
the
the
sky
sky
was
between 61 and
dark,
100,
Jiang
there was still a
Hai
long way
and
to
the
go.
others arrived
Therefore,
halfway up the mountain.
Even if it was summer
At this
in
moment,
Antarctica,
what entered
Jiang
their
Hai
eyes
still
was
had
a
to take
huge
good measures
cave.
to protect himself from the cold. Level 8 wind, coupled with a temperature of minus 30 degrees Celsius. Just
Chapter
thinking about it
9,
made him
52.
feel so
Looking at
excited.
the huge cave
Secondly,
in front of him,
there was the
Jiang
problem
Hai
of
swallowed
weapons.
a mouthful
Ordinary
of
weapons
saliva
were naturally
and asked
useless
in a low voice,
in Antarctica.
"Is this it?"
When the wind
Well,
blew,
this is it.
hearing
Snowflakes
Jiang
would
Hai's
fall.
words,
If snow entered
Lewis
the gun,
Kazada
it would
glanced at the
instantly
GPS
freeze
in
the
his
things
hand
inside
and said with
It would be
certainty.
useless
At the same
even if it was
time,
oiled.
he also swallowed a
in
mouthful
Antarctica,
of saliva
it was necessary
because the cave
to
in
use
front of him
sealed
looked
guns
really
made of
eye-catching.
special materials.
The discovery
Although
of this
the power
cave
would be
was
much
quite
lower,
accidental.
at least it could
during
be
the
used.
United States
Of
high-altitude landing
regular
operation.
weapons were still
A plane
prepared.
happened to hit
After
this
all,
snowy mountain
some places
and
were
then
not
fell
so
not
cold.
far away from
Thirdly,
the mountainside.
there were problems
the model of that
related to
plane was
orientation.
R4D. There were no
Everyone
landmarks
may
in
not be
Antarctica,
familiar with this
and
name,
compasses
because this
were
plane
not
was
very
also
useful.
built during World
Just
War
satellite
II.
positioning,
However,
and so on.
it belonged
You
to
had
the
to
Army
pray that the
and did
satellite
not
would
appear many
watch you.
times.
So,
After all,
identifying
the United
directions
States
in
Army
Antarctica
did not
was
send
also
many of them
very
out.
important.
Most of them
Of
were from
course,
the
there were
Navy,
many other things,
and the Navy's
but at present,
plane was called the
these were the most
C-47.
important. When the United
Jiang
States
Hai had to
joined
solve
the war,
these things
they got a
while Bell
lot
was
of these
resting.
planes.
Azalina
and flew them
was
responsible
responsible
for getting the guns.
The British called
Wallace
this
Shelley
plane
was
the
responsible
Dakota,
for orientation.
the Huaxia
and
called it the
Jiang Hai
Milo,
had to buy
and
clothes
the Europeans
and so
during
on.
the European
Keeping
War also
warm
called
is
it the
extremely
Albatross.
important at that time. More than
Fortunately,
80% of the
there is
planes
nothing
used
in this
the
world
United
that
States
can't be
airborne
done with
operations
money,
were this kind of
especially
plane.
when it comes
so
to
it was not an
clothes.
exaggeration
Jiang
to
Hai
say that
easily
this
bought
plane
the
changed
world's
the
best
course of
winter
World War
clothes
II.
through the American
During the
Express
United
Company.
States airborne
This winter
operations,
clothes was
and our
jointly
4D
developed by
plane
Huaxia
fell here.
and
There were a
Soviet
total
Russia.
of 9 people
Jiang
on the
Hai did
plane,
not know
but in
what
fact,
high-tech
all
material
9
was
of them
used,
were still alive.
but it could release the sweat
However,
inside
after
and keep the
3 of them
inside
found
dry.
this cave,
At the same
they
time,
wanted to go in alone
the wind
to take
and
a look.
cold from outside
Then they were killed.
could not enter
Of
at all.
course, this
Huaxia
incident was not
and
reported.
Soviet Russia's
Otherwise,
Antarctic
why would
Scientific
3
Research
people
Station
die
used it?
inexplicably
In addition to
when the
thin
pilot,
clothes
who was
made in the
severely
United
burned,
States,
and a
survived?
sweater inside?
Later,
It was
these
enough
people
to
relied
withstand the
on
Antarctic
2 cans
weather.
of peanut butter
People
hidden
like
by one of their
Jiang Hai,
comrades to
who
wait
lived
for
in
the
the
rescue
north,
team to
knew
arrive.
very well.
This cave
In
was
cold
then
weather,
discovered by the
it
Americans.
was useless to wear
However,
too many layers.
after the
because
Americans
too
went
many
in,
layers were too
they
thick.
found that it was actually
In
just
fact,
a military
it was not
base.
warm because your
There were
body
many empty
heat
buildings
could
and
not be
materials
transmitted
inside,
to that distance,
but no people.
Therefore,
It seemed that the
people
theory that
often
Hitler
wore extra
fled
layers,
here was
but
not
it was
correct.
still very cold
Later,
because the
they
outer
emptied
layer
the
of
research
clothes could not
materials
keep you
here
warm.
and started
You should
a
wear
cold war
warm
with the
clothes
Soviets.
inside.
That
and
was
then
how
wear a
things
down
unfolded.
jacket or mink
But
fur
this time,
outside.
it was
That would be
Jiang
quite
Hai
warm.
and the others
Therefore,
who came.
Jiang
Looking
Hai
at the
only
cave
bought
in
such
front of
clothes.
them,
Jiang
he bought a
Hai
total
and
of
the
8
others were not
sets.
in a hurry to go
Himself,
in because no one knew
Azalina,
what was going on inside.
Wallace Shelley,
Jiang Hai pulled Xiao Huang,
Bell Lester,
Xiao Bai,
and Connors Peterson,
who were clearly a little
total of
impatient,
6 people,
and exchanged
one
glances
each.
with Louis.
There were also
Quezada.
2 spare
The two of them were
sets,
not
one
in a
for
hurry
men
to go in,
and one for
Instead,
women.
they set up camp here.
If
He
there was
also bought
anything they
special
could
vests
talk about
for
it after
Goldie
tonight.
and Xiao Bai.
Since the cave was
These
right
two
in
dogs
front
would
of
also
them,
play an
Zhang
important
Hai
role
was
in the
not in a
future.
hurry.
After
and
his
Louis
clothes were
Quezada
delivered,
was
he
even
chartered a
less
plane
anxious.
and prepared to
Just
fly
like a few nights
directly
ago,
to
the
the
6
capital of
motorcycles
Argentina,
lined up in a row,
Buenos Aires,
blocking the middle.
Therefore, although Zhang Hai was responsible for a lot of things, in
Then,
fact, he was
Zhang
the
Hai
fastest
and the
to finish
others
the
went
battle.
asleep in
In
separate
2
tents.
days,
Although
although
Zhang
Zhang
Hai
Hai kept
on the
dreaming
morning
that
of the
night,
3rd day,
he was really
Wallace
curious
walked
about
out
this
of the
place,
room
with
but
some
he did not go in
positioning
alone.
equipment. The next
This was
morning,
considered to have
after
solved
Zhang
the
Hai
third
and
problem.
Louis Quezada
At night,
finished
packing
Azalina
up,
came
they
back
walked
with a
into the
box of
cave.
weapons.
This
These
cave
weapons
was
were
obviously
all made
dug
of
by
rubber.
humans, but
Of
it should have been
course,
here a long
they could be made
time
of other
ago.
things.
Jiang
but
Hai and the others were still
recognize
very
them.
orderly. However,
After all,
they felt
there were more
very
than one or
rubbery
two
to
people
the
who
touch.
knew about military
Jiang Hai
affairs
tested
here.
them.
The
The power of the
dogs,
weapons
Xiao
was
Huang
only
and
about
Xiao
half
Bai,
of the
took the
original.
lead.
The
The pistols
pistols
could
could
only
only
shoot
shoot
30 meters
away
and went into explore.
and the rifles had an
Jiang Hai was
effective
quite
range of
confident in
less
his
than
two
100
dogs.
meters.
With their level
However,
and
this was
strength,
not easy.
they were far
Bell
from
had
being
his
harmed
own
by
sniper
ordinary
rifle.
traps.
He had said
If there
this
were
before
any
he
accidents,
left, so
they could deal
Jiang
with
Hai
them
did not have
and
to
even
worry
wait
about
for
it.
Jiang Hai
Azalina was
and the
also
others to
happy to
arrive.
do so.
Even if they could
Otherwise,
not,
they
what
could
could she
still
find a
retreat.
sniper
This
rifle
was something that
made of
Jiang
such special
Hai
materials?
was very confident
That would be a
in.
little too
Then
much
came
for him to
Knurse
do.
and Peters,
Looking at
and
the equipment,
Isaac Williams.
Jiang Hai
The two of them
took
were
a
in front,
pistol, followed by
rifle,
Wallace Shelley
and his own
and
desert
Jitter
eagle.
Mod.
He thought
Jiang
for a
Hai
while,
and
Galena
took out the
and Bell
composite
were on the
bow he
left,
had bought a long
while
time
Louis
ago
Cazada
when he went into the mountains.
and Keys Leslie
This
were
thing
on
might
the
be
right.
useful in the
Azalina
future.
and
After everything
Cazada
was settled,
were at the end of the
Jiang
group,
Hai also
keeping an
told
eye
the
on the
current leaders
situation
of the family.
outside.
Namely,
Each of them had
Yun
two
Chin and
flashlights,
AI
one on top of their heads,
to pay attention to
and
the
one
wind
tied
and
to their
grass in the
They
vicinity.
illuminated the
He
dark
also
parts
told
of the cave,
Beliak,
making
Valentina,
it as bright
and
as
Alarcera.
day.
The further
three
they went,
people who stayed at
the
home,
deeper they felt
to remember
the
to
cave
protect
was.
them and run
I
away.
could see that the
if
Third Reich
anything
was
went
really
wrong.
powerful back
After the
then.
manor was gone,
If it had really
he could still
unified
rebuild
Europe
it.
and Soviet
But if they were
Russia,
gone,
the
Jiang Hai
situation
would
in the
feel
world would
heartache for a
probably
long
be
time.
completely
After
different
everyone
now.
had been warned,
Louis
Jiang
Cazada
Hai on the
also
fourth
looked at the
day,
wall
Bell
beside
Lester
him,
came back,
thinking about how
he seemed to be a
someone
little
could
weak.
dig.
It seemed that he
such a
did not
cave in
stay
the
at home
Antarctic 70 years
obediently
ago.
for the past
He felt
3
that it was a
days.
little
However,
unbelievable.
it did not matter.
At least
Jiang
Hai
Hai
did
for him
not
to
care about the
imagine.
shortcomings.
The problem
of his
is that he
subordinates.
lost.
Having
In
no
fact,
shortcomings,
there
was
is
the
nothing
most terrible
bad
thing.
about the current world.
After the 6 of them
right?
were equipped,
Hearing Louis Cazada's
Alarcera
words,
drove
Jiang Hai's
smiled.
MVP.
He did not
to the
care about
airport in
history.
Boston.
When
When
they
they
arrived
arrived
at
at
the
the
airport,
airport,
Empire
Jiang
was the
Hai
strongest, and the others
he only
boarded
cared
the
about
plane
himself.
through a special passage.
You could say that he was
Although the
selfish.
plane did not
You could say
belong
that
to
he
him.
was shameless.
He was the one who booked
and you
it.
could say that
However,
he was unpatriotic.
he was the one who booked
In
the
fact,
plane.
the
So there
only
was
person
nothing wrong
Jiang
with
Hai
bringing the
loved
dog and
was
weapons on the
himself.
plane.
Other
As for
than
Argentina,
there
the
were only
CIB
those
had
who
already
related to
informed
him.
them.
With
Beyond
command
these
from the
people,
command tower,
there would be
the
countries,
plane carrying
nations,
Jiang
and
Hai
so on.
and the others
These were the
also
life
flew
values
into the
of an
sky.
ordinary person.
At the same time,
you could not use
Alarcera
any moral
also
standards
followed
to kidnap
Jiang
him
Hai's
because he did
request.
not care about you
After
at
they
all.
took off,
He was no
he
longer
called
a hot-blooded
Louis Cazada.
17 or 18-year-old young man. The CIB
His
had to pick
blood
him
had
up in
long
Argentina
since
turned cold.
After confirming,
Well,
although I don't want to
drove
admit
back
it,
to
you are
Jiang Hai's
right.
manor.
Louis
At the same
Cazada
time,
said in a
he
low
also hung a
voice
do
as he
not
shrugged.
disturb sign at
Woof,
the door.
woof, woof,
These
woof.
days,
Jiang
at this
Hai was
moment,
not in the
a
manor.
few dog bars
Everything
came
in
from
the
afar.
manor had stopped
It was neither
operating,
fast nor
except
slow.
for selling beef
After hearing
and
it,
fish.
Jiang Hai
as
nodded
usual.
secretly. The manor did not accept any visitors. Those who came to visit at this time did not have good intentions.
Galena Vasilkaya
in fact,
would be number 3.
This was indeed the
Coniston
case.
Peters would be
Less than
number
half an
4,
hour after
and
Jiang
Wallace
Hai's
Shelley
plane flew,
would be number 5.
Many people
What?
already knew
Not
that
Jiang
Jiang
Hai
had gone to
Xiao
the
Bai
South
would be
Pole.
6th.
However,
Xiao Huang would be
these people
7th,
did not
and
act
Jiang Hai
rashly
would be 8th.
because Jiang Hai,
If Jiang Hai
knew
knew
what
what
they
they
were
were
thinking,
thinking,
he would
there was
probably
no
kill
signal.
them. But
Now,
because
he
Jiang
was
Hai
flying
was
the
rich,
sky.
Isaac
Now,
did not say
he was only going to
anything
Argentina
and just backed away.
If something
He
happened
also
to his
wanted to
house
see
at this
Jiang
time,
Hai lose
he could come
face.
back at any time.
However,
Valentina,
to his disappointment,
who was stationed at
when
the house,
Jiang Hai put his
also
hand on the
found that there were
stone,
many
he
people
could feel that
around
the
Jiang
inside of the
Hai's
stone was
in just a
rusted to
short
death.
time.
For
The
an
number
average
of people
person,
had almost doubled.
there was no way to move
These
it.
people included
Unfortunately,
Americans,
he was not an
Europeans,
average person.
blacks,
Gritting
and
his
of course,
teeth,
Asians.
Jiang
They could also
Hai's
be sure that
physical
these Asians
fitness,
came from at
which
least
was 8
3
times
countries,
that of an ordinary
Huaxia,
person's.
South Korea,
4th
and
in an
Japan.
instant. Jiang Hai's hand forcibly pushed the rusty mechanism.
Chapter
an inch
943.
further in. Then,
So this is
he exerted
Argentina.
more force after getting
And
off the
pushed it another
plane
inch.
and looking at the scenery
Even with this
outside.
last inch,
Jiang
he was
Hai
able to
let out a
force
long
open a
sigh
gap
and
in the
smile.
door in front of him.
Hearing
Although
Jiang
the gap
Hai's
wasn't
words,
big,
Azalina
it wasn't a problem
and the
for a
others
person
also
to walk
looked
in.
around.
Phew.
However,
Let's go.
They were not only
Looking at the
looking
door
at the
stuck
scenery,
there,
but
Jiang
also
Hai
looking for any
also let
threats.
go of his hand.
They were
and
actually
said
quite
with a sigh of
satisfied
relief.
with the climate here.
Seeing Jianghai
Argentina
open the
was
door
located
like
in the
this,
south of
Louis
South America,
Quezada,
and
the southern
others were
hemisphere
stunned.
was different from the northern hemisphere. The four seasons were exactly opposite. When it was autumn here, it was spring.
Chapter 9:53.
When it was winter in the
Who
northern
the hell?
hemisphere,
Born with
it was
divine
actually summer
strength.
here.
Looking
Although
at
Argentina
Jianghai
was
opening
quite
the
south
door,
in terms
Louis
of
Quezada
geographical
and the
location
others
and
were stunned.
latitude.
Among
The
them,
temperature here was quite
Habakkuk
good.
Hall looked at
Now,
Jianghai
and the
He didn't
others were in the
expect
capital of
Jianghai
Argentina
to
have
Buenos Aires.
such divine
The temperature
strength.
outside
Just
was
now,
about 24
they saw
degrees,
clearly that
which was the
Jianghai
most
didn't
comfortable
use any
temperature
tricks.
for people to stay
He just
in.
used his
It was
strength
okay to
push
wear a
the
thick
switch in.
short-sleeve shirt.
For them, a
How could
thin
this be
coat,
possible? It
or
was
sweater.
too cruel.
Looking at the
Hearing
minister
his words,
Jiang Hai just
International
smiled,
Airport in
then
front of
signaled the
them,
two dogs,
which was not
to go
much
in
worse
first.
than New York's airport.
After waiting for
this
a
airport
while,
name was a good way
after
to make
hearing
up a number
the
of
two
words,
dogs barking,
but unfortunately,
Jiang Hai
it was
and the
unlikely
others
that
also went
Jiang
in.
Hai would
After
say this
Jiang
airport
Hai
name
and the
many
others
times.
went in,
After the plane
Quezada
landed, and the
Jiang
others
Hai
immediately
and the
followed.
others got off the
But after
plane
entering
first.
the door,
Because
Jiang
there were
Hai
dogs
and the others
guns
couldn't
this
help
time,
but feel a
Jiang
little
Hai
disappointed.
and the others
because
could not
after
enter
walking
the
in,
airport
you will
through the
find
covered
that there is
bridge.
actually nothing.
They had to be led by someone.
This is just a very large hall.
These people
Very
had
large.
already arrived
In the
after they got off
entire
the plane.
hall. There are
Mr.
many
Jiang,
tables and chairs.
it must have been a long
but these
journey.
tables and chairs
My name
are now
is
frozen.
Jittered Maud,
Although there's a
and
lot
I
of dust
belong
on
to the
them.
Central
They're not
Intelligence
rotten.
Agency
In the middle of the
CIA.
hall, there's a
I'm
platform
here to pick you up.
that looks
Mr.
like a speech
Quezada
platform.
has already
On top of
prepared
it,
the hotel.
There's a red
and dinner.
reverse cross.
After
with black
Jiang
words,
Hai and the others got
representing
off
who
the
owns
plane,
this place.
a small airport
the
car
entire
drove
space
over
is
not
gray,
far away.
as if it
There was a
can't be
young woman
washed
in the
clean.
car.
Other
After
than
the car
that,
stopped in
there's
front of
nothing else
Jiang
here.
Hai.
It
and
really
the
looks
others.
very ordinary.
The young woman walked
Boss,
down and
there's
smiled
a distribution
at Jiang
map
Hai.
here.
At
Oh,
this time,
hello.
Belle looked
I thought
around in the
Quezada
distance,
will be waiting for us
then
here.
said to Jiang
Forget
Hai.
it, let's go.
Hearing
While
Belle's
talking,
words,
Jiang Hai looked at the
Hai
way.
and the
This
others
woman
looked
looked
at
to
each
be
other,
in her 20s.
then walked over.
She should
and
be
checked it.
Caucasian. The internal
She had
distribution map
well-defined
here
facial
is
features,
engraved on
dark
a
brown
huge
hair,
stone,
and a height
which will
of
not
about
be destroyed by the passage of
75
time.
meters.
The distribution
wearing
map
a
on the
woman's
stone
suit,
is very
and some
deep
indescribable
and obvious.
parts were
Jiang
extraordinarily
Hai and the
bulging.
others should be in the
She was
main
also
hall now.
wearing glasses.
In
on her
addition to the main
face.
hall,
What kind of
there's a
glasses
rest
lady
area,
is she?
living
She
area,
is really selling.
planting area.
It had to be admitted that
information
American
area,
agents were
and
also
military
very
area.
violent. Rather
But
than calling it an
unfortunately,
underground
Jiang
fortress,
Hai did not buy
it would be more appropriate
After
to
hearing
call
the
it an
woman's
underground
words,
city.
Jiang
Back
Hai
then,
and the
when the
others
Germans
also
built
took out
this
their
place,
It
looking
seemed like
at
they were
Jiang
really
Hai's
going to
things
use it
and the
as a
two
place to
dogs,
live. The woman
not only were there
named
troops stationed
Jittered
here,
Maud,
but there were
naturally knew
also
something.
civilians
With a
and
wave of her
scientists.
hand,
It
two
seemed like the
airport
chancellor
cars in the
was
distance had
really
already
going to
been
move
driven
the
over.
elites of the Third Reich here.
There's
After
almost
placing their
no
things,
important information
Jiang
here.
Hai and
Basically,
the others also got
all
in
the
car
important
and went
information has been
outside.
taken away
Using
by
a
the
special
Federation.
passage.
Looking at
Jiang
the
Hai
map,
and
Louis
the others got
Quezada
out of Ethiopia
said
to Jiang
well, let's
Hai.
not talk about the
Indeed,
airport's name.
there is no
Anyway, they got
information
out
on
of
this
this
map.
map.
Outside
Whether it was
the
about
airport,
weapons,
there were already
or
two
people's
cars
livelihood,
waiting for a
the
long
Americans
time.
would not
One of them
stay.
was a luxurious
Let's go take a look.
minibus, however,
which was for Jiang
it was a
Hai's
pity
dogs
that
and
Jiang Hai
subordinates.
didn't want weapons.
The other was a Lincoln
nor
limousine,
did he want people's
which was for
livelihood.
Jiang Hai.
What he wanted was
After putting their
information
things
about the
away,
totem.
Jiang
If they didn't
Hai
have it here,
and
then
Azalina
it would be
got in the
troublesome
Lincoln
for him
limousine
to get it from
As
the
for the
United
others, they
States.
sat in the minibus. After everyone was seated, Jittered Maud
What they wanted
also
was
said
most
something to
likely
the headset,
Jiang Hai's
and the
farming
car
methods.
slowly started.
At that time,
After leaving the airport,
he would have no
Jittered
choice
Maud
but to give up.
also introduced
After preparing
the
for the
situation
worst,
of Argentina.
Jiang Hai's
to
first
Jiang
step
Hai.
was to go to the
As
reference
everyone
room.
knew,
According to what
in
was written
Argentina,
on the map,
samba
the
and
reference
football
room
was
were the
behind
two
the
most
plantation
important
area.
things.
To go to the reference
However,
room,
not
they
many
must
people
first go
knew
to
that
the
they were an
plantation
agricultural
area.
country.
Jiang Hai
In the world,
and the others
Argentina's
walked
beef
towards the
breeding
plantation
might
area
be second
first.
only
After
to the
passing
United
through a
States
gate in
and
a long
Huaxia.
corridor,
And
the
even some
plantation
countries
area
in Europe
appeared
were
in
far
front of
behind.
Jiang Hai
Because there was
Looking
no
at the plantation
rainforest
area
like
in
the
Amazon
Amazon
in the region,
Jiang Hai
the public
and the
security
others
couldn't
was
help
slightly
but
better
feel a
than
little
places
surprised.
like Brazil.
This was because
political
the plantation
system
area
was
was
really
the Federal
big.
Republic,
At a glance,
which was somewhat
wasn't
similar
small
to
at
the
all.
United States.
Most importantly,
the full name of the United
this was
States
only one
was the
plantation
United
area.
Kingdom of America.
According to the
and
map,
each state
there were
was
almost
an
20
independent
such plantation
in
areas.
Argentina.
According
The
to
situation
Jiang
was
Hai's
somewhat
estimation,
similar.
this
but
place
not
was about
completely the
500
same as
acres,
the United States,
which was about 2
Argentina
square kilometers in
was a
size.
presidential federal
20 of
republic
them would be
made
40
up of
square
23
kilometers in
provinces
size.
and the federal
He had to
capital.
admit that
It was
these
the
Germans
third largest
were really
economy
powerful.
in Latin America.
They could actually make so
the
much
first was
space
Brazil,
in the
the
ice
second
and
was
snow of
Mexico,
Antarctica.
and the
In
third
fact,
was Argentina.
70 years later,
Buenos Aires
this would also
definitely
played a
be
very
a
important
huge
role
project
in South America.
But 70 years ago,
in Argentina,
the Germans,
unlike some
quietly
big
made
countries,
such a thing.
the capital
It
was really
not
terrifying.
necessarily the largest.
The soil
or
here
the
is
best
so
city.
fertile.
For example, in the
Knurson
United
Peters,
States,
the
who
best
had been
was New
following
York,
Harriman
development fells in Los Angeles and Washington squatted down and was not on a handful of soil. However, he couldn't help for a developing country like Argentina. This was underground. The capital not was above definitely ground. The best. So although the temperature was low, it wasn't as low as above ground. And even in the early water vapor didn't completely. It was the best place in the whole Huaxia. Although he didn't know where the soil came from, it was the capital of the country. And the face of the country must be done in the soil in Shanghai's hometown in the country. However, the soil here could be kneaded into a ball, been developing very fast recently. Moreover, it was not like the housing prices. This was soil. One could see that although the capital was still the best city, this was completely different from yellow soil. Over there, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, this was the most suitable black soil Hangzhou for farming, and other cities. This soil has been untouched for more than 70 years. The current Argentina could be strange if it wasn't compared to Huaxia. Hearing
Only the
St.
capital
Peter's
was the most beautiful
Luis
place in
Quezada
Argentina.
also looked at the
There were
soil
more than
and
80,000
said with a
industries
smile,
and enterprises
then
in the city,
Shanghai
and the
others
total
no
industrial
longer bothered
output
about the
accounted
soil
for
problem
two-thirds of
and
Argentina's
continued to
national
walk
output.
inside.
They had to admit that the Germans
It could be said
were
that, like
really
South
creative.
Korea,
More
the
than
planning
half of
areas
the more
later
than
were
43
actually
million
different.
people in
Some
Argentina
were smaller
relied on
and were surrounded
Buenos
one
Aires
by
for
one.
livelihood.
They should be
In
used
fact,
to raise
Buenos
chickens
Aires was
or
just a
pigs.
small city.
There were also
when it
some
first
puddles
became
that should be
independent.
used to raise
But since
fish.
the implementation
As
of
for the land that
Europeanization
Shanghai
and
saw at the
modernization
beginning,
policies,
it should
a
be
large
used to
number
grow
of
wheat.
Italian and
It was
Spanish
known that
immigrants
foreigners
had
liked
poured
to
in
eat
here,
bread,
which has played
and
a
not
very
rice.
important role
So their
in
main
the
food
development
source
of
was
the place.
wheat.
After
While
walking
introducing the
through
street
these
scene to
planting areas,
Jiang
Jittered
Hai
Modiai
and the
explained
others
to
came to the
Jiang Hai,
reference room.
"There are a
from
lot of
afar.
Italians here. This used to be a Spanish colony. I know
But when
this,
he
so
walked in,
it's not
he
surprising
found that
the place
there are
was
Spaniards
much
here.
messier
But what the hell is
than
Italy?
the outside.
Are they
There
here
were
to
dust
start a gray gang?
and smashed tables
Hearing Jittered
and
Maud's
chairs
words,
everywhere.
Jiang Hai
There were also
asked
a
with
lot
some
of papers
doubts,
on the ground,
then laughed.
It was a mess.
Indeed,
because when
Italy
the
left a
Americans
lot of
found
symbols and
this
business cards.
February was almost over.
For example,
They had to rush
Rome,
back
the
before
Vatican,
February
the
to
Mafia,
transport the
the
important
Soccer
things
World
here.
Cup.
The reference
fashion
room
capital
was
of Milan,
naturally the most
and
important. Their army
so
was very
they took the most
useless.
important materials
Ahem.
and
This was
left
also
in a
something
panic.
that Jiang
Some of the
Hai
less
thought
important
of when he
materials
thought of
were
Hitler.
scattered here.
You guessed one
For
third
them,
of it right. These things
After
were
those
nothing.
people came,
After
they
Jiang
did
Hai
come to
walked
clean
into
up
the
the
dark
room.
forces here.
He picked up a
but in
piece of
addition,
paper
they
and
also took
patted
a
off the
fancy
dust
to
on
some
it.
of the prostitution
Jiang Hai looked at
business
it
here.
carefully.
For
As
example,
a result,
the Boca
after
district
reading a
here
few
is where
lines,
these people
he
gather.
threw the paper away.
It is full of
It turned out to be a
brothels
poem,
and smokehouses,
a poem praising
and more than
Hitler
90%
and
of
the
them are
Jiang Hai
opened
had
by
nothing to
Italian
say about
Genoese.
it.
He was not here
Hearing
to look
Jiang
for this
Hai's
thing.
words,
Mr. Jiang,
Maud
what are you
shrugged.
looking for?
Under the
Do you need our
surface
help?
of any
Seeing
city,
Jiang Hai
there were
bend
undercurrents
down and pick up a
surging,
piece of paper
especially
again.
in a country
Luis
like
Quezada
Argentina,
couldn't
there
help
were definitely
but
a
ask
lot of people
Jiang
eyeing
Hai
him.
with a smile.
Some dark forces
However,
were not something
Jiang
that
Hai shook his
Argentina
head.
could deal
What a
with.
joke. In
How could he
South
tell him
America,
what he wanted?
the main
So he
situation
flatly
was like
refused,
this, which was a
seeing
bit
that
ironic.
Jiang Hai didn't
There were
want to talk
many
to him.
special organizations.
Luis Quezada
not
just
shrugged his
organizations,
shoulders,
but also some
indifferently.
countries behind
Since
them.
Jiang Hai
So
had already
Argentina
decided,
could
then
not
he might
afford
as
to
well
offend
listen
them
to
at all.
him. Then
These
he took his
organizations
people
did
and
not
casually
leave their
browsed through the
areas,
information,
which was
in
a
the room.
tacit
At the same
understanding
time,
between the two
he
sides.
couldn't help but sigh.
The CIA
Germany
had a
was
lot
still
of
very
influence
powerful
in
in
the
the
past.
States.
So
if it
in
wasn't for them
Argentina,
seeking
which
death,
was close to the
then
United
perhaps
States,
the situation
was
in the world
naturally
would be
very
different
important.
now.
Some
In fact,
patrolling police
if one wasn't in the
cars
position,
even took the
one
initiative
shouldn't
to
meddle
meddle
in
in
politics.
For Jiang
Looking
Hai
at it now,
and the others on
the
the road.
biggest problem with
If you're not in a
Germany's
hurry to
strategy
leave,
was that they
you can
didn't
have fun here
destroy
for a
the
few
United
days.
Kingdom.
There's
and
still many
unified
interesting
Europe
places
first.
in Buenos
Instead,
Aires.
they went to
The
attack
operas and
Russia.
ballets in the
After
Teatro
all,
Colombo
there were two
are
very
very
interesting.
interesting.
So
The
the
San
initial
Martin
advertisement
quickly defeated.
commemorates the
The logistics
Independence War
couldn't
here.
keep up.
There is
and the
also
rhythm
the
couldn't be
obelisk,
set.
the
This
9th of
slowly
July
became
Street,
troublesome,
which is currently
but
the
in fact,
widest street
there were
in the
also
world,
scholars who
with
said
a
that
width
Germany
of
had no
140
choice
meters.
but to do
It is
so.
also named
After
in
the
honor
end
of
of World
Argentina's
War I,
independence on
Germany's
July 9th,
economy had
1810.
already been destroyed by
There's
Europe.
also the Congress
After Hitler
building
came to
and the
power,
Congress Square. Although the economy
After
recovered
introducing
a
the
little,
places to
the
pay
nature of the
attention
people
to
was
still
Jittered
very
Maud
bad.
continued
They needed
with
to
the
occupy
introduction of
more
the city.
land and more living space.
There is also the Tango
national
Street,
pride,
the Plaza de
strong
Mayo,
combat
the
power.
Rose Palace.
As the saying went,
Buenos
it was
Aires
just drawing
is
a
quite
big
fun
picture
here.
to make the people
Seeing
proud
that Jiang Hai
and
didn't
stimulate
speak,
their combat
she also
power.
didn't stop. That was all.
She kept talking
when they
to
attacked
Jiang
Europe,
Hai
they
about
actually
the
did
local
well
customs
in
and
the
customs of the area.
But when they attacked the
And
United
Jiang
Kingdom,
Hai also
there were
kept
some
listening.
problems. One
At that
introduced,
time,
and the
the
other
world's
listened.
strongest
Not
country
long after,
was not so
the two
easy
cars
to
arrived
defeat.
at a famous
The United
hotel
Kingdom
in Buenos
was an
Aires.
island country.
Jiang Hai could
Yes,
not tell
it was
what
not
it was called
connected
because
to
it
the
was in
European
Spanish.
continent.
If they wanted
Spanish
to
was
attack
similar
the
to
United Kingdom,
Portuguese,
they would need
but
to
it was
cross
different
the
from
sea.
English.
Therefore, Jiang Hai really could not recognize it.
However,
he only knew that
Germany's
the hotel
army
looked good.
was invincible.
It was more than 30
How could their
stories
navy
high,
compete with
and
the
behind
United
it was the
Kingdom,
La
the
Plata
world's
River.
#1 country?
In front of it was a green
So,
park
After the evacuation of Dunkirk, Germany was actually unable
after
to
Zhang
attack
Hai
the
and the
Kingdom.
others got out of
The
the car
bombing
with
of
their
London
things,
was just
Louis
for show,
Casado,
to
dispel
admit
their
Zhang Hai's
feelings of
resistance,
resistance,
came out of the
as
lobby
long as
with
the
a
British
smile
did
on his
not
face.
surrender.
In the CIA,
The Germans could not do
he
much.
was definitely a big
However,
shot with real
the domestic
power,
economy
but unfortunately
needed to be
he was nothing in
stimulated
front
by
of
continuous
Zhang Hai
victories
in the United States.
Therefore, the
rich
Germans
were the
had
first
no
class,
choice but to give up on the
and
British.
these
and turn
officials
to
did
attack
not
Soviet
dare
Russia.
to provoke the rich.
However, there was
Soviet
an old
Russia
saying in
was bitterly
Huaxia:
cold.
the poor
During
do
the
not
summer,
fight with the
everything
rich,
would be fine,
and the rich
but
do
it would
not
be over in the
fight
winter.
with the officials.
At that time,
But in the United
Germany's
States,
main tactic
the
was
poor
not
do
to
not
push,
fight
but
with
to
the
use
rich,
blitzkrieg
and the officials do
mechanized
not
troops
fight
to push
with
the
the
rich.
rich.
But once
Wealth
it was
was
winter,
the first standard
the
to
petrol
measure
would
a person's
freeze,
social status,
and tanks would need
not
a
how much
few
power
hours
you
to
had.
move.
Of course,
Under such circumstances,
when the officials were at their limits,
a bicycle
the rich
or a
had to be
horse could
humble.
run
For
dozens
example,
of times faster
the
than
president
the Secretary of State. So,
the Secretary
when winter
of Defense,
came, Germany
the
director
was
of
at
the
a
Tax
loss.
Bureau. Originally,
So on.
Operation
Jiang Hai
Typhoon
was also
going
afraid,
well,
but a small
they
figure with
occupied
real
a lot of
power in the
territory,
CIA,
but they were
did not
blocked
dare
by
to
the
show
cold
off in
and
front
could
of
not
Jiang
advance. So, the problem of attacking the United Kingdom came again. If there was
Chapter
no way to
944.
win, then there was
Mr.
no
Jiang,
way to
you're finally
stimulate
here.
the
Looking at
enthusiasm
Jiang Hai,
of the people.
Louis
And there was
Quezada
no
said
way
with a
to
smile.
prevent the
He
economy
had to admit
from
that
collapsing.
these people were quite
Therefore, they
sincere.
could only open up
When
a
he first
third
met
round.
Jiang Hai,
These were all
he could not
things that they
speak
had
Chinese.
no choice but
Now,
to do.
he could already
Back
say
then,
hello to
Germany
Jiang
was
Hai
more
in
like the
rough
ancient
Mandarin,
nomads,
which really
they had to
piqued
use
Jiang
war
Hai's
to
interest.
support war.
You know,
Once
our
they
Huasia's
failed, they
New
would be
Year
finished.
is very important.
This was also the main
After
reason
shaking
for their
hands with
failure.
him,
Of
Jiang
course,
Hai said
Italy
with a
was
smile.
weak.
Hearing
Japan
Jiang
did
Hai's
not
words,
restrain the Soviet
Louis
Union.
Quezada
Instead,
also smiled
they provoked
and did
the
not
United
say
States.
anything.
When
Instead,
all these
he walked
factors
directly
were
into the
added
hotel
together,
with
it led to
Jiang
the
Hai
destruction of the
and
Third
booked a room
Reich.
first. Maybe it was because the information was sold for $10 million last time. This time, he did
Chapter
not ask
954.
Jiang Hai to take the money.
How Germany lost
Instead,
had nothing
he had
to
already
do
booked
with
two
Jiang
suites.
Hai.
What
One
he
was
was
the
most
presidential
concerned about
suite
now
for
was
Jiang
the thing
Hai.
he was looking for,
and the other was an
Jiang
ordinary
Hai
suite
picked
for
up
Jiang
every
Hai
piece of paper on the
subordinates.
ground,
Of course,
and flipped through them.
Jiang
casually.
Hai subordinates
Perhaps
were
they saw
only
what
Knurse and
Jiang Hai
Peters
was
and
doing,
Bell
but the
Lester.
people around him,
After putting the
also
things
moved.
in the room,
Knurse and
Ollie,
Peters,
Sarah,
and
Azalina,
Wallace Shelley
and Wallace
deliberately
Shelley
stayed in the
also
room.
picked up the papers.
Firstly, only
They
Bell
wanted to
Lester and
remove the
Galena were
bugs
still
and the
guarding
like.
against the CIA
Secondly,
people.
they wanted to keep
It
an
was
eye
said
on
that
these
many
things.
hands made
They didn't
light
feel
work.
at ease leaving
Not
the
long
room
after,
empty.
Jiang
If
Hai
these
had about
CIB
100
people
pieces of paper
did
in his
something to
hands.
their weapons,
Jiang
their
Hai looked through them one
clothes,
by one.
it would be
The
troublesome.
more he looked,
Louis
the more
Quezada
disappointed
did not
he
care
became.
about this.
However,
He
his
specially
hope
ordered
also grew
food to be delivered
This was
to
because the
Jiang
hundreds
Hai's
of pieces of paper
Then,
were basically
Jiang Hai
poems,
took Bell
records
Lester,
of local
Azalina,
customs, or some interesting
and Knurse and
stories.
Peters to the
Jiang
banquet
Hai
hall
was
that
very
Louis
sure that there was
Quezada
no
had already
dragon in
prepared.
Huaxia.
As for Goldie and Xiao
Now,
Bai,
the
there were
interesting
also
stories
lying
written
in
on the
Jiang
papers
Hai's room.
might
Outside,
contain records
they
of
only
the
ate what
existence
Jiang Hai
of
fed
the
them.
dragon-shaped
Azalina's
badge.
food
After
was
all,
not good.
there were even
Jiang Hai
records
also
of
specially brought them
10,000
some
dried
dried
beef,
beef,
which was the
This was their
10,000
ration.
characters
Regardless
that
of the people in the
spoke of.
room,
Jiang
Therefore,
Hai and the
although
others
these
went to
pieces
the
of paper
restaurant
were wrong,
downstairs and
Jiang
sat
Hai
down.
did not care.
Jiang Hai had
and
4
continued
people
to
on his
flip through
side.
them.
Jiang
Soon,
Hai, they found that in addition to some pieces of paper that had fallen,
on the CIB
there were
side,
still some documents
there were 5
left
people.
in some cabinets.
As Louis Quezada
in the middle
said,
of these documents,
they would bring a
Jiang
5-person
Hai's
team this time.
eyes suddenly
In addition to
widened.
him,
He
Jittered
felt that he
Mode,
had found something.
whom Jiang Hai
Jiang
met
Hai didn't
today,
know what was written
was also
on this
one of
piece
them.
of paper.
According to
because it
Louis
was written in
Quezada's
German.
introduction.
However,
This person
Jiang
was from the
Hai
CIB
recognized the
in
dragon
Buenos
emblem
Aires,
printed on this
Argentina.
piece of paper.
She was a local tyrant.
It seems
in
that this
area.
thing was
This
most
time,
likely
they
an
were going to the
introduction
South
to this
Pole.
thing.
So
Therefore,
naturally,
Jiang
would
Hai
follow them.
gestured to Azalina
In addition to her,
and Wallace
there were
Shelley,
3 other men
who were still searching.
However,
the two
these
also
3 men
understood
were obviously
Jiang
combat
Hai's
personnel,
gesture.
not
When they
special
quietly
agents.
reported to Jiang
This was because
Hai,
they all looked
they saw the
very
paper
tough.
in Jiang
Of course,
Hai's hand.
special
At the
agents
same time,
did not have
Jiang
to look
Hai
like
also pointed to the
007.
badge. In fact,
After knowing
they
their
could
goal
not
this
be
time,
special agents.
the
if
two
they
of them
looked
were
like
more
that.
purposeful.
Special
in their
agents were
search.
also divided
As for
into
Jiang
headquarters.
Hai, special
he quietly
agents,
called
technical
Goldie
special
over
agents,
and stuffed the
field
paper
special
into his winter
agents,
clothes,
and so on.
Then, most of
He
the agents
pretended
on
to
duty
continue his
looked
search.
quite ordinary.
To be honest,
just like
although
Louis
Louis
Quezada, people
was
would
curious
subconsciously
about what
ignore
Jiang Hai
his
was looking
appearance.
for.
To be honest, he had already seen the things
If it weren't
here.
for Jiang
What was written on the
Hai's
paper were
photographic
some
memory,
geographical
he wouldn't have been able
records,
to remember
some
what
imagination
Louis
of the
Quezada
people of
looked
the
like.
Third Reich.
As for
or some
Jittered
poems
Mode,
that praised
because
him.
she was in the public
to be
relations
honest,
department,
if some writers
did
or
not matter
geographers
if
were
she
to get
looked
their hands
beautiful.
on this information,
As for these
they
3
might be
people,
very happy.
They were purely
However,
assassins.
as an agent,
their main
and
role was
soldier,
to fight.
Louis
They were
Quezada
basically
was
selected
quite
from special
disdainful
forces
things.
or the
In
Delta
his
Force.
opinion,
Their
these
combat
things were just the
effectiveness was quite
imagination of the
strong.
people from the
According
empire
to Louis
who were sucking
Quezada,
up to them.
among
There was
the
no
3 of
basis
them,
for any
one of them was
reality
a
at all.
bearded man.
Most of the
named
things were
Habakkuk
nonsense.
Hall,
who was
Therefore,
mainly
he
responsible
felt a
for
little
the ambush.
speechless that
Another
Jiang
one was
Hai
named
was
Keys
interested in these
Leslie,
things.
who was a sniper like Bell, and the last one was named
named
However,
Isaac Williams.
this did not prevent him from bringing
Thus,
Jiang Hai
a
here.
small team of the
We're
enemy
almost
was
done.
formed. Basically,
Louis
we can't find
Quezada
it. Was the commander.
After searching here for
but he was
about
also
3
a jack
hours,
of all trades.
Jiang Hai and
He filled the other
temporarily
positions.
stopped.
As
After
for the
Azelina
remaining 4
gestured
people,
as 6 to
some were
Jiang Hai,
responsible for
she
attacking.
whispered to Jiang
Some were
Hai.
responsible for
Wallace
scouting.
Shelley also
and
gestured
some were
an
responsible
8,
for sniping,
which meant that they had found
Needless to
14
say,
things
Jittered
related to the
Mode
Dragon
was
Badge.
responsible for
Of course,
intelligence
it was
and
impossible for
positioning.
all of them
It
to
was
be
the same
related
as
to the Dragon
Jiang
Badge.
Hai's team.
Many of
which was
them were
China's
related
Liz
to the
Shelley.
page number.
After
which was
everyone
the
introduced
context of the
themselves,
Dragon Badge
they
pattern.
sat down
Jiang
in a
Hai
clear
also
and
found
distinct
6,
manner,
which added up
not
to
long
more than
after
20.
the
Phew,
dishes he
it's almost
ordered
time for
were all
lunch.
brought to the
There's a
table.
lot of dust here.
Argentina
Should we
was
go
a
out
famous
and
beef
eat or
producer
go
in
inside?
the world.
So
After
the dishes
thinking
here
about
were
it,
basically
Jiang Hai
all
felt
meat.
that translating
Of
these
course,
things
the
first
beef
was
here
the
is
right
also
thing
very
to do.
cheap.
So after hesitating, the people in Argentina were different from the people in Brazil. Quezada smiled. Although the GDP in Brazil was high, it was easy to be chaotic. To be honest, therefore, if one went to the streets to look, most people now that he could leave. On the other hand, he was still very happy. The people in Argentina, therefore, under the signal of everyone, compared to Maradona, walked outside. One would know what the people when they came looked like. They had to be careful. Meat burritos. When they went back, tenderloin ribs, they knew that it was South American barbecue, so they were faster. There were more than after more than an hour. They returned to the place where they set up camp. There was only one vegetarian dish. The two sides calmly separated. That was all. However, and the others returned to their tents. Being able to eat meat, and so did the CIB people. But not long after the dishes were served, he did not stand on ceremony. He directly sat there and began to eat with a knife in his left hand to prepare dinner, fork in his right hand. Only Jiang Hai and Wallace Shelley were left in the tent. Quezada, of course, and the others. There's also Goldie. Those papers were hidden on his body. No one there dared to stop. What do you think Jiang Hai got? It was not popular for foreigners to talk about frowned as he looked at Jiang Hai. So Jiang Hai ate very happily, looking at Jiang Hai's actions now. When he was almost done, he was sure that Jiang Hai drank a glass of fruit wine. But what did he get? I've been recording their movements the entire time. Mr. Jiang, but I didn't notice them taking anything from inside. Seeing Jiang Hai place his knife and Peters once horizontally on a handful of soil. Louis Quezada could it be that they came for the soil? Where do you want to go? Hearing Louis Quezada's after placing the knife, jittered Maud asked Jiang Hai also looked at him with she also didn't quite understand. There was a reason why he placed the knife and fork in possible. Louis Quezada squinted his eyes. Western food was very particular in his opinion. Placing the knife. Jiang Hai's business was the knife and fork were placed in the middle of the plate. And if the cattle want to grow, but they were like the character, they naturally not need touching each other. Grass. This meant that one Jiang Hai made a lot of money by selling. Wanted to take a break. And since if the knife and fork were placed in the middle of the plate in the shape of a cross, Jiang Hai was basically what the person who ordered the set would do. Now that he this meant that they had already could it be that the soil here has some kind of magical effect? If the knife and fork were placed in the middle of the plate in the shape of a pair of chopsticks, in a deep voice, it meant that they had Jiang Hai still goes in to be cleaned up. If he still goes in, the knife and fork were placed in the shape of a triangle. It meant that they had received a good review. If the knife and fork were placed together in the shape of a triangle, then we'll pass this news back to our research institute. It meant that they had received a bad and wait for our research institute to come. No waiter would come over to ask for a tip. This soil is likely to be Jiang Hai's secret. When Jiang Hai although Jiang Hai didn't know, he did not understand. Were studying now he basically understood. He was tonight's dishes were all meat, studying him, and Jiang Hai liked it very much. Inside the tent, he belonged to the type of person who would feel uncomfortable if he did not eat meat, and then rearrange. If there was a lot of meat for him to eat, then he would after eat very happily. They entered them into the microcomputer. I don't know how long Mr. Jiang will be staying here. Soon, it's up to you to decide. A paragraph of text was translated when he heard Jiang Hai's words. Although some sentences were not said to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai could probably understand. They came here to accompany. The person who wrote this was called Bruno Berg. After thinking for a while, this person was actually quite famous in Germany to Louis Quezada. He was once a famous anthropologist. Then let's leave the day after tomorrow. And his most famous action was to go to the Tibetan area. If he had nothing to do, it would not matter if he stayed to look for the legendary Shambhala cave. Now that he also called the Earth's axis, Jiang Hai still missed it in space. If he really wanted to have fun, this thing was it would not matter if he stayed here. In 1938, after he came Germany had sent people. He had to hurry up when he left, but they didn't find. Then I'll take you around here tomorrow. In 1941, we could go to the Boca district. 500,000 people. When he heard Jiang Hai say that they would leave the day after 2,500 artillery on the Louis Quezada also said with the originally good situation that this guy was a qualified politician. Under such circumstances, he always had a smile on his face. The leader of the SS and gave Jiang Hai some advice. Remember the legend about the Earth's axis? And hoped to return time to 1939. Hearing his words, so that Germany could correct the mistakes they made, jittered start the war again. Who just told him not to go there. So in 1943, why does everyone in the CIB plan again and went to the Tibetan area of that place, Kof, is not suitable for women to go there. Seeing this, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed. It doesn't matter if although his common sense told him that these things were nonsense, only we can go there. He still suppressed his temper. Louis Quezada looked at Jiang Hai. The information they found was not so much information, but rather a diary. Upon hearing the information reported by Bruno Berg, couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. It recorded in detail that after they arrived in the Tibetan area, as for the three CIB people, the ruler of the Tibetan area, they showed a very and obtained their help to go to the snowy mountain in the Tibetan area to look for the Shambhala cave. He was also very curious. There was some discrepancy. Only Knurse and Peters did not do anything to find it because he might be a little slow in this regard. Entered the cave. But after entering, they found that the cave had a huge amount of space. Don't we have to worry about the Italian greyhound there? It was far from what ordinary people knocked on the table. So after listening to Louis Quezada's words, looking at the above, he also wanted to go there. Jiang Hai couldn't help but ponder. He did not want to cause any trouble. He was thinking about the authenticity of he was going to Antarctica the day. It was reasonable to say if he caused any trouble like this, it would affect should have been seen by the Gaines would not make up for the losses. then
so
the
he felt
question
it was
is,
better to
since
ask
the Americans
clearly.
already saw
Gray
it,
hand?
why didn't they take it away?
Maybe jittered,
but
and
instead
the others
threw it
were
away
afraid
like
now.
a piece of
After
garbage.
all,
they're just a branch. But with me and you here, it
Don't
would be
say that the
strange
Americans
if those gray
don't
hands
believe
dare
in
to
this.
jump around.
In fact,
they
those
believe
Italian
in these
gray
things very
hands,
much.
to put it bluntly,
for example,
were just some
the
organized gray
51st
hands.
district of the
Even
United
if these
States.
people were given 100
But why didn't they
guts,
take it away?
they would not
There was
dare
only
to
one
compete with
possibility.
the CIB,
That is, they didn't
which
believe
represented
in the
the
dignity
saying,
of the United
or they
States.
already found it.
It
But
was good
also
enough that the
useless.
CIB,
no matter
did
which
not
one
come
it
to
was,
trouble these people.
Jiang Hai
How dare they
felt
come
a
to
little
trouble them?
flustered.
As a person
But looking
with
at the
real
written
power,
information,
Louis
even the
Quezada
coordinates were
was
very
not to be
detailed.
trifled with.
It didn't seem
Okay,
like
then let's go and have a
nonsense.
look.
This made
Since it was
Jiang Hai
determined
somewhat
that there
at a
would be no
loss.
danger,
Boss,
Jiang Hai
are we going to the
also
Tibetan
raised his
area?
eyebrows and
Looking
said,
at Jiang Hai's
hearing Jiang
somewhat
Hai say
bewildered
that they could
appearance,
go,
the
while
others
Shelley
naturally
hesitated
did
for a
not
moment,
care.
and
After
asked Jiang
Azalina
Hai,
rolled her eyes
hearing
at
her
Jiang
words,
Hai,
Jiang Hai
she went
thought
back
for a
to her
moment
room.
and shook
That
his
kind of
head.
place was not
Don't
something
worry
she
for the
could
time
go
being.
to.
We'll
It would
talk
be
about
quite
it when we
boring
have
for her to
time.
go there.
Anyway,
And it would be
we know
easy
where this
to
dragon
cause
badge
trouble.
came from.
Therefore,
so there's no need
he
to
decided
worry.
to let Jiang
Looking
Hai
at the very
and the
clear
others play.
coordinates written
With
on
Louis
the information,
Quezada there,
there
Jiang
shouldn't be any
Hai
problems.
tore the information in half and threw it into the alcohol stove in the tent.
Chapter
in any
9,
case, this time their goal
the
was
Boca
achieved.
district, or
Now it's time to
Boca,
see if
as it was
Jiang
known
Hai
locally,
really wants
was
to
the
see
old
it.
port and
But
neighborhood
even if he
of
wants to
Buenos
see it,
Aires.
the
Now
most famous
is not
three
the
places
time.
were Tango Street, Bar and Coffee Street, and Boca Juniors, an Argentinian football club established in 1905.
Chapter 9:55.
Yes, most people who
Now
watched
that he had
football
made up his
matches
mind,
knew about this.
things
team.
were much
It was a
easier
strong
to handle.
team in South
The next
America.
morning,
After
Jiang
Jiang
Hai
Hai
and the others,
and the
went
others
in again,
had eaten,
mainly to
they
find if there
drove
was any
2
missing
MPVs
information.
to the district.
After confirming
as soon
that
as
there
they
was
walked
no
in,
missing
the
information,
first thing they saw
Jiang
were the colorful
Hai
houses.
and the others returned.
To be honest,
Louis
it was
Quezada
very
and
difficult
the others
to
also
see
obtained
such
some
colorful
soil
houses.
Jiang
If they
Hai
came
was
in the
very
day,
puzzled.
they would
What do they want
probably
to do
look
with
even
this?
better.
However,
Louis
since
Quezada
they wanted
also
it,
explained to
Jiang Hai
Jiang
cannot
Hai
say
the reason
much.
why this place
After
had
everything
become
was
like this.
prepared,
In the
Jiang
beginning,
Hai
this
and
area
the
was
others
actually
left the
prepared
cave
on
for
the third
dock
day
workers and
and returned to the
sailors.
scientific
Most of the
research
workers came
station.
from Spain,
On the way back,
Italy, and
Jiang
other
Hai
countries.
and the others
This
took
could be
5
seen
days.
from the European style
This was not an
houses
accident,
they built,
but purely
in the
because
beginning,
of the wind
in order
direction.
to save money.
The difference between the southern hemisphere and the northern
paint couldn't be
hemisphere
allowed to fall
was that the
off
southern
and
wind
expose
was
the
warm,
metal inside,
while the northern wind
Otherwise,
was warm.
it would be
in the
corroded
southern
by the
hemisphere.
seawater.
This was because
Therefore,
north
no
of
matter
them
if the
was
ship
the
was
equator,
used or not,
which was the
it had to be
warmest place
painted
in the world.
every few
It was
months
summer
to
in
make it
Antarctica,
usable.
which
This
meant
was
that the
especially
southern
true
wind was
in the
blowing.
early 20th
Although
century.
it was still very
However,
cold,
things
minus
like
20
paint had to be
30
bought.
degrees Celsius,
It was impossible
it was
to buy
still
all of
very
it.
cold.
Therefore,
When Jiang
the dock
Hai
workers and
the
sailors
others
would bring
came,
the leftover
the
paint
wind
back
was with
home
them
and
so
painted on their
naturally
houses
they
and
ran
streets.
fast. Gradually,
However,
when
the
they
houses
returned,
here
the
became
wind was
colorful.
against them. They were
So
blue,
their speed was
pink,
naturally
green,
slower.
red,
Moreover,
yellow.
sometimes
and
they
even
had to
other
avoid
colors.
storms and
There
other
are all
things.
kinds of colors.
After all,
if it was
winter
daytime,
was approaching,
the shops here
and
would be
Antarctica's
open.
summer
in front of
only
almost
lasted
every
for 3
shop.
months.
There would be Boca
Once they
Juniors
entered
cards
March,
or the weather would
postcards of
quickly
football
deteriorate,
stars
such as Messi and
Fortunately,
Maradona.
there were no
some
surprises
football
or
accessories.
dangers along
During
the
the
way.
day,
They
there
would
would
be
be
many
slowed down a bit.
beautifully dressed
5 days later,
dancers
Jiang
standing by the
Hai
side of
and
the
the
street.
others returned
They wore
to
very
the
simple
scientific
clothes.
research station.
These women on the
After
street
taking a
were
bath,
not there to
Jiang Hai
solicit
returned to
customers,
snowmobiles
but to
to
take
the
photos
team
and
sleds.
sleds.
The next
For
morning,
$20,
Jiang Hai
you could touch
and
their
the
thighs
others boarded the ship
and do
to
something
return to
very
Tierra del
cough,
Fuego.
gentlemen.
After
Then,
more than
you
20
could ask
hours
your partner
of
to come
bumpy
over
sailing,
and take photos.
they finally returned
Of course,
to Tierra
there were
del
some
Fuego.
restricted areas
The moment they
and
went
areas
ashore,
that were not allowed
Luis
to be touched.
Quezada
Recently,
and the others
the economic
breathed a sigh of
situation in
relief.
Argentina was
the
really
feeling
bad.
of floating
In
on the sea
2012,
was indeed
$1
$1 was
and most
equivalent
importantly,
to 4. Their
40
mission
Argentine
was completed.
pesos.
They
But
returned
today,
from Tierra del
it was
Fuego
equivalent
to Buenos
to
Aires,
15.
the capital
50
of
Argentine
Argentina.
pesos.
After getting off the
Inflation
plane,
and
Jiang
currency
Hai
devaluation
and the others went to the
caused
hotel
the
that the
economic
CIB
situation
had
in
already
Argentina
prepared
to
As soon as they
deteriorate
entered
day
the
by day.
hotel, a large
Luis
number of
Quezada
people lost
could
their
not
jobs,
help but
and the price
whistle
of goods
happily.
increased.
Although
I'm a little
Argentina
excited.
was not in
finally
dire
don't have to
straits,
stay in that world
it
of
was still
ice
difficult
and
to
snow
live.
anymore.
The gap
Are you
between
happy?
the rich and the poor
Luis
was
Quezada
huge.
said
The average income in
excitedly
Buenos
as he
Aires
looked
was
at Jiang
20,000 Argentine
For him,
pesos.
it was
which was
great that he
equivalent
didn't
to
have
about
to stay in
9,000
Narca.
renminbi per
It's all right.
month.
This
This
trip
was
was
naturally
for naught.
enough for Jiang
Jiang
Hai
Hai
to spend.
shrugged and said indifferently,
In
"What do you
China,
got?"
there
No
were
one
not
knew
many
except
people
for
who
him
could
and
earn
Wallace Shelley.
10,000
Hearing
yuan a month.
Jiang Hai's words,
However,
Luis
the prices
Quezada
here were
also
expensive,
laughed.
and the population was huge. Developing countries
Although I don't know
should
what you
not
want to get in
expect
Narca,
education
to be
and
honest,
medical care
brother,
to be free.
if there is
This was
anything,
not the United States.
it would have been taken
or
away
Europe,
by the scholars
and the
of
pension
the Federation
income
long
was
ago.
not high.
Why would it be
Also,
left for you?
there was
after
no
70
family
years?
planning in Argentina.
After
As the
hearing
territory
Jiang
was
Hai's
not
words,
small,
Luis
every
Quezada
family in
smiled and
Argentina
said,
would
in his
have
opinion,
3
Jiang
to 4
Hai had
children.
gained nothing.
Before these
This was
children
the right
grew up,
path.
the pressure of
Jiang
life
Hai
was
had
very
really
high.
gained something,
But the
it would be
security in
troublesome.
Argentina
Do you want to
had
go
always
and
been
play
good.
again tonight?
One of the reasons
After Luis
was
Quezada saw
because
that
of
Jiang
the
Hai's
habits
mood
of the
wasn't
people
very
here.
good after listening
Argentina
to his
was
words.
different from Brazil.
He wanted to please
After it was
all
occupied
the rich
by
people.
the colonists.
So he leaned over
Life in
and
Argentina
whispered to
had
Jiang
been very
Hai
prosperous.
while raising his
A
eyebrows.
long time ago,
when he said
Argentina
play,
had the
he
habit
naturally
of
meant
hiding
its
its
wealth
wealth
from the people.
Jiang Hai was
100
still
years
very
ago,
clear about what
its
was there.
economic strength
Although the
was one of the
experience
top
that
3
night
countries
made
in the world.
Jiang Hai
The 4
feel
seasons in
very
Argentina
magical.
were like
It does
spring.
not mean
So
that
crops
he's a
like
pervert.
soybeans,
He is not
cows,
prepared to
and
do
sheep
things
grew all
like
year
play
round.
with little girls.
The land
too
was
much.
fertile,
wicked,
and there were
so
rich
after hearing
minerals.
Luis Quezada's
It was a very good
words,
place.
Jiang Hai
After
shook his
Argentina
head gently.
became independent,
Forget it for today.
the Peronist
I want to have a
government
good
was
rest.
willing to hide
And
its
then
wealth
I'll
from
return to
people.
Winthrop
The
tomorrow.
taxes collected
Looking
were
at
very
Luis
low,
Quezada,
and it greatly
Jiang Hai
reduced the
said
conflicts in
indifferently.
society at that
Hearing
time.
that Jiang
More
Hai
money
did not
was
want to
invested
go,
in the public.
Luis Quezada
That was why
did not
Argentines
force
had the
him.
habit of
After
dancing
chatting with
when they
Jiang
were
Hai
bored for a while,
or
playing
he left
football
with his
when
men.
they were bored.
Jiang Hai
It could be
also
said that the
gave
people
Bell
in
and
Argentina
Knursen
were
Peters
rarely
vacation.
irritable. If they want
It
to
was
play,
like Soviet
they can also
Russia,
go where
these
people
two
would
did
start
go
a
to
fight,
fight,
but
if
they
there
did
was a
not go to the
disagreement.
Boca area.
There are not many people
Instead,
like that in
they found a place
Argentina,
nearby,
and it was a very
although the
lazy
legal
city.
place to play
That
according
was why
to the
even though the
government
money
is
had
in the Boca
increased by
area,
4 times,
there are
in just
also
4
many
years,
illegal
there was
goods
not much
and
pressure
secret
from
societies
society.
nearby.
Everyone likes
These
to
people
make
are protected
money
by the
happily.
government.
Similarly,
They don't
like
pay
Brazil,
taxes.
Argentines
Naturally,
had
they earn
2
less,
extremes when
but
it
the
came to
quality is not
relationships
too bad.
between the sexes.
Bell and
One
Connor's
was the
son
traditional
found
type.
2
In
places
some traditional
nearby
towns
to
if
play
he got
for the
married
night.
and went out
As for
to find
Jiang
some
Hai,
professional women,
he hugged his 3
these
sisters
women would not
and
do
slept
business
well
with you.
As for whether
If you
there
found
was
a mistress
any
or something
exercise
like
before
that,
going to sleep,
you would not be able to
no
buy
one knew.
anything in the local
Even the
area.
CIB people
This was a
did not
blatant
know,
disdain
because their listening
However,
devices
in some
could not
untraditional
escape
places,
Azzalina's eyes.
some professions
Boss,
were
that's it.
especially
While
developed.
Jiang Hai
A few days
and the
ago,
others were
there was a
sleeping
very
peacefully
popular news.
in a club in the Boca
father
district.
sold his
The
12-year-old
CIB's
daughter to a
explosives
place with a
expert,
special profession.
Habakkuk Hall.
In the
poured
end,
a glass of
the
whiskey
court
in his
ruled that the
mouth,
sale was
then
valid
looked at
because
Luis
the guardian
Quezada
sold the
and
daughter.
said,
This
"To be
was the
honest,
reality.
This time's
In
mission
Brazil
looked like
and
they had suffered a
Argentina,
lot.
there were quite
and
a
then they
lot
came
of
back
female
with nothing
special
to show
services.
for it.
For
Not
battle
only were there all
maniacs
kinds of
like
women,
them,
they were
but
somewhat
more of them were
unhappy.
underage.
But in front of Jiang
As long as you were
Hai,
willing to spend money,
they didn't dare to show
you could
off.
find women of
But now
any
that
age.
Jiang Hai was not
Secondly,
here,
it did not
transvestites
prevent them
and
from acting.
transsexuals were
This is
quite
the best
popular
result.
here.
Therefore,
Why?
if one
Are
were to
you
play
really going
here,
to fight with
the
those
most
guys?
important thing was
To
to
be
have a good
honest,
eye.
along the way, Jiang Hai and the
It would
others
be
are
awkward
not
if
to be
one found
trifled
out
with.
that the other party
Luis
also had a
Quezada
spear when they were about to
squinted
get
his
on the
eyes
horse with a spear
and took a sip of his whiskey.
Jiang Hai did
Along
not
the
know
way,
if
he
Luis
constantly
Quezada
refreshed his mind
and the
on
others
the
had such
strength
hobbies.
of Jiang
But
Hai.
Jiang Hai
and the
did not
others.
have such hobbies.
And Luis Quezada, who knew that
From humans
Jiang
to
Hai did not
dogs,
have one,
the strength
would
of
definitely
Jiang
not
Hai
bring Jiang
and the
Hai
others
to
was
those
quite
places.
impressive.
As he
If they
introduced
really
the place
fought,
to
the
Jiang
elites
Hai,
may not be
the
a
two
match
cars
for those
drove
guys.
into the bar
From their
in Coffee
equipment,
Street,
strength,
Boca District.
tactics,
After
and
driving
physique,
in, one
those
would
guys
find
were
that
not
this
at a
street was
disadvantage.
somewhat similar to a street
this should be
in
the
Amsterdam,
easiest mission
the
I have
Netherlands.
ever completed.
Women in revealing
Hearing
and
Luis
seductive
Quezada say
clothes
this,
with heavy
the
makeup,
people on the other
stood
side
in 2
did
rows
not
on the
have
side
any
of the
thoughts.
streets. There were all
Just like
kinds of
Luis
women.
Quezada knew,
According to
in the
Luis
United
Quezada,
States,
these women were
never
the lowest
provoke the
grade.
rich.
A quick shot
Now,
would cost $10.
although they did not understand
if they
it
wanted to
very
spend
well,
the night,
they also
would have
knew
to
that
negotiate.
Jiang Hai
But basically,
was a rich man.
it would not cost
Seeing that
more
his
than
subordinates
$50.
were so obedient,
Behind these women,
Luis
there were some shop
Quezada
windows.
also laughed.
Some women were
To be
standing
honest,
or
in his
sitting
heart,
there coquettishly.
he hoped that
They were more
Jiang Hai
beautiful
would do something.
than the people in
If
front of
Jiang
him.
Hai did
These were the
something,
high-end goods.
there would be a flaw.
Basically,
and
one
if there
shot
was a
would
flaw,
cost at least
there would be a
$50.
reason.
Luis
There was a lot of
Quezada
activity
was
on
not
the
a good
street.
person.
There were
If you told an
hundreds of
agent that he was a
dollars
good
and
person,
even thousands of
it would be
dollars.
almost like telling a
As they
joke.
listened to
He
Luis
said that he was hanging
Quezada's
around with
introduction,
Jiang
Bell
Hai,
Lester,
and
did
the
he really
3
not
CIB
have any
members kept
intention
looking
of
outside.
probing Jiang Hai's
The 3
background?
CIB
Stop
members
joking.
were mostly
To be
looking
honest,
at the
this was
people
Jiang Hai.
standing on the side.
If it
of
were
the street.
other rich people,
occasionally
they would not
look at
dare
the
to
people
go
in the
abroad
shop
with them.
windows. It should be
After
known
all,
that these guys
the
were
civil
not
servants
good
in the
people.
United States,
Even if they
did
could not find
have
out
much money.
Jiang Hai's
Even if they
secret,
spent their money
and
here,
if Jiang
they
Hai's
could not
side was
spend
not
too much.
strong enough, Bell was
They
looking
might
at the shop
kidnap him.
windows. Such
What a
things had
joke.
happened before.
Jiang Hai
So,
gave him
thankfully,
more than $1 million
Jiang
a
Hai's
year.
strength was strong
Other than
enough.
giving some money
In a
to his
situation
parents,
where the benefits
he did
were
not
not
have a wife
proportional
or children.
These guys
He
still
had played in
decided to
Winthrop
keep their
and Boston
jobs.
for a few
Jiang
$100.
Hai was not an
Now that he
easy
was
person
here,
to deal with.
how could he treat
But
himself
now it was quite
badly?
good.
After
If
knowing
Jiang
that he was going
Hai
to come
just
here,
returned to the
he
United
had
States
deliberately withdrawn
and lost his curiosity
$5,000 from
then
the
for
ATM
them.
before
The mission would be
he was
considered
going to have a good
completed.
time tonight.
Although they did not
Because
make
the
a lot of
Argentinian
money,
peso
some
had
small
been
money was not
depreciating.
bad.
Dollars
Of course,
were more
they
popular
also
than their
brought
original
back the
money
soil.
here.
If
We're
the soil
here,
was really useful,
just as the four men
then they
were
would be
looking
rich.
around.
Jiang Hai did
Hai
not
and
give
the others
Luis
arrived in
Kazard
front
any
of
more
a rather
opportunities
retro
to get close to
giant
him.
building.
After
These
waking up the
giant
next morning,
European-style
Jiang
buildings were
Hai
also the
and
products
others
of
boarded the
Argentina's
plane that he had
sudden
chartered.
wealth.
They
In any
flew
case,
from Buenos
it looked
Aires to
magnificent.
Boston.
To be honest, flying from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere was quite tiring. At this time, there was no direct flight waiting in Buenos Aires to Boston. Jiang Hai had been said before that he had chartered the plane. So he naturally knew that this was the rule. He naturally had to go through customs or something. This had nothing to do with Jiang Hai and the others. After passing through customs, parking the car, and arriving at the Luis Casado, Eduardo Anderson, and Robert Garcia, he walked directly in with Jiang Hai and the others. They were here to pick up Jiang Hai and the others. Of course, they also had to mention a little about the harvest during this period. So, Galena, Bell, and the others sensibly got into another car, while Jiang Hai and Azalina got into the first F-750. As the engine started, the two behemoths also drove out of the airport. At the same time, Eduardo Anderson and Robert Garcia also introduced the recent situation to Jiang Hai. As time passed, the Antarctic was getting colder and colder. Winter was coming. However, Winthrop was getting warmer and warmer. After entering February, the temperature in Winthrop during the day could reach above zero. Although it was still a little cold, the snow could no longer be frozen during the day. The sun shone on the grassland, and large patches of snow melted into water. However, at night, the temperature would drop to about -5 degrees Celsius. Then, the melted snow would turn into ice cubes. However, Jiang Hai had another advantage, and that was the ocean monsoon. The ocean would never freeze, and the sea breeze would bring warmth into the grassland, waking it up first. According to Robbins Garcia, they had been driving the herds to stay in the meadow for a long time. This was because the herds could crush the ice, and at the same time, the grass in early spring was rich in nutrients. Boss, we're preparing to get some fish seedlings and grass seeds. Looking at Jiang Hai behind, Eduardo Anderson said with a smile. Jiang Hai had given him such a generous salary, so he naturally wanted to repay Jiang Hai. Releasing fish seedlings was the most important thing. Chapter 956. Hi, Mr. Jiang. AI Dawa, you're here. Aniva, nicknamed Iron Bull, shouted loudly at Jiang Hai from afar. Hearing his voice, Jiang Hai also turned the steering wheel and drove in the direction of his shout. Not long after, the car stopped about 5 or 6 meters in front of him. Then Jiang Hai and Eduardo Anderson got out together. As soon as they got out, Aniva greeted them with a big smile. Jiang Hai had been back for 3 days. In these 3 days, Jiang Hai first comforted his women at home, especially Chi Jia and Chia, who had returned. These two girls were taught a lesson by Chi Li at home, so they were also full of anger. Now that they saw Jiang Hai, they couldn't help but feel angry. In the past few days, they had been teaching Jiang Hai a lesson. Of course, their so-called teaching was teaching Jiang Hai a lesson in bed. They were determined to get pregnant before Chi Li. Unfortunately, there was no movement at the moment. These days, Jiang Hai was occupied by them at night. During the day, he was not idle. After being busy for 3 days, he was finally able to go out of the house. After all, his women sometimes did have some small tricks up their sleeves, but when it came to making a living in the manor, they still understood the importance of it. Buying fish seedlings could be said to be a big deal, so they had to temporarily put aside the matter of dealing with Jiang Hai. So today, Jiang Hai came to the port of Boston with Eduardo Anderson. As for Azalina, who was supposed to follow, Jiang Hai did not let her follow. He wanted to live a life without women. It was really too tiring. With Jiang Hai's own strength and confidence in Boston, Azalina did not force Jiang Hai to take them with him. They were happy to stay at home. Jiang Hai and Eduardo Anderson drove away. After arriving at the dock, Aniva, who had already greeted them, appeared immediately. It was obvious that he had been waiting for a long time. Speaking of which, Aniva was different from before. When Jiang Hai first bought his fish seedlings a few years ago, this guy could only be regarded as a lower-middle businessman here. After all, there were many people who had bigger territories and more varieties than him. In addition, he was a black man. Although there were many good black people in the United States, white people and even yellow people did not trust black people that much. If it were not for Eduardo Anderson's recommendation, Jiang Hai might not have come to him to buy fish seedlings. Most importantly, Americans did not like to raise fish seedlings. They preferred to go to the deep sea to catch fish, so the fish seedlings did not sell well. But as the saying goes, a scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes. Not to mention, Jiang Hai had not seen him for nearly 2 years. Ever since he sold the fish seedlings to Jiang Hai, his business was still like this in the first year, half dead. But everything changed in the second year. When Jiang Hai's seafood went on the market, everyone felt the benefits of Jiang Hai's seafood. So many people were inquiring about where Jiang Hai's fish came from, because they knew that Jiang Hai also bought his fish seedlings. After asking around, they finally heard about Aniva. His side became popular because the quality of the fish he sold was good and the price was not expensive. Most importantly, it was possible to raise Jiang Hai's fish. Therefore, everyone was moved by his offer. Over the past year, Aniva's fish seedlings business had grown bigger and bigger. He had also borrowed money from the bank and expanded his original fish seedlings business by 5 times, but the supply still could not meet the demand. A large number of people came to buy them. Although the fish he raised might not be as good as Jiang Hai's fish, his business was still very good. The quality was there, so even if he could not raise Jiang Hai's fish, there were still people willing to do business with him. Now, in the past year, he had jumped to the top 10 among Boston's fish seedlings merchants in one fell swoop, and he had the intention of catching up. It was not a good thing. However, as the saying goes, one should not forget the person who dug the well when drinking water. Although business was business in the eyes of Americans, he was still very grateful to Jiang Hai. After receiving a call from Edward Anderson to pick seedlings, Jiang Hai's fish were all personally selected by him. Of course, he did not raise them himself, but he ran around the country and finally selected the best quality and largest seedlings. Today, Jiang Hai came to see the seedlings, sign a contract with him, and choose the seedlings to buy. Hey, Iron Bull, I heard that your business here is getting bigger and bigger. Looking at Aniva, Jiang Hai smiled and said. Jiang Hai didn't mind the stench on Aniva's body and hugged him. Aniva was also very happy about this. One must know that black people with good temperament were also a bit strange. When he made friends, he basically only made friends with people of the same level. This was because friends had to tolerate everything about them, such as their skin color, their dress, their hobbies, and even the smell on their body. Jiang Hai did not care about the fishy smell on him and hugged him, which made him very grateful. He also sincerely regarded Jiang Hai as a friend. The smile on his face became wider and wider, and his 2 rows of big white teeth were also exposed. Hey, Jiang, my friend, this is all thanks to you. Come in, let's talk in the fish shed. After saying the same thing to Jiang Hai, he smiled and led Jiang Hai into the fish shed in the distance. As soon as Jiang Hai walked in, he found that this fish shed was actually built in the sea. It was the same as the last time he came here, but the scale was much bigger. I have 10 fish sheds like this one, but the best seedlings you want are all here. Seeing the curiosity in Jiang Hai's eyes, Aniva smiled and said. Then he led Jiang Hai and Edward Anderson to a huge net cage. He started the machine next to him and slowly lifted the net cage up. Then some small fry were pulled up by the net cage and floated to the surface. Aniva then scooped up a handful of fry and showed them to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai nodded and said, I'm sorry. At the end of November last year, Brother Edward told me the types of fry you want this year. I specially found these. Take a look, Aniva said as he handed the fry to Jiang Hai and Edward Anderson. After a successful breeding, Edward Anderson also had confidence in this water area. No matter how this mysterious water area was formed, it had nothing to do with him. He only knew that this water area could make a lot of money, and he would honestly work for Jiang Hai in the following days. This was the most important thing. So in November last year, Edward Anderson, whose confidence had doubled, asked Aniva to get some good seedlings. If Jiang Hai wanted to buy them, he would also buy this kind of high-grade fish. In fact, it was reasonable to say that the American redfish was a good fish, but Jiang Hai was no longer interested in it. He wanted better fish. Now in the hands of Jiang Hai and Edward Anderson, there was a better fish, white pomfret. Some people would say that basically everyone had eaten pomfret before. It was not expensive in China, so how could it be expensive in the United States? In fact, those who would say this basically knew nothing about pomfret. Pomfret, also known as mirror fish, could be divided into many types. The worst was the silver pomfret, followed by the golden pomfret, red pomfret, freshwater white pomfret, knife pomfret, black pomfret, gray pomfret, spiny pomfret, spotted pomfret, snowflake pomfret, South American pomfret, striped pomfret, and so on. There are different types of pomfret, and the price difference was quite big. Among them, the more common golden pomfret was very low in price. It was considered a low-level seafood, but white pomfret was different. White pomfret was divided into two types, freshwater white pomfret and white pomfret. This kind of fish was mainly distributed in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. It was not found in the Atlantic Ocean. In China, it was very common for this kind of fish to be sold for more than 100 renminbi per catty. However, since Jiang Hai was raising them here, it was naturally impossible to sell them at such a low price. He sold them by the kilogram. The initial price of 1 kilogram was $50, which was $10 more expensive than the red pomfret in the United States. Most importantly, this kind of fish also grew quickly. Looking at the fry in front of him, Edward Anderson casually picked one out, opened its belly, smelled it, and ate a small piece of meat to determine whether these fish had been drugged or were sick. After the inspection, he nodded gently, indicating that there was nothing wrong with these fish. Seeing that Edward Anderson had approved, Jiang Hai did not say much. He threw the small fish back into the net cage and nodded to Aniva. Seeing that Jiang Hai approved this quality, Aniva was also relieved. The first type of fish was ordered. Then he continued to lead Jiang Hai and the others to the back. The second net cage was the tuna he specially picked, the so-called bonito. However, their bonito was different from the general Pacific bonito, the so-called small tuna that could not grow up. This kind of bonito could be regarded as a giant bonito. Jiang Hai only took the elite route. If it was an ordinary small tuna, he would be too lazy to raise them. According to the price announced by the International Fishery Association, bonito, which could only grow to a maximum of 40 to 50 centimeters, was currently sold internationally for $1,600 per ton, which was equivalent to $6 per kilogram. Naturally, Jiang Hai would not raise this kind of fish. Therefore, he only raised big tuna, which was not considered bonito. Its scientific name was albacore tuna, which could grow to a maximum of about 1.5 meters. It was considered small in the tuna family, but the price of this thing was very high. In China, good quality fish can be sold for about 200 renminbi per catty, which is 400 renminbi per catty. Converted to US dollars, it's about $60. Jiang Hai's fish is estimated to be sold at a wholesale price of $100 per catty, which is very reasonable. Chapter 9:57. After looking at the two kinds of fry, Jiang Hai nodded. Overall, he was very satisfied with these two things. That's it. Let's talk about the price of these two kinds of fish. Jiang Hai looked at Antoine and said with a smile, he is going to use these two kinds of fish to replace the American redfish. The remaining grouper, longhead, and Atlantic salmon will still be farmed, and he will also increase the number of lobsters, spotted shrimp, and king crab. At the same time, Jiang Hai is also going to sell some geoduck clams. He wants to raise anything that makes money. This is not urgent. Because the long-fin golden gun can't be bred normally, there is no way to guarantee the quantity, but I also got some fry here. Mr. Jiang, you may be interested. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Antoine also smiled and said to him, he is telling the truth. White pomfret and American redfish are worthless, and it is easy to breed them. But tuna, which have been swimming all their lives, will not stop because their gills have degenerated. So breeding this kind of fish is possible, but it is really difficult, so there's no way to guarantee the quantity. For example, there are 100,000 fry in the white pomfret's net cage. These fry are still very happy, but there are only 2,000 on the long-finned golden gun side, and more than a dozen have died in the past few days because the range of activity of these fish is too large. In order to make up for this defect, he specially got some more expensive fish species to show to Jiang Hai. "Oh, let's take a look." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows and then walked over and said. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Antoine also took him to the front of several net cages at the back. Still using electric equipment, he pulled up the underwater net cage, and then a small fry appeared in front of Jiang Hai. "This is..." Looking at this kind of unfamiliar fry, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. "This is silver codfish." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Antoine didn't speak yet, but Edward Anderson spoke first. "Silver cod? Is this a codfish?" Jiang Hai asked doubtfully as he looked at the long little things in front of him. Although this thing is called a silver codfish, it's not a codfish but a scorpion fish. This fish is a species of the Pacific Ocean and the Arctic Ocean. It's mainly supplied to Soviet Russia and Japan. I heard that this thing is selling well in Mr. Zhang's home country recently. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Antoine said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked at these fishes, then a thought flashed in his mind. He seemed to have seen this thing in Japanese cartoons before. So he immediately took out his mobile phone and sent a WeChat message to Chi Li, asking her if she knew this kind of fish. Soon Chi Li sent him a message. She does know this kind of fish. This kind of fish is a precious species in China. Codfish is codfish. Silver codfish is silver codfish. Although there is a difference of one word, the difference is not small. If this kind of fish is retailed, the price is more than 110 renminbi. The wholesale price is more than 80 to 90 renminbi per caddy, which is about $35 per caddy. Hearing this figure, Jiang Hai nodded. It's indeed not cheap. He can also sell this fish for $60 per caddy, because other places catch this kind of fish, but he can raise this kind of fish. Can this be supplied in sufficient quantity? Pointing to the silver codfish, Jiang Hai said to Antoine. Of course, this is not a problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Antoine patted his chest and said, This kind of fish has been raised in Asia, but this kind of fish lives about 2,000 meters under the sea, so there is no way to use net cages to raise it. That is to say, it is possible to raise it, but it is impossible to raise it in batches. So even if this kind of fish is raised, it is sold as wild. But he has already contacted a plant, so there will be no problem in quantity. As for the quality, there will be no problem. There's also this kind of fish, humpback bass. I heard that this kind of fish is also very popular in Huaxia. Seeing that Jiang Hai is very satisfied with this kind of fish, Antoine also smiled, and then picked up another net cage, in which there is a kind of small white fish with black spots. Looking at this fish, Jiang Hai became interested because he knows this fish, its scientific name is humpback bass, and its nickname is mouse spot. Yes, in Hong Kong movies, there are many seafood restaurants and the like, and the best thing is this fish. So he immediately took a photo and asked Chi Li. Edward Anderson knows a lot, but he is also a little confused about how much these precious seafood can be sold for. After all, he has not been exposed to these before. The most popular fish in the West is codfish. It is nutritious and the price is fair. In fact, the luxury fish market is basically brought from Asia. Westerners don't eat much fish. Look at many Western restaurants. They only have codfish as a fish meal. It is just divided into ordinary codfish, haddock, Pacific codfish, and so on. If you go to some Chinese restaurants, you will find out the price of fish, including tuna. This kind of thing used to be eaten in the Atlantic Ocean. These are all things that show one's bravery, such as going out to sea alone and catching a tuna, or something to prove oneself as a successful fisherman. In modern times, this kind of fish became popular in Japan, which was the world's second largest economy. Even now, the biggest market for this kind of fish is still Japan's sushi restaurants. Not long after, Chi Li sent another message. Humpback bass, also known as mouse spot, is also very popular. In some domestic hotels, the selling price is 980 yuan per caddy. Of course, this is only the selling price in domestic hotels, and the price has dropped in recent years. Just now, Chi asked her purchasing department, and the price of mouse spot is 260 yuan per caddy, which is equivalent to 520 yuan per caddy. Hearing Chi Li's price, Jiang Hai calculated in his heart. He has always been a profiteer. Although the price is close to $100 per caddy, Jiang Hai calculated that the price will be $140 per caddy with an increase of 40%. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai's eyes lit up. Purely based on the unit price, this kind of fish is probably the most valuable in his fishery at present. Seeing that Jiang Hai is very satisfied with this kind of fish, Antoine pulled up the fishing net next to him. This is haddock. There is no need to introduce it. We are very familiar with it. Looking at the new net cage, it is not difficult for Jiang Hai to see what kind of fish is in the net cage. Haddock is the noblest among cod, but even if this kind of fish is sold, it will not be sold at a very high price, because there is no live fish for this kind of fish. Once it is on the boat, its head will be cut off. In the United States, the retail price is about $10 per pound. Of course, this refers to fresh fish, not frozen fish. Even if Jiang Hai sells it as fresh, it will probably be the same as the red fish in the United States, which is $40 per caddy. Therefore, even if Jiang Hai wants to raise this kind of fish, he does not plan to raise a lot. No. I naturally know that this kind of fish is not good enough for you. So, I'm not going to introduce this kind of fish to Mr. Jiang. I want to introduce this kind of fish. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Antoine immediately shook his head and pointed to a small net cage next to the haddock. It is a very small net cage. Looking at the fish in the net cage, Jiang Hai can't help but be a little surprised. This kind of fish had a slender body. Although it was only a seedling, it could be seen that once this fish grew up, it would belong to the slender type. The color of this fish was a bit too bright. It was actually red with a slight pinkish color. This is the eastern star spot. Looking at this kind of fish, Jiang Hai can't help but secretly click his tongue. He knows this kind of fish. To be exact, he has eaten it before. He has eaten this kind of fish once when he was on a mission in the capital. To be honest, the taste of this fish is average. It is not particularly good, but it is definitely not bad. However, in Jiang Hai's opinion, the taste of this fish is a little worse than his longju. Especially after knowing that this kind of fish is called the Eastern Star Spot, Jiang Hai muttered in his heart, Eastern Star Spot? Is there a Hong Star Spot? This name is probably given by the people in Hong Kong. But even so, no one can raise the price of this thing. Jiang Hai once quietly asked. This kind of fish is pure and wild, produced in the Dongsha archipelago of Huaxia. It is more than 800 yuan per caddy. The second-class magenta fish with black in it is called Aodong. It is more than 700 yuan per caddy. The third-class magenta fish is slightly pink. Even if it is artificially farmed, it is also about 600 yuan per caddy. Now, the fry in front of Jiang Hai are naturally artificially farmed, but Jiang Hai is confident that he can raise it into the wild. In that case, the price of this kind of fish is 800 yuan per caddy. 1 kilogram is 1,600 yuan, which is more than 200 yuan per US dollar, close to 300 yuan per US dollar. Then I will sell it for 300 yuan. 300 yuan per caddy fish. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai can't help but take a deep breath. 300 yuan per caddy. Under Jiang Hai's cultivation, this fish can grow to 1 kilogram in a year. If he buys 1 million fish, it will be 1 million kilograms. That is to say, it is worth 300 million yuan? What if it is 10 million? 3 billion yuan? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai's eyebrows unconsciously twitched. It seems that maybe he suddenly lost interest in the bluefin tuna. Bluefin tuna, this thing, it takes a few years to grow to a particularly large size. If I have this time to raise the Eastern Star Spot, maybe I can earn more than raising bluefin tuna. What's more, he has no place to buy bluefin fry. He can only rely on the bluefin tunas in his own fish farm to slowly reproduce. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed. He had to make a good calculation. Originally, he was only going to buy some white pomfret and golden longfin spears. But now, he was a little shaken. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.